For the past 2 years, I've spent thousands of hours mastering artificial intelligence and AI agents, diving deep into everything from the big name tools everyone talks about to the hidden gems most people overlook. That journey led me to build a successful AI automation agency where we've generated hundreds of thousands of dollars by creating and selling AI agents for businesses. From all of this experience, I've learned the practical AI skills that not even a university degree could teach you. And today, I plan to give it all away for free. The frameworks, the tools, and the step-by-step blueprints you need to become an AI expert, even if you don't know how to code. And if you keep up with the trends, you can reap huge benefits for your career or business. But if you fall behind, you will likely find yourself being replaced, redundant, or outdone by your competitors. So that's exactly why I've put together this course, to give you everything you need to know to understand AI agents and how to build them yourself. So whether you're working a 9 to 5, studying, or growing your business like I am, this course will help you work smarter, study faster, and automate your business. And it really doesn't matter if you're a complete beginner or an intermediate user. Today, I'll transform you into an expert. Hopefully by the end of this video, you're going to be able to build custom AI agents that work across dozens of tools and different platforms. If you're new to the channel, I'm Brendan Jowett. I'm based in Melbourne, Australia, and I've been running an AI automation agency, Inflate AI. In just under 2 years, I've built and launched hundreds of AI automations for clients worldwide. So let's dive into what we're covering. This video is by far my biggest project to date. To give you an understanding of how long this took, just filming alone has been a 3-month process. I refilmed several segments multiple times and rewrote large portions to keep everything current and genuinely helpful. I've gone through many months of research because I want this to be the best course on AI agents on the market. As you can probably tell by the length of this video, I'm not holding anything back. I'm laying it all out, everything I've learned over the past 2 years with no filters, no fluff. And no worries if you're starting from completely scratch. I'll walk you through everything step by step, and there's absolutely no recoding required. To make this even easier to follow, I'm breaking the video into 2 parts. In part 1, we'll cover the foundations of AI and AI agents. So that's what they are, the key terms you need to know, and how they differ from traditional automation. In part 2, I'll guide you through hands-on live builds using the same tools and software we rely on in our agency. I'll cover everything from simple chatbot platforms to advanced AI voice agents and powerful automations. We're going to cover realistic use cases to make sure you understand how AI agents can be applied to whatever situation you encounter. Even if you don't have a technical background, these are no-code tools and are really easy to pick up and use immediately. So go ahead and get a pen and paper to take some notes, grab yourself a cup of coffee, and let's get started. So what even is an AI agent? Let me explain this in the most simple way I can. Everyone knows ChatGPT, right? It's a chatbot. You can ask questions, send it a couple of files, and that's it. Aside from answering questions and generating images, it doesn't really do anything for you. And don't you wish that sometimes the AI could actually get things done for you? For example, sending emails, making phone calls, filling in forms, all that stuff. Well, that's exactly where the AI agent comes in and what it's trying to handle. An AI agent is basically like taking an AI chatbot, like ChatGPT, and connecting it with what we call tools. And don't worry, I'll explain what tools are later in the video, but for now, just think of them as applications the agent has access to. This means that the agent can not only answer questions, but can get real work done. It's really like a robot employee that lives in your computer. Pretty handy. Now let's jump into 2 different types of AI agents. There are really 2 ways to interact with an agent. One is conversational, so very similar to how we interact with ChatGPT. And the other is autonomously, where something triggers the agent to respond, like an email, a message, a contact form, etc. So first, let's start with an example of a conversational agent. This is John, and John has been asked by his manager, Emily, to put together a report on the company's social media performance. Now, John's a busy man, and he doesn't have time to put one together, so he asks his virtual assistant for help.
Hey, can you quickly generate a report on our social media growth over the past 3 weeks and email that to Emily?
No worries, I'll generate the report and have it sent to Emily now.
The agent then connects to John's company's social media platforms to collect the last 3 weeks worth of data on their follow accounts, likes, comments, and so on. And then using this data, it thinks about how to best present it. It then gets to work building out an easy to read report to present this data. It knows he wanted to send the report to Emily, so it searches his contacts for Emily and emails her the file.
Just received the report, John. That's super quick.
Okay, so that's a conversational agent. Now let's talk about the other type of agent, an autonomous agent. Let's say that John gets hundreds of emails a day and needs a hand with replying to them. This is where the autonomous agent comes in. The agent can sort the emails by importance, write draft replies, and even set follow-up reminders. John can receive a summarized report of everything that came in today and anything important that needed to be reviewed. That's a task that would have taken him all morning, done before he even finishes his coffee. Okay. Now that you understand where we use these agents, I want to explain the difference between old-fashioned chatbots and modern AI agents. And don't worry, I promise to keep this really simple. Do you remember when Siri first came out on the iPhone? You could ask it to, for example, call Jerry, and it would open the phone app and call Jerry. So in a sense, it could be considered an AI agent because it listens to instructions and carries out some tasks. However, compared to the AI of today, the logic behind Siri was fairly basic. If the user said anything that could be interpreted as call Jerry, it was going to perform the action of calling Jerry. The programmers would have had to write out the code for every possible action the user could want to take, whether that's calling Jerry, messaging Jerry, FaceTiming Jerry, and so on. Because of this, the actions were very simple. You couldn't ask Siri to perform anything with too many steps. We call this conditional logic, meaning if a certain condition is true, the AI should perform an action. It's the same logic we used to see in those early chat bubbles in the corner of websites. Most of them never really understood requests. They were just looking for keywords and following a set of pre-programmed actions. And that's why they seem to never really be able to do what you ask them to. Nowadays, technology has come a long way. AI doesn't just look for keywords in our instructions, but it uses very intelligent algorithms to guess what we actually mean. These modern agents have a smart enough brain to actually plan out what tools to use and in what order. They pick the tools themselves and perform whatever actions are necessary to get that task done. So, for example, you can give an AI agent a complicated prompt like put together a slide deck with the latest revenue, burn rate, user growth, and project statuses, and email a draft to the board at 5 p.m. And the crazy thing is that it can handle that without a problem. It will figure out exactly what you mean, plan out exactly how to carry out this request, and perform every action in order from finding that information, writing the email, finding all the recipients, and sending the email. We call this advanced logic generative AI because it can learn patterns and generate completely new outputs. Now that you know what an AI agent is, how it stands apart from traditional chatbots, let's break down its 4 essential building blocks. First, we have the AI model, which is the brain of the AI agent. Second, we have instructions. These set the agent's purpose and guides how it behaves. Third, we have knowledge. This is the information it uses to understand context and make decisions. And lastly, we have tools. These are the capabilities it uses to take action, like pulling in data from the web or performing tasks. So for number 1, we have the large language models. You've probably heard of AI models like GPT-4 or Claude, but what actually is an AI model and why are there so many of them? At its core, an AI model is like a digital brain. It's trained on massive data sets, millions and billions of examples, so it can learn patterns, generate responses, or solve problems. These models are created by big players like OpenAI, Google, and Microsoft, who pour huge resources into training them in high-powered data centers. But not every model is built the same. Some are optimized for speed, others for intelligence. Take GPT-4. It's designed for deep reasoning and complex problem solving, whereas GPT 4.1 Mini is built for speed. Gives you answers faster, but isn't quite as smart. Now, this trade-off matters a lot when you're building AI agents. If you're building a conversational AI, something like a chatbot, you'd want it to respond instantly. In that case, you'd want to go with a faster, more efficient model. But if your agent is handling complex decisions in the background, where accuracy matters more than speed, you're better off choosing a slower, more powerful, more expensive model. The best AI agents aren't built with the best model, they're built with the right model for that task. For number 2, we have prompting. An agent's instruction set, commonly referred to as a prompt, is created through a process called prompt engineering. Prompt engineering is the practice of designing clear, specific inputs to guide AI models toward better, more accurate outputs. At its core, it's about communicating effectively with the model, whether by providing detailed instructions, using structured formats, or giving examples to steer its response and output. A really vague prompt might be something like write about productivity, which leaves the AI really guessing about the format of the response, the audience, and the focus. Whereas a better, more engineered prompt would be write a 150-word blog introduction targeted at remote professionals, explaining how time blocking can help structure their day and reduce distractions. Begin with a relatable scenario about struggling to stay focused, then introduce time blocking as a solution. Use a friendly, professional tone suitable for a business audience. This version provides clear context, structure, tone, and audience, making it far more likely that the AI is going to deliver a useful and relevant response. Now, this is just a basic example. There's a lot more to prompt engineering. At more advanced levels, you can shape the AI's response more accurately by using specific formats, templates, or even special text styles such as Markdown. If you are interested in a dedicated video diving into prompt engineering specifically for AI agents, let me know in the comments below. For number 3, we have knowledge. Think of it like hiring a new team member. They might be smart and capable, but if you don't give them the right training materials or background on your business, they're not going to perform well. Large language models like ChatGPT work the exact same way. They generate responses based on the data they were trained on. So if you ask about recent events or company-specific details, they're going to come up short unless they've been updated. Tools like web browsing can help fill in those gaps, which I'll talk about next, but the core knowledge, like onboarding for a new hire, does need to come from you. A common question that I get from our clients is if we can train the AI on our information to act a certain way based on the information we are uploading. Now, this is partially true and partially not true. There's a really big difference between training an AI and simply providing it information. Training means uploading massive amounts of data so the AI can relearn, either building a new model or fine-tuning an existing one. It's expensive, unpredictable, and really highly dependent on that task. On the other hand, uploading knowledge-based information isn't the same as training an AI, but simply giving it access to some information. So if a relevant question comes up, you can retrieve the answer. This setup is called a RAG system. That's short for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And you can think of it like keeping some textbooks on a shelf. If somebody comes up to you and asks you a question, you're not going to recite every page from that book from memory. You're just going to grab the right book, find the right answer, and then just respond based on that. When you're building your own AI agent, that context that you give it is going to be everything. You've really got to feed it the right info about your business, whether that's your website, brochures, PDFs, anything that helps it really get what you do and how you work. And here's the thing, the quality of that information really matters. If the documents are messy, unclear, the answers you get back will be too. So think of it like training a new team member. Once again, you have to make it as clear and easy to follow as possible. Lastly, number 4, we have tools. Tools are what truly empower AI agents, and they're what put the agent in AI agent. You can think of a tool as any external application an agent can access and use, whether it's a CRM like HubSpot, a calendar like Google Calendar, or a messaging app like WhatsApp. Just like employees rely on software to do their jobs, agents rely on tools to take action in the real world. Not just reason or respond, but actually doing things. Now, these tools are typically accessed via APIs, enabling agents to interact with software systems directly. Some may also rely on browser-based automation or native integrations, depending on the setup. The tools you give an agent define its capabilities. If we integrate Stripe, it's going to handle payments. If we integrate Slack, it's going to communicate with the team. More advanced agents can even chain tools together, using one to fetch data, another to process it, and a third to deliver the result, like pulling CRM data, generating a summary in Google Docs, and emailing it via Gmail. One of the most common tools we've built for clients is an appointment booking system. It allows agents to access a calendar and take direct actions like booking, rescheduling, or canceling appointments in real time. Now, let's dive into how we can actually start to communicate with our tools. If you're serious about learning AI agents, having a solid grasp of how APIs work is essential. Earlier, I mentioned APIs as a way to connect with tools. An API, or application programming interface, is just a set of rules that allows different software systems to talk to each other. It really acts like a bridge, letting one application request or send data to another. Nearly every app you use has an API that gives you access to many of its features. You can explore how to connect with these tools by digging into usually the developer documentation that most software platforms provide. To actually use an API, you need to send something called a request to a specific URL, which is known as an endpoint. That request is usually made up of a few key parts. First, there's the method, which tells the API what you want to do, like get, if if you're trying to retrieve data, or post if you're sending something. Then there are headers, which include important information like the type of data you're sending or your credentials. If you're sending data like creating something or submitting a form, you'll also include a body, usually in a format called JSON. Most APIs require some form of authentication so they know who's making the request. The most common method, especially for beginners, is using an API key. You can think of it like a password that you attach to that request that just says, hey, we're allowed to access this. Some APIs will also ask you to include the keys in the headers, and others might let you pass it in the URL. Now, you'll get a much better understanding of this when you actually build the connections yourself. Once again, don't worry if you're not technical. We're going to do all of this using essentially no code. You may have even heard of platforms like Make.com or Zapier, which are automation platforms that enable these connections to be really easy to do. Next, I want to explore the Model Context Protocol. Very briefly, the Model Context Protocol was created by Anthropic, the team behind the Claude AI models. It allows us to connect our AI agents and large language models more easily to access API information. So, as I just walked through, we need to set up a few technical things to connect our agent to tools to access information. This process needs to be repeated for each endpoint and API that we want our agent to access. The Model Context Protocol allows us to talk to one API for that tool that is far smarter and knows exactly which endpoint we need to access. So instead of manually telling the agent where to book the appointment, cancel it, or reschedule it, we can tell it to access our calendar tool and it can do whatever it needs to do with it. Now, during the practical tutorial of this video, I'm going to do a complete walkthrough of a Zapier MCP server. This will enable us to create an MCP that connects to any of the 7,000 applications that Zapier can access. Now, let's dive into how AI agents are being applied in the real world. These are solutions we've built for clients inside our agency and systems we rely on daily in our own workflows. I'm going to put each of these use cases into 4 different categories: growth, support, productivity, and research. First up, we have growth agents. These are designed to handle lead generation, sales, and marketing tasks. For example, we recently partnered with a luxury travel company that sells complete travel experiences for around $2,500 per person. They were running Facebook and Instagram ads that generated a high volume of inbound leads. With a small team, they couldn't follow up on every inquiry. We built an AI phone agent that automatically called each lead after they submitted the form. And in just the past month, the agent booked 160 calls, unlocking around about $400,000 in potential revenue from leads they weren't quickly reaching before. Next, we have support agents built to manage tasks like customer service, client onboarding, answering FAQs, and more. Right now, this is one of the most widely adopted uses of AI agents, helping businesses improve response times at scale. And obviously, don't just take my word for it. A study conducted by researchers from Stanford and MIT found that the use of generative AI in a Fortune 500 company's customer service department resulted in a 14% increase in the number of customer service chats that were successfully handled per hour by agents. Verizon boosted sales by nearly 40% after equipping its 28,000 person service team with AI tools that helped them find information faster and then deliver better support. These examples show 2 powerful ways to integrate AI, either by equipping your current team with tools that boost productivity, like Verizon did, or by introducing entirely new roles that take on tasks your team didn't have the bandwidth to handle, like we did for our client. Next up, we have productivity agents. These handle smaller but highly effective tasks like emails, writing, and planning. For nearly a year, I've been using an email AI agent called Shortwave. This isn't a sponsored mention. I just genuinely think they've nailed their execution when it comes to email automation. Shortwave works by analyzing years of my email history to learn how I write and what I usually write about. So when new emails come in, it can predict my responsive with impressive accuracy, and it matches both tone and content. It also comes with a built-in chat system that lets you search for specific email threads or topics. One of my go-to productivity agents is for writing, and I use it every single day. As a creator, scripting videos is a big part of what I do, including this one. So naturally, I turn to AI to streamline that process, obviously, and level up the quality. For every video, I rely on a script writing GPT, which we're going to learn how to build later in the video, developed by one of Ali Abdul's former scriptwriters. It takes my raw ideas and rewrites them using proven formulas for attention-grabbing intros, compelling hooks, making the script far more engaging. Next, we've got research agents. These operate autonomously, handling tasks like gathering information, analyzing data, and generating detailed reports. reports. We use this every single day with lead qualification. We receive a high volume of inbound bookings, so ensuring each lead is qualified for our services is pretty essential. Our agents are equipped to research LinkedIn profiles, run Google searches, and gather key company data such as revenue, employee count, and more. Let's now jump into a recap of the core concepts. You now know that AI agents aren't just hype, they're autonomous digital assistants built from 4 key components. AI models that act as our brain, prompts that define behavior, knowledge that gives context, and tools that allow real-world actions. We broke down the critical difference between chatbots and agents, where chatbots follow predefined rules, while agents are capable of chaining actions across multiple systems. We also touched on advanced concepts like API integration and the model context protocol. Real-world examples showed how AI agents are already transforming industries, from sales agents booking 400 grand a month in potential revenue, to customer support agents reducing workload and response times, to productivity tools that draft emails, plan content, and research leads automatically. So before we dive into what we're building in this video, if you are a business owner looking to integrate AI voice, chat, or automation agents into your operations, you can reach out to us using the link in the description. We've helped businesses across a range of industries save pretty significant time and money with AI. And if you're ready to get ahead of the competition, we're here to support you. I put a lot of time into creating these videos, so your support means a lot. And if you want to stay updated on the latest in AI and AI agents, make sure to subscribe. I'll keep sharing valuable content just like this to make it worth it for you. Now that you understand what AI agents are, how they're built, and the results they can deliver, it's time to get practical. In the next section, I'm going to walk you through step-by-step tutorials where we're actually going to build and deploy AI agents using no-code tools, starting with foundational builds and moving towards more advanced systems. So once again, whether you're a total beginner or already experimenting with agents, this next part is where the real magic happens. First, I'll build a low-code wrapper agent called a GPT. These are specialized assistants with custom instructions and capabilities that can help with content creation, brainstorming, and more. Then we'll move into Voiceflow, where we're going to build more advanced chat-based agents. This can be used for email support, website chat support, e-commerce recommendations, AI travel agents, etc. After that, we'll step it up with Vapi. This is a platform for building AI voice agents that can talk to people over the phone. You'll see how they can be used for sales follow-ups, appointment reminders, and more. After this, we'll start looking at automation agents. I'll show you how to connect your agents to workflows using N8N. This lets your agents trigger multiple step actions like gathering info, processing it, and sending updates. I'll also compare this to make.com and share when it's best to use other platforms. And then lastly, I'm going to jump into Zapier and build out an MCP server that will make it super easy to connect to thousands of apps without having to build any of the complex workflows. So by the end of each practical tutorial, you'll not only have the hands-on skills to start building your own AI agents, but also the language and confidence to communicate your understanding of AI and how these agents work. Before we start, I want to give my free AI school community a quick shout out. We've got over 10,000 AI enthusiasts who are happy to answer your questions and network with you. Inside, you'll find 40 plus AI agent templates, several masterclass courses, plus all the builds we're going to be creating in this video. So if you are really serious about learning AI agents, the community is an awesome place to plug in, get support, and start building. Let's jump into the first part of the practical tutorial for this video, which is going to be going through GPTs. So as you can see on my screen now, GPTs are custom versions of ChatGPT. So this is a really good starting point for understanding AI and AI agents. It's really understanding GPTs. And the way that OpenAI has sort of introduced and allowed people to access and create GPTs is through their own sort of web interface, their sort of store of GPTs. You can think of it, it's kind of like an app store for AI systems. And if I scroll down on this page here, this is on chatgpt.com. So you can access this the exact same way that you access ChatGPT. And you can just click into the GPT section and you'll get this page right here. And if I just start to scroll down, you'll see all of the different types of GPTs that have been created by popular platforms, popular softwares like Canva, Wolfram. They've created these specific GPTs for their products and their services. And these are systems, for the most part, these are GPTs that you can use mostly internally. So these are systems that are going to be helping with productivity, for writing, research, all of that stuff. This is where they really shine. And so you can see that obviously in their top categories up here. I'm just looking at the top picks at the moment, but we can obviously click down into the writing section and have a look at a lot of the tools that are best suited for writing. Productivity, they've got some more here as well. So for example, audio transcription expert, video AI, photorealistic generator, presentation creator, and it saves it as PowerPoints and Google Slides. That could be interesting to have a look through. Research and analysis, there's more tools down here for that. Education, lifestyle, DALL-E, which is their image generation model, and programming as well. So if you're a programmer, bunch of GPTs for different code languages, different types of coding, all stored within these different GPTs. And this is just what we're looking at on the front page. We can obviously search for this as well. So it literally is just like an app store built specifically for different types of configured AIs. So let's say we want to go ahead and create a presentation. So I can go down to the productivity section, click on the presentation GPT. We can see that's been created by slidedexai.com. So this is obviously also a way for them to sort of advertise their product by putting it through as a GPT. It's got quite good ratings. We can go ahead and click start chat, make a presentation about the future of AI. Sure, would like to see that. We can pretty much just click create and it's going to go ahead and create that for us. So this is just asking us what we'd like to see in it. I'll just say yes, looks good. I'm just going to say yes to that. Not sure what's actually included in there. It's going to go ahead, start to map out some more stuff here. Yep, would like that. That little looks good. So this is going through step by step, as you can see here. It's not just going ahead and creating a presentation. It's actually asking us step by step exactly what we're looking for. So this has been prompted to do this. And I'll run through exactly how this is actually happening, how this has been structured in a little bit as well. It's then asking us to actually call their API. So we're going to allow that. It's going to go ahead and I assume start to create the PowerPoint from their API call. And here we have it. We've just had our first slide created. Introduction, why the future of AI matters. Put an image on there. Introduction, why the future of AI matters. It's added in 3 little points here. Growth, all this stuff. It's gone ahead and done. And I can also download this as well. And then it's just taken me to Slides GPT, which I assume these are the guys that actually created this GPT. And here we go. Here's the slide. I could download this. I assume I can get that in a PDF or a PowerPoint. But yeah, there you go. There's the purpose of this particular GPT. And really the goal here is to be an internal tool. So this is something that we can use to obviously increase our own productivity. This is something that you can give to team members to increase their own productivity. And so these are really tools that you just have to experiment with and play around with to see if they really actually help out and suit you. Obviously, some of these things can really promise quite a bit in terms of generating full videos and generating full slide decks. Obviously, these are still very experimental. Some are going to be great, some aren't going to be great, and just find out what actually saves you the most time. But these are really great for internal uses. So this right here is a GPT that I pretty much use every single day in terms of scripting YouTube videos, making the hooks more compelling and better for retention and just making them more engaging. This is a script writing GPT that actually helps out quite a bit with that. And so what I will typically do is just tell this GPT specifically to rewrite a paragraph or a sentence, and it'll usually do a pretty good job of obviously running through exactly what it does. So for example, I could just go ahead and paste in a part of a video script that I've been writing. So usually I'll just go rewrite and I'll just do this. Obviously our prompt here is not that advanced. It's very basic, although the key here is that the backend prompting that this script hook has is really good. It's obviously been trained on a lot of the best formulas and examples, and it's got everything in its back end to be able to really work with this and then turn this into something that's quite a bit more engaging based on obviously the formulas that's been uploaded, and it's going to make this a whole lot better. Now, this has already been optimized a little bit, but it should obviously give us back something that's a little bit better. So we can see here, it's rewritten it a little bit. So rather than this, it's now this. So Vapi just dropped Workflow 2.0. Vapi just rolled out Workflow 2.0, and it's a game changer. Instead of jamming every condition into a single prompt, you can now build AI voice agent flows visually, step by step, like a decision tree. So a little bit different than this. This was already optimized. I think I already ran this through this GPT before, but ultimately just to get the idea of it, just to showcase the purpose and the benefit of using a GPT internally, it really helps speed things up, especially if you have specific and niche use cases just like this. Otherwise, there are obviously a bunch of other writing GPTs. These ones for obviously fixing your grammar, writing assistance, SEO optimized articles, a song maker, AI for product managers, all different types of things. There's really some that really target quite specific styles and niches and everything. And you can literally just search it up, get it exactly, and it can be quite a powerful productivity tool. But anyways, enough of the already created GPTs. In order to go ahead and create your own GPT, all you need to do is go up to the top right section of the GPTs page and click the create button. Once you've done that, you're going to land on this page right here, which is where we're going to be able to control everything about building our own GPT. So one thing I might create is a rewriting GPT. So quite a lot I might be writing an email and I just want to write it up a little bit differently. I want it to sort of just add to it. I want to extend what I've written. This is also something I do in script writing. Maybe I want to add a couple more sentences to what I'm writing. Maybe we want to build a GPT for that. And so if we want to go ahead and do that, we just need to prompt it to do so. So this is the first part of prompting that I want to jump into. We're going to be doing quite a lot of prompting along this whole video. So I'm going to try to keep it consistent so that you can use a lot of the formulas and frameworks in your GPTs as you do your other agents as well. So starting from the top here, you'll see the circle up here. This is actually just the image that you can upload to this system. You can also use DALL-E to generate an image for your GPT if you are going to be publishing it on the GPT store. So one thing that I might do is give it a name first so we can actually generate the image that's relevant. So we're going to call this the extended writing GPT. We want to extend our writing. I'll give it a description. This GPT will extend your writing to expand on your content. Go ahead and use DALL-E. We'll see if that actually generates a nice image that's relevant to these two here. There we have it. We've got a book with some stuff coming out of it. I think that's relevant enough. We're expanding on some writing there. And then we have the instructions. So instructions is where we put in our prompts. So this is the prompt, and this is exactly what we're going to map out from start to finish. What exactly is the system going to do to the information that we give it? So to get started in building out our prompt, I'm going to go ahead and paste in a prompt structure, a sort of a template that I typically use when starting out and building any AI agent prompt. So this right here is a prompt template. It's sort of a structure that I always like to start off my builds with. It really helps to shape a lot of the different aspects that an AI needs to understand in order to have complete context as to what its goal is. And so if you've watched any of my previous videos in terms of building AI agents before, you'll know that this is a structure that I really like to use. And this isn't also a template that you must follow. This is a really good starting point to really nail down the key areas of the prompt, but you can obviously remove elements of this. You can add to it quite a bit. This is just a really good starting point. So for the role, you are a content extender. Your role is to look at the content that has been provided by the user and extend it by 2 to 3 sentences. So that's perfect for the role. So the main purpose of building out the role is to really give it a personality. It's really to structure what its purpose is as an agent. And this is actually really important. When we're looking at more conversational agents later in the video, giving an agent the overall personality, the overall structure for its sort of existence as a whole, it really helps to keep it on track as to exactly what it's meant to be doing. If we don't add this in here, it's possible that down the road in our conversation, it gets confused as to exactly what its purpose is, and potentially it can go off track, it can hallucinate, it can start to talk about things that it shouldn't be because it hasn't got the strict instructions to understand exactly what its purpose is as an agent and what it should be doing every single time. Below this, we have the task, and this is more specifically what it should be outputting. So the exact sort of set of outputs that it should be creating based on the inputs that it's receiving. And so this is sort of covered in the role a little bit. We'll write something similar to what we've wrote at the end of our role here. We obviously want to specifically extend the user's content by 2 to 3 sentences. That's what we want to obviously add on in this case. So your task is to look at the information provided by the user, and you will extend their content by 2 to 3 sentences. You must ensure no context is lost or made up. You must only use relevant information that has been provided in your extra content. So your task is to look at the information provided by the user, and you will extend their content by 2 to 3 sentences. You must ensure no context is lost or made up. You must only use relevant information that has been provided in your extra content. So once again, this is obviously a very rough GPT, just based on a very simple idea of extending our content, but you can hopefully get the idea as to you can continue to add to this. You can add more conditions to do different things. You can have it output in different text styles if you want it to output a certain way. If you want it to write it in the way that you write, you can now start to add examples. So below task, we have the examples, and examples is one of the most important parts of prompting. This is where it's really going to get the best understanding of exactly what you're expecting out of this system. So I've just gone ahead and added in an example from a definition of an apple. So I've just gone ahead and put the example input. An apple is a round, edible fruit produced by an apple tree, typically with a red, green, or yellow skin. So that is one sentence for the definition of an apple. I'm obviously going to want this system to expand upon that. And in this case, it's kept the exact sentence here. and it's gone ahead and added in this additional couple of sentences here, just based on more information about the apple. So this is the type of output that we're going to be expecting. And I think one key thing is that we actually wanted to keep the first set of information that we're uploading. And so this is something that we would come back and add to our task. So we could say, you must ensure the original input is output exactly the same in the new output. You must not change it at all. And then below this, we have the notes, and notes are really what we're going to start to add and modify once we've started to test the system. So we're going to give it some input, and we're going to get some outputs back, and we're going to obviously assess that and see exactly what we're getting back. And then based on that, we can obviously update our notes if we need to change anything in the future. So let's give this system a try. I'm going to obviously go ahead and just give it a sentence that we want to extend upon. So if I went ahead and said the ocean is blue, we'll go ahead and see what we get back. So the ocean is blue, it's fast, expansive, reflects the sky, creating calming sense, blah, blah, blah. Exactly what we're looking for. So it kept the ocean in blue, kept that there, and then outputted the entire sentence here. So looking at our output, the ocean in blue. So I actually didn't type is blue. I was meant to, but we actually demonstrated the purpose of our prompt here, which was to output the original input exactly the way that we inputted it. And it actually did that exactly as it should have. It then went ahead and expanded upon two different sentences. So it's vast expanse, reflects the sky, creating a calming sense and serene atmosphere. The varying shades of blue hint at the depth and movement of the water beneath the surface. So awesome. That expanded upon exactly what we're looking for and kept the original input as well. And so now this is a system that if I ever have a bit of text that I want to expand upon, I can do that at an instance using this GPT. So I could even use my GPT to improve the prompt for my GPT. I could take the role part of my prompt, throw that in here. Okay, that might have confused it a little bit. So I might just take this and I might just tell it to, that is the text I want to extend. Here we go, you're a content extender. Your role is to look at the content that has been provided by the user and extend it by 2 to 3 sentences. This involves carefully analyzing the original input and ensuring your additions are contextually relevant and seamlessly integrated. Your primary goal is to enrich the content without altering its original message or structure. So perfect. I could even improve our own prompt from the GPT itself. We can then go ahead and just add more information to this as well. But once again, just demonstrating the purpose of prompting a GPT, the purpose of this, the productivity benefits of this, and how quite easily it is to actually set this up. Beneath our prompt, we have conversation starters. This is really only beneficial if you are going to be uploading this GPT to the GPT store. If you're interested in doing that, you can just use conversation starters. So I might type the ocean is blue and apple is red. Super basic, obviously, but these are conversation starters. So what happens is somebody can come through to your GPT. They can go ahead and just click on one of these. Doesn't look like it works in this preview mode, but on the actual GPT store, it'll just essentially send this text into the prompt, send it to the system to demonstrate the purpose of it and the benefit of it. That's only needed, once again, if you upload it to the GPT store. So below these conversation starters, we have custom knowledge. So we can go ahead and upload a big document as to how we like to structure content, and it will reference that document in terms of its output. So for example, if I have a particular writing style, I could potentially create a large knowledge base document that maybe contains a big long list of all my emails and all the emails I've written. I could then prompt it to use the knowledge base to look at the emails I've written and write it in the style of how I write. Otherwise, this is mostly used for custom information that you want retrieved, like custom knowledge. So if you run a business and you've got a custom knowledge base with brochures and PDFs and business information, service information, and maybe you want to build a GPT to use internally with the team to look at SOPs, anything that's just very specific to what you do, you can obviously upload that as well. And then this GPT is going to have access to that. And then any team member can just talk to this particular agent to get access to any of that information. Below the knowledge, we have a recommended model section. This is just to do with the AI model. So obviously this is an OpenAI tool. So we're only getting access to the OpenAI GPT models and some of the O models here. For the most part, if you choose no recommended model, this will just allow you or the user to choose which model you want to use at which time. Otherwise, you can just select a particular model to be used for that agent. Now, this is something that really comes down to the complexity of the GPT that you're building. In my case, for the extended writing GPT, it's not very complex. It can use really any of these models here. It'd probably be best to use one of the not so intelligent models, but one of the quicker models, just because it isn't that complex of a task. But let's say you had a very large amount of knowledge base documents for your company information uploaded into this GPT. using something like an O3 model or an O4 model where it does more deep research. You can actually see what these models are best used for by clicking on this drop-down tab here. So 4O, great for most tasks, probably perfect for my use case here. O3 uses advanced reasoning. So O3 is a reasoning model. That just means that it's not just going to go ahead and do a one search. It's actually going to go ahead and break up your search into multiple different steps. So it's going to start from the start of your input. It's going to do a step-by-step process. In some cases, it could run multiple different queries at the same time, and it's going to use all of that information to give you a sort of really well-researched output. So this is great for mostly research activities. So if you have, once again, a very large amount of company information, you've prompted it to be a specific research assistant for this particular role within the company, and you want to provide relevant responses to that, then you can prompt it to do so. You can then use the O3 reasoning model to go through all of that company documentation and provide a pretty decent report for the user within that business using all of that reasoning. Below this, we have the O4 mini model, fastest at advanced reasoning. So it's still an O model, which is for its reasoning. And then we have O3 mini high, which is great at coding and visual reasoning. So you do have to play around with this. There's even more models here as well. OpenAI hasn't made it easy to understand what all these models are for, but you can just go through and play around with them and just see what's best. In terms of building these systems, testing all of them is the best way to go about it. Beneath our model choice, we have capabilities. So capabilities are function calls. These are the ability to access information outside of our GPT for the most part. So we've got web search. So web search is essentially giving our GPT access to the internet. So this is, for the most part, just going to do a Google search. This is something that you've probably experienced before if using ChatGPT and asking it a more up-to-date and relevant question that it sort of needed to go to Google for. This is exactly what that's going to do. Below the web search capabilities, we have the canvas. So this is OpenAI's canvas. It's sort of like a pop-up that comes up on your GPT that really helps make the interaction a bit smoother. So if I go to the canvas tool up here, this is what it looks like. Ultimately, it just brings up the output in a much bigger screen and sort of moves off the conversation to the side here. That way you get a lot more control over editing the output. And so this is great for coding and writing larger projects. So if you are, scripting a video, writing a book, all that stuff, you can actually start to manage a lot easier using the canvas. Then below the canvas, we've got the 4O image generation. So if you've ever generated images in ChatGPT, it's a pretty powerful image generation tool. You can obviously enable it to work within your GPTs, just as it works on ChatGPT. And then below this, we've got the code interpreter and data analysis. So allow this GPT to run code. When enabled, this GPT can analyze data, work with your uploaded files, generate downloadable files, perform math, and more. So if you've, once again, ever extensively used ChatGPT, you'll know that what you can do is provide it with content and you can get it to do quite a lot. It can generate code. It can then run that code and give you the output of that. So you can upload CSV files and spreadsheets and ask it to do maths and calculate values. And it's going to be using, for the most part, its code interpreter to actually process all of that, generating downloadable files like a CSV. If you want to enable that, you can very simply just enable it and it's going to have the capacity to do that. And then lastly, we have the create our own actions tab. So this is pretty much allowing us to create our own functions, our own API calls. And this is something that is probably one of the most powerful things, a part of these GPTs, the fact that we can access information outside of what we're allowed to based on the preset functions. So this is going to allow us to talk to a weather API to get access to what the weather is. This is going to allow us to get access to our custom CRM system information, pull that through, add that into the GPT, and just make the entire agent experience far more powerful. So to give you an example of this, there are some examples on here as well. Click examples. If we click on the weather here, it's going to go ahead and generate an OpenAI schema. So that's the structure that we're using to send requests to other applications. So this is a little bit technical in this section here. Well, this is something that you actually don't even have to write yourself. You can generate these schemas. There are actually GPTs to generate schemas for you if you just give it the information to do so. So if you can remember from the first part of this video, walking you through how APIs work, essentially what we're doing is we're taking an endpoint for a particular API, and we're setting up a lot of the parameters for the information that we want to retrieve from that endpoint. Within this, it's going to go ahead and communicate with that and send that information back into our GPT. So we can see down at the bottom here, our get current weather is an available action that's just popped up because of the schema that we've uploaded here. We can test this by clicking the test button. It's going to go ahead and run that in the GPT. I can click the allow button. You do have to click allow every time that you want to talk. And we can see here that this didn't actually work. It says error talking to connector. I encountered an error trying to fetch the weather. I think this happened because this isn't actually a real API, weather.example.com. This is just a fake endpoint to prove the point of obviously calling the HTTP endpoint. But once again, this is something that you can do yourself by putting in your own endpoint and then putting in your own parameters. You're going to learn a lot more about this later in the video when we start to build out systems on other AI agent platforms, when we start to connect into automation platforms like Make.com or Zapier, NNN even. We're going to be obviously building a lot more of this, and you'll get a much better understanding as to how to actually structure this. So this is just a very basic example. But if I jump into one of the other examples here, like the pet store example, if I just click on this one, I can go ahead and test if this actually works. So let's say we want to get the inventory, we'll hit the test button. So this is going to a real API, petstore.swagger.io, allow the request, and it should pull back some information. So here we go. It is the current pet inventory from the pet store API, available 40, pending, sold, not available, whatever, bunch of random information from this sort of mock API that they've provided here. And that's just gone ahead and been sent from all this schema, our OpenAI schema here. Once again, this is not something that you have to write up or yourself line by line. This is something that you can actually generate yourself using a generation tool. And so for example, this is an API builder specifically for the OpenAI schema. This is a GPT that we can pretty much just use and just talk back and forth with, and it is just going to help build that schema for us. So once again, I'm going to walk through how to communicate with different applications later in the video. But once you've understood that, you can come back here, give this the endpoint that you want to communicate with, and it will just walk through step by step exactly what information it needs in order to generate that schema. You can put that into that GPT and it will work from there. All right, so jumping into the second part of our practical tutorial, we're going to be diving into a platform called Voiceflow. So Voiceflow is one of the most advanced platforms for building AI agents, and this is a really good platform to start learning after the GPTs, as this really builds on top of the way in which we start to build systems like prompting on GPTs. And so what I'll be building with Voiceflow is going to be a website chat agent. And so this is going to be very similar to the way in which we interacted with the GPT earlier, although this system is going to be far more dynamic in enabling us to have images and buttons and carousels, and it's going to be a lot more interactive to work with when it's going to be added onto a website. And in addition to being far more flexible in how it's deployed, it's also far more advanced in how far we can take these agents. And so jumping in to the Voiceflow right here, this is just the main Voiceflow landing page. So craft the perfect AI customer support experience. That's one of the main cases of building out these website-based systems is going to be customer support. Voiceflow, it might seem like Voiceflow by the name is just for voice because it's Voiceflow, although they actually started out in the chat space. And so Voiceflow is one of the most premier platforms for building chat agents. They do have support for creating voice agents where we can actually speak to the agent over the phone, although I'm actually going to jump into a secondary platform later in the video and cover a little bit more about voice agents separately. But for now, we can just scroll down a little bit here. AI agents that talk, type, and help customers like a human. And we're going to be jumping directly into the chat agents. So chat agents with deep customization, build chat agents with deep capabilities, interface customization. So they are the two main key points to obviously differentiate building a system like a GPT versus using a platform like Voiceflow. This is a system that's using pretty much the exact same technology as the GPTs in the background for a lot of the time, although we're obviously now going to be able to take this system and start to deploy it in the real world, where it's not just an internal tool, but it's something that customers can start using. Just scrolling down even more, we can start to see some use cases of these systems. So customer support, once again, it's clearly a really big use case for them. And you can see here a really advanced agent that is quite well integrated for this particular company, where it says they resolve 70% of their support tickets, saving them almost $500,000 in just 90 days. And you can see this is the extensiveness of this chat agent. So this is not just back and forth communicating like a GPT where it's just text-based. This is very interactive. And so this is a system that's going to be very well integrated into the business specifically. It's going to have a lot of custom actions and things like you can see on the screen now integrated into it. Scrolling down even further, we can just see some more use cases here from some of the testimonials as to exactly what the difference is and what the purpose of using a secondary platform like Voiceflow is. You can see they've even got integrations into different apps as well, but we're obviously going to be able to create our own custom integrations with custom tools and API calls articles and everything that we've gone through so far. And once again, obviously you can have a look through this website yourself. But jumping into Voiceflow, once you've signed up for an account, you're going to land on your obviously main workspace. And this is dedicated to building agents. So right here, we can go ahead and create a brand new project. I'll click the new project button right here. So to get started, I am actually going to go ahead and click on one of these templates just to showcase how exactly Voiceflow works, what Voiceflow looks like in terms of building these agents, and how it compares to your traditional GPTs. So I'm just going to go ahead and type template because I am just going to jump into a template for now. We'll click on the first one here for customer support, and I'm going to hit create project. Once we've gone ahead and hit the create project button, we're going to land on this page right here. And this is a big canvas that we can use to really build quite extensive agents and capabilities and flows and functions with. So I'm going to walk through really step by step everything that there is to building out one of these systems. And so if we just scroll out a little bit here, you'll see that we are looking at a giant canvas here. And so this is sort of like an unlimited canvas where we can take blocks and sort of plug them together, just like Lego, moving from one step to another. And this allows us to build a much more structured, more conditional system that you would traditionally see, but then when merging that with our sort of traditional prompting methods, connecting it all together to create a really quite advanced and sophisticated system compared to the traditional GPTs. So I'll get started in running through what everything does on the screen here. So it might be a little bit overwhelming at the moment, but there's a good purpose for everything that's on the screen. And I'm going to run through all of the key settings and features that you need to know to get a really good understanding as to how Voiceflow works. So to get started, I'm just going to run through the main sections on the left-hand side here as to what we're really looking at. So on the main page here, we're looking at a canvas. So this is a canvas that allows us to build our agents, add modules, connect them together, have them talk to each other, and really build the main foundations of our agent. Jumping below the canvas selector here, it's called workflows on Voiceflow. Below this, the knowledge base. So a knowledge base is where we upload information. And so this is once again, exactly the same as how the GPTs handle knowledge base information. Most AI systems and most agent systems are going to be using a very similar term of knowledge base. And this is where we're going to be uploading a data source. So if I click on add data source here, we've got a few different options. We've got URLs. So this is where it's going to extract content from a website URL directly and upload it to our knowledge base. A sitemap where it takes an entire sitemap from a URL. So not just one page, but every page on that website. We've got the upload file button. So we can upload PDFs, texts, documents, things like that. And then we have the plain text. And this is just going to be typing in random text if you want to copy paste something, and you can import that as well. So also a Zendesk integration that they have. Not sure why that's just Zendesk. Anyways, you can upload quite extensive information just with these tools here. And this can be later retrieved from our canvas. Below the knowledge base, we have our interfaces, and this is where we get our first look at the chat widget that we're going to be able to start to build from and build with in terms of adding on a website chat widget. And so really simply, the way in which we can actually start to deploy the system in the real world, put it on a website, is directly through here. So we can take this installation script right here. If we paste this code before the body tag on a website, essentially what will happen is that this will automatically get put onto a website, and you're going to be able to interact with the agent that is created from here. So this is hosted on Voiceflow, and we can build the agent here, and it's going to be able to get accessed. And this is really a good first glimpse as to what one of these chat agents looks like. So it's quite a nice modern design here. We get access to changing a lot of the colors, a lot of the imagery, a lot of the naming. And one of the key things that you'll see here is that they have buttons. So it's a lot more interactive than obviously just a text back and forth system. And there's a lot more flexibility than obviously just buttons. And you'll also see here, there's multiple different text steps. So it's not just one big chunk of text. We're gonna have multiple steps of text that's provided. We can then obviously type out responses here, and there's also options for using your voice to respond to the system. This is not configured at all, so it won't provide us with an answer at the moment, but there are a lot more settings that come with appearance and style, the interface and everything, and we can jump into that later. Otherwise, below this, we have some version control. I'll come back to this later as well. Another key part below this are transcripts. So ultimately, we can deploy the system on a website, and we can track all of the conversations that are occurring on this system. And so you get access to every conversation that's happened with your agent. And obviously you can have a look through those conversations and then optimize the agent from there. Below this, we have some analytics. We haven't communicated with this agent yet, so we don't have a whole lot of analytics in here, although everything's going to start to populate right here. Below this, we have some settings, and this is just some more settings, which I can jump into later. Not absolutely necessary to know all of this at the moment. So jumping back to the canvas here, starting from the start, you'll notice that we have this little green block here, and this is just our start node. So this is by default added to obviously every single agent to start the conversation. And this just drags directly to the first part of the conversation that you want to have initiated. And so at the moment, we can click this start button, and it's going to go ahead and initiate our conversation with this block right here. And this block right here is the block that was automatically inserted from the template that we chose. So if we started with a blank template, we wouldn't obviously have this agent block right here. But right away, it's gone ahead and given us a question here. So hi there, this is Laura from Acme Solutions, customer support. How can I help you today? So I'm just going to jump out of this and really showcase what's just happened, how we've been able to get a message here, and exactly what this customer support block here is actually doing. So jumping into the first block that we have here, the customer support block, this is a Voiceflow agent module. And so the Voiceflow agent module is essentially the same way that we built our agent previously with the GPT. This is the exact same thing. And so if we jump into this little edit button right here for this particular agent that's been automatically created for us, we're going to get a bunch of settings that are very familiar from the GPT's creation. And so what we'll see here is that we have a big long list of instructions that have been created for this particular template with a lot of use cases and pathways. And so this has been prompted very similar to our template that we even used on our GPTs as well. And then on the right-hand side here, you'll get a bunch of settings. And so you'll see we can access the knowledge base. This has been turned on. There isn't any knowledge base content, so it's given us a little error there. What you'll see, tools. And so this is exactly the same as to how we were accessing external information from the GPTs. This is the same sort of function. And so obviously on Voiceflow, they do have some pre-made functions. We can integrate into Salesforce in this case, that they've integrated natively, Zendesk as well. But once again, we can obviously directly integrate into an API. So no API tools at the moment, but we can obviously jump in, create an API call, and we can obviously make a request right here. And that's going to be able to obviously retrieve information into the conversation live during the call. And then above the tools, we have the AI model. And so this is once again exactly the same as how we were able to control that on the GPTs. One thing you will notice is that there are far more models now that we're not just limited to obviously just using OpenAI's GPT system. We now get access to a lot of Anthropic's Claude's models. And you can see here, we can choose any of these, some of Gemini's models, DeepSeek's models, Llama models. There really is no specific model that is the best. These models are great at doing all different types of tasks. And you really need to look through and test all of these models for your specific use case. You can't really go wrong with using some of these standard OpenAI models. So I typically do just jump in for your sort of standard conversational agent, jump into something like a 4.0 model where it's quite efficient. Although once again, for different use cases and different requirements for your output, some of these models might work great as well. So hopefully that makes sense as to exactly how this module is currently set up. It's pretty much exactly the same as how GPTs work. And so we've obviously set up our prompt and our tools. We can go ahead and interact with this system, and it's going to be very responsive. It's going to be able to come up with a response based on the set of instructions that it's been given and just be very conversational, back and forth, very contextual, understanding exactly what you've just said. So I can just say, hi, I would like a refund. So one of our basic support question, it's going to look at exactly its knowledge base. I understand you like refund. We can't process refunds. Provide some more information about the refund request. In terms of the actual solution here, this is primary purpose of helping issue with the products, answer questions about services. We could probably test it a little bit further if I just understand the use case a bit better for this template. So it's a customer service voice assistant for Acme Solutions. Your primary purpose is to help customers resolve issues with their products, answer questions about services, and ensure a satisfying support experience. So just jumping down into some of the things that it can help with. Troubleshooting, resolution, closing. So maybe we can give it a troubleshooting question. Jump in here. Hi, my phone is not turning on. See if we can get a step-by-step help with that. Oh no, I'm sorry to hear that. Let's see if we get this working again. Could you please tell me a little bit more? For example, when did the issues start? And have you noticed anything unusual before it happened? I did drop it beforehand. I see dropping the phone could definitely cause some issues. Let's see if we get it turned on. Could you press and hold the power button for 10 to 15 seconds? Sometimes this forces the phone to restart. Let me know if anything happens. So just proving the point, we can obviously give it a question. It's going to give us a relevant answer back. We're able to just give it a secondary question. It's obviously got context as to the conversation that's occurring previously. And it's once again, very similar to that GPT. And so you're probably wondering what the sort of powerhouse of Voiceflow is and how this is differing from the GPTs at the moment. And so the key parts of Voiceflow compared to those traditional builders is going to be getting access to the features on the left-hand side here. And so right here, we have access to a whole range of different modules and nodes that gives us a lot more functionality outside of our traditional agent step. And this is going to allow us to start to weave in more conditional logic into our generative system. So for example, they have these set of logic blocks right here, which are far more conditional blocks that we can start to weave in based on what happens within our agent step. So for example, I could go ahead and grab this if condition block and just drag this into the canvas here. If we click into this block, you'll see here that we have a couple of different conditions that we can use for our pathways in our agent. And so you'll see here within this condition, we've got business logic, which evaluates individual paths one by one using the expression builder or JavaScript code, or we can use a prompt where we evaluate all paths at once using a prompt and conversation memory. So there are a couple different ways that we can move down different pathways. So that could be a prompt where we're evaluating using a large language model as to what decision should be made, or we're going to be using very rigid logic where this pathway is true or this pathway is false, and we can have it go down based on a very specific and rigid output. As we're going ahead and clicking on the paths here, if we click this, we can see here if the value is this, we can go down a different pathway, and then we can start to have this block go down to different modules. We can drag this to then read out a particular message if a certain condition is hit. So jumping back into our agent step here, the way that we can start to communicate with a lot of these blocks is if we go ahead and click on this edit button. Once again, you'll see the pathways, and this is really one of the key parts of Voiceflow that really stands out to us as being one of the key areas as to why this is so much more advanced than your typical chat-based systems where it's just back and forth context. We can add a pathway here that based on a certain condition within our traditional prompt, it's going to actually exit our traditional prompt. So our entire instruction set that we've given it here, it's going to exit that, and it's going to start to go down our more conditional pathway. And then later, and based on whatever happens in that pathway, we can start to route it back into this prompt. So for example, if somebody has an issue with their phone, we can just type phone issue. The user has an issue with their phone, super basic example. But we're creating a pathway for anybody that has an issue with their phone. We no longer want to conversate with them using this traditional pathway. We actually want to take them out of this. And so the benefit of this is that whenever we need to use conditional logic, whenever we need to have a very rigid and specific response, we have the capacity to do so. So jumping out of this module here, you'll see that phone issue, the pathway we just created has now populated itself within this agent block, and we can now start to drag a sort of step-by-step condition to happen after this. So to give you some more context as to what we can actually do in terms of these different blocks, I'm just going to run through all of the different blocks that we have access to on the canvas. So all the way at the top here, we do have the agent block. And so this is what we're currently using here to give it our set of instructions, add some tool calls to it, and have a really integrated system all in one. So this is what we get access to when we drag this in here. So overall, the agent block is quite straightforward and quite powerful. All the blocks below it are really what we want to start to integrate into our agent block. So first up, with the talk section, we have the message block. So if we go ahead and drag in this message block right here, what this is going to do is it is just going to be a message. As simple as it sounds, it's going to be a very static message. So this is not a prompt. It's not a block that's going to be conditional in any ways. It's going to be a block that allows us to just read out a message. So this can be great for certain disclaimers. If we need to read out a set of information very specifically, word for word, no matter what, this is going to be perfect for doing that. So we can go ahead and just say, sorry to hear your phone is broken. Super simple. We can have that as a very static message. And so if someone has a phone issue, no matter what, it's going to say, sorry to hear your phone is broken. And that's going to be read out. And so this is no longer in our agent step. It's no longer a prompt or even using any part of AI. It's building straight into a conditional step of logic. Below the message module, we have a prompt module. So we'll go ahead and drag this in. So this block is very similar to the message block right here, although this is going to be using AI in this case. So it's a block that we can use to run to, and then based on maybe some variables that we want to send through, it's going to generate a brand new response on the spot based on the prompt that we've given it. So this is different to the agent step because it's not going to be conversational. It's just going to be sort of an input that generates a singular output. It's not conversational. It's not going to have a large amount of memory as the agent step. We're not going to have tools or anything running. It's purely going to be, give it an input based on a prompt. We're going to have a different output. So to give you an example, we can go ahead and just click on create a prompt right here. We're going to get this system right here. So it looks quite similar to the agent step. And what you can see is we've got our prompt on the left here. And so this is, we can have a look at some of the starter templates right here for the generate an answer. You can see here that there's two different ways that we can interact with our prompt. We've got got the system prompt and we've got the user prompt. So a system prompt, once again, is where we are just giving it a set of instructions. So for this particular agent, we've got a system prompt, which just says you are an AI customer support agent. And then we've got the user prompt. And the user prompt says you are an AI customer support bot, helping a customer with their question. When communicating with guests, follow these guidelines, blah, blah, blah. This is just a template that I've obviously just done and used to showcase the purpose of it. In this case, it's quite extensive as to what it's going to be generating based on the input that it's given. And it's actually got access to the Voiceflow memory as well, based on the conversation that's happened before it. So for this particular example, we can go ahead and run this step. We can just provide some variable information here, but just scroll down in this prompt slightly. You'll see they are using some variables. So a variable is just a store of information. So in the case of this particular agent here, we would need to store exactly the information that's being read out. In this case, the last utterance right here is going to be the last set of information that's just read out. And so pretty much the customer's question is always going to be last utterance if you're collecting information. So that variable is going to be automatically populated. But obviously in the case of running this manually, we say, hi, my phone has broken, and we can just see what it comes up with. We don't have to enter any chunks. Hit the run button, and the output is going to be something that follows along with this prompt. So I'm sorry to hear that your phone is broken. To assist you better, can you please provide more details? Blah, blah, blah. Obviously, this is not built exactly for the use case we're looking at, but you can see there, given it a prompt, given it an input, and it's given us an output. We can obviously go ahead and give that to the user. Below the prompt step, we have an image step. And so an image step is where, you guessed it, we can upload an image. So if we want to go ahead and showcase a series of properties, maybe this is a real estate use case, we can have images of properties, we can have images for whatever reason that you'd want to have images. There's a lot of different use cases here. We can obviously have it set up to be conditional, that based on a specific answer, we can showcase them a particular image. So if somebody is interacting with a particular real estate agent and they're interested in looking at some of the floor plans, they can provide some context and just say, hi, I'd like to look at your floor plans. And obviously we can use some conditions to go ahead and provide this image. Below the image, we have a card step. So this is very similar to the images, although we actually start to give it some options based on the image. So if we click on the card title, we can provide it with an image. So this might be the image of a product. We can provide it with a card title. So this is probably one of the more commonly used modules for, let's say, an e-commerce use case. You can provide it with the image of the product. You can provide it with the name of the product, the description, that could be pricing information, etc., stuff like that added to the description. And then below this, we can start to add buttons as well. So if we start to add a button, it could be a buy now button, a additional button, might be learn more. And so this is something that's going to be quite interactive for the agent. So if I go ahead and add that, I could even add it to this all the way up here. We could name this the iPhone Fixer, whatever. We can go ahead and interact with our agent. So if somebody said that their phone was broken, it's going to go ahead and provide us with the card right here. And we can go ahead and just buy the iPhone Fixer product right there. Obviously, we haven't connected that to anything there, but there you go. But now you can see it's obviously quite a lot more interactive in the fact that we can give it access to buttons and images and text like that to go down a different set of conditions. And below the card, we have a carousel. So it's very similar to how the card works, although with the carousel, it's just multiple different cards. So rather than having one product, we can go ahead and click the add card button at the bottom. It's pretty much the only difference. And now we can get access to multiple different products right here. So we can go ahead and add some buttons into each card that we have. We can give them names and whatever. Otherwise, if I just go ahead and unlink this right here, add this right here. So just dragging and dropping, we can go ahead and just play this and have a look at what this looks like. It's going to populate on the screen 2 different cards. Because we haven't given an image, it's actually just populated as 2 different buttons here. Although we can go ahead and give this a title as test. And we can obviously add some more text up here as well. Click it again, and you'll see that we get access to 2 cards that we can obviously click through whatever we want. So if we have a list of properties, for example, a list of products, for example, we can list that using this particular block. So that's it for the talk step of the blocks here. Below this, we have the listen step. This is pretty important. This is where we get access to some of the buttons. So if we want to add that next level of flexibility in what we're going to be enabling the user to do, we can drag a set of buttons into the system. And so we can remove our cards here. We can just drag it over here. If somebody's phone is broken, we can actually start to drag this button module just below the text that's been read out here. And we can start to add in some buttons rather than, letting a user respond. If this is going to be a visual interface, we're going to be able to give them some buttons to interact with. And in some cases, the user interface and the UI in terms of just selecting a button is going to be far easier and quicker than typing out what you want to do. So in this case, we can go ahead and just type purchase new phone, create another button and call fix current phone. So very basically, if we jump into this particular block, once it hits this block, somebody has talked to our agent, they've mentioned their phone is broken. We're going to get access to two different buttons based on this. And if they can choose what they want. So if they want to purchase a new phone, they can do that. If they want to fix their current phone, they can do that as well. The functionality of doing this is very wide. There is a lot of different ways that we can build these systems, whether it's more conditional, less conditional, using more AI, less AI. We have the complete control over doing that. And so for example, instead of continuing to add to this and making it more conditional in regards to what the user wants to do, we can very simply just drag this fix current phone all the way back to our customer support agent, and we can start to bring that context back into our agent. So if somebody says that they want to fix their current phone because their current phone is broken, it's going to jump back into our agent. It's going to get the context that that's what they've just selected. And so they can just continue the conversation from there. And so this is really just demonstrating the ability using Voiceflow specifically to have our very standard conversational agent, but be able to go outside of that agent, give the user some options like some buttons, like some cards, and then move the conversation back into the agent where it was. Below the button module, we have a choice module. So go ahead and drag the choice module. Very similar to how the buttons work, although it's not a button, although it's just sort of waiting for a specific input. So rather than having the user manually select a button and making them, obviously select a button that they need, if the response from the user is expected to be a little more ambiguous, not exactly expecting a particular answer like purchasing a new phone or fixing a current phone, we can go ahead and remove this. So we'll have to delete the connection. We can add in this condition step. And so what we can add here is what's called an intent. And an intent is just looking for the exact user's intention. So kind of simple. If we look at the top here of our choice step, triggers, click this plus button right here. It's going to give us the option to select a series of different intents, and intents are what does the user intend to do? And we can pretty much set up a prompt that is listening, and then based on what they've said, we're going to go down a particular path based on that. So it's sort of like the prompt step, although it's a bit more integrated for the specific purpose of going down different paths. And so a couple of the default intents created on Voiceflow is one for yes and one for no. So this might be a typical question, are you interested in our services? Yes or no. If we go ahead and click on the edit button right here, you can see that we have a couple of things included in the creation of an intent. So the name of our intent is yes. Description, trigger this intent when the user responds positively. And then we have a whole series of utterances. And so utterances are sort of acronyms and ways of saying yes, many different ways. And so we'll add in a whole list of sample phrases that could be seen as or very similar to the user responding positively to the question that's been given. And these are some examples as to what that could be. And so this really just helps train the AI and the backend prompts that Voiceflow is using in order to determine which is the best path to take. So this particular one is already done for us. We can go ahead and close this. We can go ahead and add this. We'll just go ahead, triggers, select intent. And yes, we can now add that to our pathway. We can also then select the intent of no. So we can have a look at what that looks like. Very much the exact same, although the opposite. We've got our different utterances here. We can even generate utterances based on all of these that have already been created here as well. But we'll close out of this. We've added no there as well. And for example, what we can do is give it a different question. So sorry to hear your phone is broken. Would you like it to be repaired? Give them the question there. If they say yes, it's going to move over to maybe a message, another message. And we just say, great, your phone has been fixed. Otherwise, if they say no, you can add another message step that says, no worries, we will send you a replacement. So obviously, once again, just demonstrating the use case of the features and functions and blocks here. Otherwise, if I jump into this block right here, it's not going to move on automatically. It's going to wait for us to give it a response, and it's going to evaluate the response based on all of these settings and conditions that we've given to these two intents right here. So I'm going to go ahead and say, great. I'm not going to say yes directly because we want to use some of those utterances. And you'll see here that it's going to go down the pathway of yes. It's going to go ahead and read out our first message here. Great, your phone has been fixed. And so using the utterances, using that prompt and the name and everything that we set up in the conditions here, it's been able to quite intelligently decide which path it needs to go down. And once again, to reiterate, we can start to drag these blocks and these modules based on what's happened back into our main agent. And so this way, we're not forgetting about our main agent. We still really want to keep that main agent for all of its context and sort of concluding the conversation with the goal of what's been planned out within this particular agent. Although we want to add the added sort of flexibility of having these conditional steps so that the conversational experience, user experience can be far more fluent. Next, we have a capture step. So the capture step is for capturing mostly specific variables, specific sets of information that's been provided by the user or selected by the user to store in some form of a variable. And so this is useful for just continuing to add on to the conditional logic side of building out a particular pathway on Voiceflow. So for example, we might want to set a variable as to whether or not the phone had been fixed or they had been received a replacement. And so maybe we can create a variable called phone status or update status that could be assigned as either fixed or replacement. And so what we could do is drag from this block to this block. And this is going to mean that both of these conversations, no matter which pathway has been gone down, is going to end up running this block right here. So one of the ways that we can capture information, and that will be super useful for this particular use case, is called an entity. So capturing entities on Voiceflow is once again using sort of similar to the intents. It's really using an AI model in the background to assess some of the inputs, and it's going to be assigning a particular output. And so instead of just capturing all of the information that's coming in and assigning that as a variable, we're going to be assessing that information, and based on another prompt that we've built, we're going to be assessing what that variable should equal. And so you'll see here at the top, we have entities. If I click the plus button right here, no entities exist at the moment, but entities help your agent know which data to pluck out from the user's response. Go ahead and click the create entity button. This is going to pop up right here. And so this, I'm just going to call it the phone status. That's going to be our sort of entity name. The data type, in this case, it's just going to be one of these selections here. It's just going to be custom. In our case, we're not using any particular values or format of data as you would for an email or a name or a number. We'll just hit custom, and then we have values. And so values in this case is going to be based on the input. What is the output going to be? So I've gone ahead and added 2 different values for the output of our particular entity. In this case, for our phone status, we've either got the phone replacement or the phone being fixed. So I've just added in 2 different values here. I can click out of this, and based on obviously what happens in these steps right here, we can essentially output what's been occurring from this entity. And so if I go ahead, drag in another message step here, we can just output this as a variable. And so I can just type in the phone, click on the phone status, and based on what it outputs, it's going to showcase us in the chat widget specifically. So if I click on this one right here, it's going to give us our message. This is a capture step, so we're just going to wait for our response here. I might just say thanks. And then based on obviously the conversation memory and everything that's just happened, it's going to assess whether or not it's going to be one of 2 variables. And you can see there, it assigned it as fixed as we expected, and it's gone ahead and output there within our conversation step. And so obviously you probably wouldn't just read out the variable that's been assigned in this case. A more logical use of this would be to essentially just store these variables very strategically in the case that we want to obviously use that variable particular bit of information, and then maybe we want to use this in the prompt later. So maybe we have a dedicated prompt for the status of somebody's phone repair, and we can essentially insert the prompt of their phone status as a dynamic variable into this particular agent prompt right here. And that way, rather than just basing it off of the conversational script that we've built out right here to determine what's happened, we've actually got a specific variable that we've inserted into a particular set of prompts. And that really just adds to the level of reliability by obviously running this conditional step, but then bringing it back into our agent. We can start to get quite a lot better reliability. Jumping into the next selection of blocks that we have here, we have this logic step right here. And this is just adding on top of the conditional set of instructions that we can provide to this system. So you'll see here, we've got an if condition block. So once again, as I showed a little bit earlier, this is for your if conditions. So based on this value, if this, do this, otherwise do this thing. So your typical sort of if then formula that is used obviously widely in coding. We've got our 2 different condition types that I ran through just earlier. One is using our very rigid, very conditional step based on expressions or JavaScript code. Otherwise, we have our specific prompt, which is actually going to be deciding a different path based on a selected prompt that we've given it. Skipping over to the dev section over here, I do just want to obviously go through a lot of the critical and key components of building on Voiceflow. Jumping into the dev blocks, we have the function block, API block, JavaScript block, knowledge base search. And so these are some of the key ones right here. If I jump into this API block, this is where we get to access our external information. So if we want to start to communicate to other applications, we can do that using a separate block. Once again, we can obviously just do this as normal through our agent step, using the API as a tool. So this is not something that we have to do externally from our agent. We can have the prompt handle that automatically. But obviously, if we have any need to conditionally set through and run a particular block based on a very conditional logic, we don't want our prompt to ever run this logic, then obviously we can have it outside of it, and it's exactly the same as to how we would set up an API request. Then below this, we have our JavaScript block. This is for, I'd say, more advanced users. This is where you want to obviously add some JavaScript code, some custom scripts. And so if you're familiar with JavaScript, that's great. You can use this block to add in a custom script that might run whatever functions and automations and scripting stuff that you'd like. It's really just bypassing a lot of these conditional blocks and just writing out all of the code yourself. So this is something that's great. It's more of a power user tool, absolutely not something that's necessary to building a more basic agent. And then below the JavaScript block, we have our knowledge base search. And so this is a particular block that's designated to, you guess it, searching the knowledge base. So obviously this is once again something that is automatically integrated into our agent block here with access to the knowledge base and just toggling this on right here. And then obviously uploading that information into the knowledge base on the left. But the benefit obviously of having an external knowledge base block is when you want to start to have multiple different knowledge bases with different sets of information that are triggered based on different sets of conditions. And so for example, if you have sort of a general set of knowledge, that is what you're going to upload to your knowledge base. That's what you want to have your agent access no matter what. Although in some cases, you may want to provide a set of information very conditionally. So maybe only if a user has identified that they are a particular individual, should they have access to a series of files. And so that is an exact use case as to where having a conditional system where if the user has passed a series of maybe API calls to their CRM system and they've verified they are a particular individual, then we can then give them access to this particular block by dragging the connectors, giving them access to this. Then we can send their query directly to the knowledge base for this particular section. So hopefully you have a far better understanding as to what all of these blocks do, how Voiceflow works, some of the benefits and the differences between building one of these systems versus building a more instruction set system using GPTs, and where we can do something very similar on Voiceflow, although we're now leveraging a lot of the conditional blocks and then merging that with our single prompt to create quite a powerful and conditional agent. Now, if this is still a little bit confusing as to how you can actually start to build out a functional agent with this system, I am going to go ahead and start from scratch and build out an agent on Voiceflow. So I'm just going to run through all the necessary blocks to build out a more simpler real estate agent, sort of inbound chat-based agent here on Voiceflow. So coming back to our Voiceflow dashboard, jumping back into my folder here, which has my template that I just created, I'm going to go ahead and click new project. I'm just going to create a brand new project from a basic template. So I'm going to call this the real estate agent. And this is going to be sort of like an inbound website chat system for like a real estate agent. So it's going to have access to answering questions about property information, providing images and carousels of properties and things like that. So to get started, I'm going to go ahead and drag in our first agent block. So I'm going to grab the agent block. This is a really key and core component of building out our agents. So we're going to go ahead and drag that in there. We're going to use the start block. We're going to drag that to our agent. One thing to note is that we don't have to use the agent block here to obviously build our agent. We can make it very rigid, providing a first message and providing a series of buttons and make it very rigid like that. Although the purpose of this video is obviously to go through agents. What does an agent look like? And obviously using this particular block really demonstrates the use case of the fluidity of being able to give it a set of instructions that determines what's going to happen based on your input. So we've added the agent block here. We'll click on select existing agent. We're going to click create agent as we're building this ourselves. And we're going to get an instruction set right here. So this is where we're going to be able to give it our prompts. So very similar to how we prompted earlier with the GPTs, we're going to give it a set of instructions. We're going to give it a little bit of a template. I'm just going to fill in that template to mimic sort of the use case and what we want to have happen with our agent. So here we go, super basic from the start. I've gone ahead and added in our 4 key components with the role of the agent, the task of the agent, some examples and some notes that we've added into our instruction template here as well. So for our role, we can go ahead and give it a personality for our real estate agent. So you are Emily, a friendly and knowledgeable AI assistant for Blue Real Estate. Your role is to assist users by answering questions and recommending suitable properties. So super basic, but that's ultimately what we're going to be targeting for the use case. So for the task, your task is to assist the user by answering their questions about our services. If the user would like to learn more about a property, please use the property specific path. And so I'll jump into what the property specific path is going to be. But my intention for this agent is that we're going to have our single agent, our single prompt agent with our main instruction set. And we're going to create a series of conditional pathways based on the interest level of the user for a particular property. So somebody can talk with this agent. They can obviously answer any questions about opening hours, information about the business, information about what they do and how they work. And if they have any specific and particular interests about one of the properties that the company offers, you can go down the particular pathway to provide more information, whether that's through a particular knowledge base, providing images and carousels and buttons, or specific to that property. So one thing that I will add to this agent and to our sort of template here is going to be a new section specifically for properties. So once again, this sort of structure and template that we're using is not rigid at all. Definitely recommend changing it and adding to it. Specifically, if you're going to have sections like properties, which are very relevant to the use case, that's going to make it far more powerful, more impactful, and more reliable by actually adding in sections that are quite key to your particular use case. So I've gone ahead and added in our first property for this particular agent, 123 Main Street. So super basic address there, but I've gone ahead and added in a subheading. So I've added in the 2 hashtags and then added in the name of the property to obviously associate that with the main properties heading. And then below this, we've got a description of the property. This is something I just generated with AI very quickly. So 123 Main Street is a stunning modern home located in the heart of Los Angeles. This 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath property features an open concept layout, bunch of marketing words there for the particular property. But obviously, we just want to use this to contextualize exactly what 123 Main Street is, where it's located. And we're going to be using this to trigger down a particular pathway for the property. So jumping over to the right-hand side of our screen with the pathways, we'll go ahead and click on the plus button. And right here is where we're going to set up the sort of prompt and conditioning. So if somebody has more interest into learning about the 123 Main Street property, we can go down this particular path. So I'm just going to call this path name the 123 Main Street path, and we'll go ahead and prompt this. So trigger this when the user has further questions about our 123 Main Street property. Only trigger if the user has expressed interest. Do not trigger if they just had a couple of questions. So we really want to go down this path if somebody has some desired interest for this particular property. It's not just a couple of questions, it's somebody that's interested in learning more about it. We can go down that particular path. So we'll set that as that particular prompt. And we'll obviously, as we come out of here, you'll see 123 Main Street is now populated as a pathway that we can start to build from. I'm just going to go ahead and rename our agent. We'll go and click at the top here. We can just call this the Blue Real Estate Agent. And so let's go ahead and talk to this agent and see if we get this 123 Main Street to trigger based on the condition and the prompting that we just set. So out of the gate, it is just going to generate a random first message. So hello, I'm Emily, your friendly AI assistant from Blue Real Estate. This is obviously not exactly the best first message ever. What we can do is actually set this ourselves. So one thing that we can do is once again, use our message block right here, add the message and just say, hi, this is Emily from Blue Real Estate. How can I help you today? Add that in there, and that's going to be our first message that's read out. We could even obviously jump to our assistant block after this. So we can just do this. What we can use is our capture block right here, add our capture block. Then we can move over here. So we can wait for the first message, then move over to our assistant. We can move this to the entire user reply rather than the entities. We're not looking for a specific value. You can see here, save entire reply to last utterance. We can just save that there. It's going to work with the default variable of last utterance. It's going to go ahead and say this. How can I help you today? Hi, I'm interested in learning about your property offerings. That should go ahead and insert that information into the agent block, and it's just going to answer that question based on what we've just given it. So you can see here, there you go. It's gone ahead and given it some context and provided an answer here. Obviously, this isn't formatted amazingly. This is just gone ahead and provided us with much information as it possibly could have. Obviously, this is where prompting comes in. So obviously we want to go ahead and prompt it to be more conversational, prompt it to be a bit more concise. And so one thing that we would add into our note section here is please keep your answers short and concise like a conversation between 2 people. Please keep your output to 2 to 3 or 1 to 2 sentences max. We can jump back out of that. We can jump back to the start of the conversation. And obviously, if you're familiar with prompting before, this is a very iterative process. This is something that you're going to have to continue to add to as you start to talk to the agent. And so here we can go ahead and just say, hi, I want to learn about your properties. That'll go ahead and throw itself into here. And then hopefully based on our notes, it's done that a little bit better. So great, we've got some wonderful residential properties available. And one of them is 123 Main Street. Once again, given we've asked about that property, it hasn't gone down the 123 Main Street path. I could just ask how many bedrooms. I'm gonna go ahead and say, give us an answer. Answered the question. It hasn't gone down the pathway, so that's perfect. We didn't want it to go down the pathway. They just had a couple of questions. So it's answered that right there. We can just say, I'm interested in purchasing. And then hopefully that will go down our particular pathway that we've set out for the particular property. And there you go. We can see it actually did that. It's highlighted red, obviously because we haven't connected it to anything else. And we can see here, that's wonderful. Since you're interested in purchasing, let me connect you with more detailed information. And that's obviously used that prompt that we've given it for that particular pathway to provide that response. And so the next step from here is adding some more conditional steps. So in this particular case, we might want to add a card. So we can go to the card section, add this here, and we can drag to our card. And right here, we can type 123 Main Street, maybe type a price. So price is 1.5 million. We can add in there. And then obviously the user's obviously going to get presented with all this information. We can then add a button. We can add like a purchase now, or we can add a secondary button here just to learn more, which might take them to a website or something like that. Given this will be on a website, And so I've also just gone ahead and searched up a picture of a house. I've just added this big house here to this image. And we can see here, we've obviously got some more context. So if we go ahead, jump into our agent, I'm just going to jump right into our actual agent module without the first message. So it is just going to generate a first message itself. We can go ahead and say, hi, I would like to buy 123 Main Street. Hopefully that registers our further interest in the property here. It's gone down the pathway and then we go. It's gone ahead and answered our question alongside provided us with the particular card here to purchase or learn more. And then obviously based on the conditions that happened here, we can either drag that back into the agent and then we can also continue that on to obviously add to this agent. So I've just gone ahead and changed a couple of these buttons here to make them a little more actionable for the particular chatbot that's a bit more relevant for an actual real estate sort of agent web page. I've added in contact John Smith, which is the agent, not an AI agent, but a real estate agent that's going to be contacted. So in one case, if somebody's interested in purchasing, they're on the website, they've been shown this particular property, they can go ahead and contact the agent to get more information about moving forward. So we can obviously use this as a conditional block to do that. And so a couple of different things that we can do. One could be sending an email. And so what we could do is use the dev block down here and use an API call and send this API call to some form of a Gmail module, send an email, and that could send an email to John Smith, the agent, to learn about the inquiry. Although what I would recommend in this case, if you were to do that, no need to create a conditional step. In that case, what we can do is just drag that all the way back to our agent block here. And what we can do is add in the API call as a particular tool within this particular agent for sending an email to the agent based on that particular property. And so that way it's a lot more conditional. It already knows their name, it knows what they're interested in, and it's all sort of summarized, and we can use those values within this block already. And so pretty much if we go ahead and obviously just walk through this conversation step right here, we get to the step where we've been given this card, we click the contact John Smith button, it's going to go back into our agent here and it's got complete context as to what you've just done. So perfect, I've initiated the process for someone from our team to reach out to you shortly for the next steps. And so perfect, if we went ahead and added the tool here in order to process that request, it would obviously be able to do that. And we're able to obviously, once again, really get the hang of understanding, having a single prompt, having a single set of instructions to guide the entire response of the agent, then using these pathways to get that level of conditional logic to then drive it back into our main agent to have complete context as to what's happening. So below this button, I've added another one that is just for viewing similar properties. So this might be great for somebody that's not quite sure as to what they're looking at. So what we can do is add in a carousel step. So we can click on the carousel right here. We can drag view similar properties right here. We could even add that if we wanted to. We can just add in more properties. So maybe 500 Main Street. So jumping back into this step, view similar properties, we can go ahead and move to our secondary block that I've just created here. And we can click through our carousel with a series of properties with the property address and information. Obviously you can add to this and make it very extensive. There's a very wide range of things that are capable of doing with this. You can be very creative as to what you're doing. And then once again, we can obviously go ahead and contact the different types of agents in this case. And we can pretty much just drag that context all the way back into our block for the agent here. One key tip to really streamline actually building on this and making it a little bit smoother is you don't have to drag this all the way back to this block right here. It gets a little bit confusing. What we can do is just drag it out here, actions, and we can do go to block, and we can just select within our workflow the particular block that we're using for the agent step. Our agent is on the new block 2. I would recommend going ahead and naming these blocks. Obviously I'm a little bit unorganized here, but we can just go ahead and just type real estate agent for the block there, and that'll update for this. And so now this block, once again, drag it out here, actions, go to block, select here, start workflow, real estate agent, and then we can just jump back. So these are going straight to the block, don't have that big long line across our screen, and they are going back into our agent. So this is using multiple blocks. It's very conditional in the sense of these aspects, although it does all wrap around back into our agent, making it still very fluid and still very agent-like. The next level of building on Voiceflow is going to be obviously communicating with external applications. So this is something that we can do obviously natively through Voiceflow with some of their dev tools, whether that's the API tool that we can use to communicate directly to endpoints to retrieve information and send information. This is something that we can use to communicate with external information. Although to give you the best understanding of how API calls work and function calls work from a really good perspective and how we can build automations that are triggered from these endpoints the best, I'm now going to jump into the next part of this video, which is make.com. I'll then briefly jump back into Voiceflow to show you how we can actually communicate and connect these two platforms together to create a really integrated and connected system. And just so you're not too confused, that might include sending emails. For example, contacting John Smith, we can send an email to John Smith to notify him of the interest. That could be retrieving property information from a website, a whole range of different things where we're looking at external applications and running automations outside of Voiceflow is what we're going to be covering in make.com next. All right, so welcome to the automation building part of this video. Right now, we're going to go ahead and learn about two different platforms. So we're going to go through make.com, and I'm going to run you through exactly how to build step-by-step automations that we can plug into our AI agents as essentially tools that you would have learned about at the start of the video. And I'm also going to run through building out very similar systems on a platform called N8N, which you may have heard of. And so we're going to be building these step-by-step automations, as well as these agents that are going to act as our tools as well. But I'll get to that later in the video and explain exactly what that is. But to get started, I am going to go through make.com first, and I'm going to go through looking back at our Voiceflow agent that we just built. I'm going to go through make.com and see how we can integrate the two together to give you some really good context as to the use cases for this specifically. So right here on my screen, this is make.com. So make.com, super easy domain name, just make.com, super easy to find it. Pretty much this right here is what we're going to be using to build our sort of step-by-step automations. You'll see here, automation, you can see flex and scale. You can start to see some of the ways in which we can build systems on make.com. And so it's kind of similar to Voiceflow in that we're getting access to a canvas. And on that canvas, we're connecting different nodes and modules together to essentially send information across different channels. So just scrolling down a bit, you'll see here, visualize a productive future with Make plus AI. So make.com does have some specific AI features as well, which I'll run through, but we're going to be diving into another platform, N8N, later as well. And I'll run through all the different reasons as to using one platform over another, what the benefits of using one platform is versus another. You're going to get the context of everything. So just scrolling down more here, there's just some use cases for when this has been used before. For the most part, one of the big benefits of make.com is the fact that this is essentially plugged into thousands of different apps. So if we scroll down here, we can see here that there are essentially connections into all of the popular apps that you'd be familiar with. So if I just go to the top of the page now and I click on what is Make and we go down to the apps, these are essentially all of the pre-built connections into all of your sort of top and popular apps. We've got access to LinkedIn, we've got access to HubSpot, Webflow for websites, we've got access to Canva, Typeform, Google Sheets, Gmail, Google Drive, Telegram, Airtable, Notion, Slack, Google Calendar. Every tool that you probably use is for the most part going to be connected into make.com. If you're familiar with Zapier, so make.com is very similar to Zapier in that we're just connecting our tools, we're stringing everything together. And this is a really powerful connection point specifically for AI agents to be able to use in its workflows. And I will also get to Zapier later in the video as well when we dive into MCPs. But don't worry about any of that. Just go ahead and sign up for make.com. This right here is the make.com sort of main interface. I've gone ahead and created a folder called YouTube demo where I'm going to create a series of automations specifically for this video. But pretty much what you're going to get access to is this big long tab of options here. You can go ahead and sign up for completely free in order to get started. And there's obviously going to be plans on their end to access more features, but for the most part, we can do everything on the free template. So once you've gone ahead and created an account, what we're going to do is go up to the top right here and click create a new scenario. Once we've done that, it's going to start to load us into the main canvas. And so this is going to be the main central area for building our automations. It's going to be on this canvas and we're going to be able to essentially do everything we want and anything we want with the thousands of apps right here. So you can just see it automatically pops up this little pop-up window. And if we just scroll, we can pretty much scroll for years of all the different apps that they have access to. Obviously, you can just use the search bar to find the different apps that you're currently using within your business, and you can pretty much just get access to all of them. And this is what we're going to be using to connect into our agents. We're going to give our agents access to these applications, and it's going to be very intelligent in its ability to understand how to use these integrations. And obviously, we're going to be able to build out a really connected system that's very integrated into everything that you do. So coming back to Voiceflow, I've gone ahead and mapped out 3 different use cases of automations that we could build and integrate into our Voiceflow chat agent here. And so obviously, as we just followed through with this tutorial, I went out and built out a very simple sort of real estate use case. It's a sort of receptionist system that you sort of talk to, get information about properties. It's going to be able to show carousel images. You can click buttons and move through these different properties. You can contact individuals at the company. And so this is a chat system in which is just very static. So it doesn't have access to any real tools. It doesn't have access to actually send emails. And this is one of the integrations that I'm going to go ahead and build. So I'm going to go ahead and build out an automation on make.com, which is going to give us access to sending real emails from our conversation. So we might want to contact John Smith. We can click this button. We might add an additional step to ask, what that type of information that you want to send is, and we can have that sent over to our make.com automation, and that can go ahead and send an email. So we're going to start there, and then I'm going to go thread and do a couple of additional automations as well. We're going to do a Google Sheet automation where we're going to start to store some information. So obviously, as we start to get new inquiries through the system where we're capturing name, email, phone number, all that type of information, we can send it to a Google Sheet as sort of like a mock CRM system. And then we can also do just a random one, get weather information. If somebody's interested in a particular property or a particular area, somebody can simply request to get some weather information. And we're going to go ahead and use our automation to retrieve that live information directly and also insert it back into the conversation to make it all fluent. So getting started in sending our email, what we're going to go ahead and do is jump back into make.com here. And what we're going to do is click into the webhooks. So the webhooks is pretty much one of the main ways of getting access to information from your workflows. Now, this isn't the only way, of course, but this is the way that we can get information essentially when we demand it. So the way that a webhook works is that we're essentially getting a URL, and this URL is going to essentially give us access to talk to our automation from any other application on the internet. So if I click into the webhooks section on make.com, you'll see 3 different options pop down when I click the webhooks button. You'll see custom mail hook, custom webhook, and a webhook response. So the custom webhook is what we're mainly going to be using, especially if we're connecting into some sort of an AI agent. This is going to be the main webhook to use. A mail hook is essentially the same thing as a webhook, although the way that we trigger a mail hook is through sending an email. And so you can send an email to a random address that is generated and then essentially triggers our workflow, which this can be useful later down the road if you're building email agents. You can build email AI agents using a mail hook, but otherwise we're just going to use the custom webhook. For this webhook response, this is something we will be using as well later in the video. Once I obviously build the automation, we are going to need a response back to send into our conversational agent to have the context as to what's just happened. So let's go ahead and click the custom webhook button. It's going to go ahead and populate that right there. And then what you'll see is choose a hook. So a hook is something that we need to automatically generate in order for our agent to get access to. So if we click the add button right here, it's going to do this. It's going to automatically create a name for our webhook. We can hit save, or we can give this a custom name. It doesn't matter. It's just for your own preference, your own naming convention. So I'll go ahead and just call this the Voiceflow agent. I'll go ahead and just type that like that. We'll hit the save button. This will populate just like that, and we can hit the copy address to clipboard button. So you'll see here, this giant URL has just populated right here. And this is our sort of webhook. This is what we're going to be communicating with in order to send information. So just make sure the copy address to clipboard is hit, and we'll just hit save. So now our canvas is started. We've got this block right here, our sort of bubble of the webhook. We can move around if we'd like. And in order to continue our automation, we just click the plus button right here, and that will allow us to continue to add modules. But coming back to our Voiceflow agent, there are 2 different ways that we can communicate with our make.com automation, and it comes down to essentially preference, and it just comes down to the structure of your agent and how you intend for the customer to interact with the system. So at the moment, we've essentially got the sort of first message, we're sort of capturing a reply that goes over to our sort of main agent, which is processing essentially its main sort of brain power, where we've got its role, its task, a series of properties, examples. This is where the main conversational element is coming from. And then we've got these sort of external steps that can jump out of the system. And then we can obviously just run through these sort of visual steps where we click contact and whatnot. So in our case, we're sending an email. What I'm going to go ahead and do is add an additional step in order to capture some information from the user that we're then going to use to go ahead and contact John Smith, who's the real estate agent for this particular property. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete this right here. We're then going to drag this down into a brand new step, which is going to be just a capture step. So we want to obviously capture the information from the user. But first, we do probably want to let the user know that we're looking for some information to send to John Smith. So I've just added in an agent message right here. I'm just going to go ahead and say, great, we can help with that. Please describe your inquiry in 2 to 3 sentences. So something super basic, pretty much just asking them to provide their inquiry, just as you would through any sort of form submission or something like that. Once that's been provided, what we can do is then trigger our automation from here. So we can drag this down, and then based on what they said, so we still need a capture step. Go over here, listen, capture. We can add the capture step just below this. We can add an entity to store that information, but otherwise we'll just capture the entire user reply into the last utterance variable as we did earlier at the first step. Once we've captured that information, we're going to jump into the dev part of the modules. And pretty much what we'll do is jump directly to API. So API is what we're going to be using to communicate with make.com. We're doing an API call in order to get that information. So once we've captured that, we can just drag this all the way to this block. It's now going to be populating and giving us all the necessary parameters to schedule up a request to make.com, pull it back in the conversation, and then just continue everything as we were. So now that we've done this, I'm going to jump back into make.com. What we're going to do now is just quickly make sure that this is once again copied. We're going to hit save. We're going to jump back to Voiceflow. And what we're going to be doing is a post request. So the way that these systems work is that we are doing multiple different types of requests to our endpoints. So at the moment, I'll just paste this URL right here. And what we're going to be doing is we are going to be sending information off to our automation. And because we're sending information, that means we have to use the post endpoint. So post is going to be posting information. That's how you can think of it. We obviously want to capture the user's inquiry, and we want to send that off to be emailed to a particular individual. And so we obviously want to have that information and context pulled through in our automation. If we weren't sending information, we're just retrieving information from an endpoint, let's say we're getting the weather information, for example, we could just use the get endpoint and that will just get the information without doing any sending. So we'll just click post right there, and I'll come back to this in just a minute. Jumping back into our make.com automation, we're going to go ahead and build out the main sort of chunk of automation in order to process this request. So one of the key things that we're going to be doing is obviously getting access to the Gmail module. So obviously you don't have to use a Gmail in order to send emails. We can also use Outlook if that's your preferred email provider, although at the moment we can also just use Gmail to send an email. So once you've searched up the Gmail module, you're going to be able to look through all the pre-created endpoints that Gmail has and is accessible through make.com. Now, typically when you're integrating with an application on make.com, usually all of the essentially APIs and endpoints that are available are not always stored on make.com. So in this case, we can send an email, we can get emails and do all this stuff. But as you start to build more complex automations, you might realize that make.com doesn't have every specific individual endpoint pre-created, and that what you can do is come all the way down to the bottom, click make an API call, and that is something you have to build custom. But otherwise, for the most part, that is something that is more advanced, and in order to send an email, it is quite simple. So I've gone ahead and added the send a email Gmail module to make.com, and you'll see here, this is what's just populated. So what I've gone ahead and done, you didn't just see that I just added my Google account to this. So pretty much what happens is as you add the module, it will prompt you to log in with your Google account. Obviously you need Google to send through Gmail, but you can see I've just gone ahead and added my email, and now it's all connected. Very simple. You can just use the sort of traditional login method, and then you'll pretty much get access to all of these features right here. And these are pretty much all the typical settings that you'd expect from just sending an email. We get access to this here. So one thing that I will do coming back to our agent is capture an email from the user. So what we want to do is obviously send an inquiry to John Smith to let him know that somebody has come through the system. They've got a particular inquiry about a property that they can reach back out to them and obviously hopefully close the sale with, but they need to know who to reach back out to. And so in this case, what we can do before we actually go ahead and send off that email, we can just ask them what their inquiry is about. Right after we've captured that, we can pretty much just jump into asking them about the email. So if we are going to be doing that, I would recommend not using the last utterance variable. I'd recommend just creating a custom one. I'll just call this the inquiry, and I'll go ahead and click create variable. So we're just saving the inquiry that they have into a variable called inquiry. So it's going to stay there. It's not going to change. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and create a brand new message. So talk message, drop that below there. We're going to ask them again, thank you. Can you please provide your email address? Right after that, we'll go ahead and obviously want to capture that information. What we can do is add an entity for an email. So one of the big things about Voiceflow is its ability to capture quite smart. So what we can do is either capture the entire user reply, although in some cases, somebody might provide an invalid email, but not provide a complete thing. We can add some conditioning for that. So I'm not going to go through too extensively how to condition every single response, although what we can do is click entities. We can click the plus button, click create an entity, and you'll see here data type. We can go down and click on email. So email of the entity data type just means that if the response that comes through doesn't look like an email, then it is essentially going to ask the user to just provide it again because it wasn't valid. And so it's a little bit of conditioning, makes the process a little bit smoother. You can see here there's a few more data types here for URLs, name, email, number, currencies, all these different types of specific values that are quite unique in their output that they've obviously created some presets for. It makes it quite easy. So we can just type email here, click create entity, and then we're just capturing an email right into that entity. So what we can do is drag that right after into our post request, and we can start to send all of our information from here. So once we've gone ahead and done that, we can jump into the body section of this API. So this is going to be the main area where we're going to be essentially storing information to be sent off to our automation. So in the body, this is essentially your area of inputting information. So pretty much what we can create are keys, and these keys respond to specific values sent out in our request. So if you're familiar with JSON code, essentially the way that information is structured in our API requests. And you'll see this just in a minute as to what this looks like. So go ahead and type out a key. So one thing will be inquiry. we can just type inquiry, but we can just type anything we want. So this is just a naming convention that we'll use, and you'll get a much better understanding once the information actually comes through on make.com as to where this is and how it's structured and why we need to type a key here. What we can do is just type the curly bracket and put in the inquiry entity that we're capturing right up here. Well, this is a variable in this case. Then what we can do is go back and add in another key, and this is just going to be our email. Doing this and then adding in the email entity as well, we can just type right there, and now that's going to be populated. So now we've got the email and the inquiry being sent through on our particular request here that will get sent off to make.com. So jumping back into our make automation here, I have just quickly run a test. Click run once. If we just disable or remove the link between our Gmail module, essentially what we can do is just isolate into just sending a webhook. So I've got these 2 bits of information here. I'm just going to hit the send button. What we can do is type in a fake email. So test@gmail.com, and then this is a test message. We'll go ahead and hit send, and we've come back to make.com. This has automatically just populated into here. So you can see we've just been able to communicate between Voiceflow and make.com just by sending that request right there. So that's been sent over. Information has now been received, and now these 2 platforms are connected to each other, and we can start to build out this automation. So coming back to our Gmail module, just wave it around and it'll automatically plug back into the webhook. And if you didn't see before, just right clicking and clicking unlink is how we can disconnect it to isolate and just run this module at its own. Otherwise, connect these back up together. What we can now do is jump into our Gmail module. Doing that test run is critical, and you do need to do that in order to populate the information into the Gmail module. If I click add recipient here, what we can do is click into this box, and you'll see that our webhook that we just ran is populating all of the keys. So the key value is this sort of naming convention that's being used here, and we can essentially use this to send our emails. So our email, recipient email address is going to be the email. Recipient name, we haven't captured that from our Voiceflow system, although we could if we would want to. It's not required in this case. And then we have a subject. So a subject is just going to be the top part of the email. So what we can do is use AI for that, and I'll jump into that in just a second. But if we just jump into the body content, this is going to be the main part of the email. So body content, and then text, this is going to be the main part of the message that gets sent. So we'll just put inquiry there. That's what's going to get sent. So one of the main things that I would recommend doing is essentially adding in a sort of a template for what this email will look like. So this is going to be sort of an internal email. This is not getting sent to the individual that put through that request on the Voiceflow chatbot. So what we can do is just add some sort of formatting to this. So in the case of this email, the recipient isn't actually going to be the email that was just filled out, because this is the individual who's just submitted the contact form. So we can actually just drag this back into the text down here. We can add a space, and what we can type is inquiry. So the user on our end, so John Smith in case. So John Smith in our case is the real estate agent, and he's going to be receiving this email. So I'm just going to type email address. And so now John Smith will get an email with the inquiry and the email address of the individual that inquired. So we can change this recipient email address just to my email for now. So I can go ahead and just prove that this thing actually works. And just for now, I'm going to go ahead and give this a sort of a test subject. So I'm just going to type in test right here, but I am going to come back into actually using AI to make this a little bit smarter for the end user, being John Smith, the real estate agent in this case. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit the save button. I'm going to go ahead and right click this, and this is going to allow us to run the individual module. So rather than obviously running through an entire chat with Voiceflow in order to test this, we can just test the individual module. So what we can do is just provide a test inquiry, and we can just provide email as a test as well. We can type test@test.com, but go ahead and click OK. This should send an email to myself with these details. So here we have it. This is my email inbox, and you can see here I've got the email of test, inquiry, test, email address, test@test.com. So that's come through perfectly as I would have expected it to come through. There we go. So that now works. What we can do is obviously swap out that email for whoever should be receiving that email. Otherwise, that is populating the information as it should. If we come back to Voiceflow, we can obviously chat with the system and get it to send that and just test it out once again. So what I can do is pretty much go down to the bottom and click on this sort of toggle here. This will essentially activate the system so it's running all the time. You want it to be able to obviously run whenever the response comes through. So we'll just click this back button right at the top left. We can hit save change, and now the system's live, making sure that this is turned on at the top here. We can come back to our Voiceflow system. We can go ahead and just click right here. So we can just jump into the inquiry capture process, and I could just type out a message. So please describe your inquiry in 2 to 3 sentences. Hi, I want to visit the property and learn more. Basic inquiry, but otherwise provide your email address. Now this doesn't matter because this is not getting sent to anybody individually. So this is just going to be for the recipient to process. That's going to go ahead and send the request. So we can come back to our Make.com automation. the conversation obviously ended in this case because we haven't linked it back to the main agent, which we can do quite easily. Otherwise, this process has just come through. I can click into here. Clicking here, you'll go ahead and see the webhook response. So email test@test.com. Hi, I want to visit the property and learn more. That's gone ahead and sent that information to myself using the Gmail module. And we can go ahead and see here that this email is exactly as we expected it. So hi, I want to visit the property and learn more. Email address test@test.com. So perfect, super simple to get that going. Really powerful though in terms of how we use it and communicate data. We can send emails at all different times. We can send information that's also been sort of AI generated to classify it quite a bit more intelligently. And so I'll jump into how to do that as well. So obviously in our case, the subject line for the email, we could do something basic and just type, new chatbot inquiry, and we can do something quite basic like that. We can make this a little bit more intelligent. And so what we can do is if I just move this module out here, what we can do is click the plus button down here. I'll just scroll down, we'll see OpenAI. So this is one of the most powerful modules within Make.com. It's great, pretty epic automations. So this particular module is probably the most used module on Make.com. And all it really does is that it just communicates with your AI model. So we can send a request to an AI model. It will process the request that we sent it, and it will generate an output based on that. And so very similar to how we use ChatGPT and talk to it back and forth. This is just doing a sort of a one-shot approach at generating a response based on a very large prompt that we give it, or just a very refined prompt that we give it. So jumping into the module here for OpenAI, you'll see there are quite a few different options here. We're not going to be messaging an assistant. We're not going to be doing a batch complete or anything like that. It might be a bit overwhelming as to how many different modules there are within here, but pretty much the create a completion is going to be one of the main modules that we're using. But for the most part, the create a completion module is going to be pretty much the most critical and the main one that you're probably going to be using in the majority of automation workflows. So we'll just add that in here. So clicking into this, I have already connected my OpenAI account to this, but what you will need to do is go to OpenAI and essentially create what's called an API key. So this right here is the OpenAI sort of developer platform. This is something that you can just sign up for an account with. You just sign up for an account on OpenAI or ChatGPT. All you need to do is just sort of click into your account and you'll see that there's an option for APIs or for developers. And pretty much once you've done that, you're going to land on this developer platform page. So all that you need to do is go up to the search button and just search for your API keys. Just type in API keys. That's going to take you to this page specifically for generating API keys to access OpenAI through the backend. Pretty much all you need to do is make sure that your credit card is connected to your OpenAI account, and that's in the billing section here. Very straightforward to do that. And then you can just generate an individual API key for specific projects. So you can just generate that there. You'll get a key, and there's a step-by-step tutorial that this will give you. So pretty simple to go through that. Once you click the add button here, it'll run through exactly how to do that. But once you've gone ahead and done that, you'll see that we can select a method. So we can obviously make sure just on the default, that's fine. We can click model here. We can pretty much just jump into the model selection. So there are a lot of different models. This might seem quite overwhelming as to which model to choose, but for very basic tasks, using either 4.0 or 4.1 from OpenAI is a very good choice. Obviously, if you want to learn more about these models, there's plenty of videos out there that talk about the benefits and disadvantages of different models. There is no one model, as I talked about at the start of the video. There's no one model that's best at everything. There's usually one model that's better at specific tasks versus others. Some models are quicker for conversational AI. Some models are slower and more expensive for a more intelligent and extensive sort of reasoning process. But for the most part, just click on 4.0. This will do more than enough for generating an email, more than powerful enough and cheap enough and quick enough. We'll just select that. And then below this, you'll see messages. We'll click add a message. What we do here is that we select the type of message that we're sending through. So in our case, there's really two main ways to send a message to the system. So that's either as a user, so as you sending a message to an AI model, asking it to do something. And then there's a system prompt, which is sort of tailoring the AI to act a certain way and to essentially respond back to those user questions. So very simply, just to demonstrate the purpose of using this module for the very simple task of sort of summarizing an email and generating sort of a subject line, I'll just click the user right here. And then we have text content. And so this is what we're going to use to sort of generate an email subject line using AI. So we can go ahead and start to write our prompt. I can type in the role as we typically use in our sort of structure template for AI. So I'll type in the role right here. You are an email subject line creator. You will review an inquiry and you will summarize this inquiry in 4 words to be used in a subject line. Then we'll add a subheading right here with 2 hashtags, and we're just going to type the inquiry. And then below this, we're just very simply going to paste the inquiry in there as well for it to get access to. So super basic. I am just demonstrating the purpose of using this module. So, whether or not this is the most useful activity for this, potentially not. A better use of this would be if somebody provides a big long inquiry, we can summarize that inquiry and essentially provide that as sort of additional context in the email to make it a bit quicker for somebody to review on the back end. But obviously many different ways that this can be approached. The AI module here really opens up a lot of possibilities for automation here. So I'm just going to jump back into this, make sure that this is saved, hit the save button. What we can now do is jump back into our Gmail module. What we can do is click back up to our subject line. You'll see here we have a few different options. Just see where it says choices, click a drop down tab right there. See where the message is. We're going to click the drop down once again, and you'll see the content. We just want to grab that content. A little bit hard to find for some reason. It's a little bit hidden in there. Just grab the content, take it out and put it in the subject line. And now that's going to populate perfectly. Obviously, we can now isolate the test, right click, run this module only, and we can just go ahead and type in a mock inquiry. So, hi, I was looking to have an in-person viewing at 123 Main Street. So we can just send through that inquiry, see what it generates. It should be pretty quick. There we go. Click on the choices, click +1, click message, and we'll see here content, viewing request, 123 Main Street. So perfect. 4 words, super strict. So there we have it. Viewing request, 123 Main Street. That's awesome. That's super concise. That will fit directly into our subject line, and that pretty much summarizes that really well. So that will then also get sent through on our email request. So there you go. Obviously, super basic 3-step automation right there. But hopefully you can start to see the purpose of this and how we can integrate this into AI agents, and obviously the ability and the scalability of a system like this to be able to give our agents some real power. Coming back to Voiceflow, we can just end this by dragging our end of request back into our agent here. Try not to do that. Back into our agent, and now it's going to be nice and fluent. We can send through that request, and then obviously as that gets processed and sent out, it's going to come back into conversation, and it's going to have complete context for what's just happened through that entire process. So that is now connected. We're now able to send emails. I'll just click on this and click on the green one. That's all done, and now we're going to jump into Google Sheet storing of information. So this next automation should be super simple. I'm going to tap into this process that we just went through here for capturing an inquiry and then sending that off in an email. I'm going to add an additional step to this. We're going to go ahead and not only send them an email, but we're going to store this inquiry into a Google Sheet. So this is what I'm using as sort of a mock CRM. Obviously, if you're using Salesforce, HubSpot, Pipedrive, Go High Level, list goes on, we can just as easily integrate into those platforms. But I'm just demonstrating the use case here using Google Sheet. It's just as easy to do all of those other platforms as it is on a Google Sheet. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, jump back into make.com. We can see our first email automation populated right here. Go up to the top and click create a new scenario once again. We're going to jump back into this canvas right here. Now we know to jump into the webhooks. We know that we're using the custom webhook. We now know that we can just go ahead and create a specific webhook name for our task. This is going to be for a sort of a spreadsheet automation, sort of spreadsheet voice flow. Super simple. Once again, doesn't matter what that name is, just for your own naming convention. Click copy address to clipboard. We'll hit save right there. Jump back to our Voiceflow agent. I'm going to add in a brand new API step for this particular task. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this step that goes back to our agent, as we do want it to immediately process our request for this make.com module. And then what we can do is drag that back up to here. Once again, as I demonstrated earlier, if it does start to get quite extensive in how we're dragging these modules, we can actually just drag this over to the side here, click on actions, go to block, and we can actually just send it to the specific real estate agent block. So we can just do that. And now that goes back up to there automatically. So it's a little bit more organized. So a good practice to get that going. Otherwise, making sure that we've gone ahead and copied that to our clipboard, click back into here and just paste that there. This is going to be a post request. Once again, we're sending information off to the system, and we'll go ahead and configure our body configuration in just a second. So I've gone ahead and created a brand new Google Sheet. So Google Sheets is, I haven't used it before, just like Excel. So pretty much we're going to go ahead and just store some information into this sheet so it can be reviewed later. Maybe someone else in the organization can have a look at those requests that have come through and respond to them in a different way. If you don't want to do an email, this is going to be a great alternative solution. So I've just gone ahead and created a blank spreadsheet within my Google account. Given that we've already connected our Google account to make.com, we can just go ahead and tap into that connection automatically. So creating a new module, seeing Google Sheets right here, click into there. What we're going to be doing is adding a row. So right at the top here, it's exactly what we need. We'll add a row, and my Google account is already connected as we just connected it earlier, and we go ahead and just fill these out. Before doing that, we do want to make sure that this has a name. So coming back to our spreadsheet, we can just name this whatever we want. In this case, I'm going to call this the make.com demo. So we'll just hit save there. Once you've done that and you come back to your make.com, you can click into here. And once you've clicked that button, it's going to go ahead and populate all of your spreadsheets within your Google account, and then just select the one that you just created and named in the previous sheet. Once you've done that, you'll see sheet name. So we'll just click this and we'll see sheet 1. Coming back to our spreadsheet, you'll see it says sheet 1 at the bottom here. here. So obviously you can create different sheets if you want to make it more advanced. Otherwise, we'll just use the initial sheet here. What we'll do is we'll come back to this right here. I'm going to go ahead and give it some column names. So we can add a date here. So this is going to be the particular time and date of the inquiry that just came through. So we'll type date. We can just type email and we can type inquiry. So super simple. It's just going to tell us exactly the main details that we want to know, who to email to, about what inquiry, and then just for our own information, when did that inquiry actually come through? And then just a couple of spreadsheet tips. If we want to make this a little more organized, we can just select all three of these headings right here. Click on this top paint bucket and just give that a black background. We can change the text color to white and we can give it a nice bold formatting for us to be able to see that more clearly. Coming back to our Make.com automation, we'll just hit the refresh button now that we've done that. You'll see that those columns now get populated with their corresponding names, and that's going to be super helpful to send our information into. Because we haven't tested our webhook, we don't have any information to populate in here. So we'll just go ahead and click the save button. We can go ahead and now run this module to test the webhook. I'll just go ahead and click unlink. We don't want to send any unnecessary information to our Google Sheets module. Go down to the bottom here, click this toggle right here. It needs to be saved. We'll click top left, hit the save button, go ahead and turn it on so it runs at any point when a request is made. We'll jump back into here, hit the run once button. It's now going to be waiting for us to send a request. Coming back to our real estate agent, we've just got to go ahead and set up the body parameters for our particular bits of information. This is going to be exactly the same as what we just did on the previous block. All we need to do is click into here, click into the body. We can create the couple of keys that we needed. So we'll just type email once again, add the entity, click add another. I'll then type inquiry, and then we'll also add the variable for the inquiry that will get populated into that. And that's pretty much ready to go. We can go down to the send button at the bottom here. So we'll just click send. It's going to populate this variable setting process just for the test. We'll type test, and then we'll just type test. For the purpose of this, we'll just type test at test.com. We'll hit send. Coming back to here, information just populates immediately. Connect to the Google Sheets module, click into Google Sheets, scroll down a bit. Email is the email, inquiry is the inquiry, super basic stuff. And then we have the date. So setting up the date on Make.com can be a little bit tricky in terms of formatting it for the right time zone and the right structure of the date. But what we can do is just click into the date here. What we can type is now. And so now is a preset variable within Make.com for getting the exact date and time that it is at the moment that it's requested to get that information. So it's going to get the current date and time as it says right there. And what we can do is just delete this and type format date. So format date is going to allow us to really control exactly what kind of date we want it to output. So by default, the now step will output the date and time within your current time zone that your account has been set to. So whatever your account's time zone is, that's the time zone it's going to use. We can control that as well by using some more functions, but it's also going to output the date and time in sort of more universal format. So if I actually go ahead and just delete that just to showcase what I mean, I'm just going to put the now step right there. I'll hit save, right click into Google Sheets. I'll put my email in there and I'll just type test. I'll hit OK. Hopefully the information has now populated here, and here we go. So we can see here, it's gone ahead and added in the date. It's gone ahead and added the year. It's gone ahead the month. It's added the time, although this time is not exactly my time zone. This is like a universal time zone that it's gone ahead and added in here. One thing we also can do is just select all of this and reformat this to be more appropriate. We just do that, and all of the requests from here will be better formatted. So what we can do is jump back into our automation. We can jump into the Google Sheets module. We can just add the format date function as I just talked about. We can drag the now into here. Oh, sometimes it might delete itself. Drag it back in again right here. We can add that in right there. And what we can do is format the date to output however we want. So pretty much if we hover over the format date right here, we're gonna get a few different options as to how we can output a date. So if I just see here, we can just output the month, the day, the year. So that's usually perfect. Otherwise we can do it with the hours and the minutes and whatever structure that we want, and time zones as well, configure to do. But otherwise, I'm just gonna do the exact same way that's being done there. So we can just type in exactly how we want it to output. So in my case, I'm gonna do it by the Australian structure. So that's gonna be the day, the month, and then that's going to be the year. So just making sure it's structured just like this. Very simply, that's exactly how it's going to output. So we'll just hit save right there. We'll hit run this module, put in my email, type test, and you'll see it populate right here with the date, the day, the month, and the year more appropriately formatted than this. And then we go. So there we have it. Super simple for that particular automation and just sending into Google Sheets. Obviously, we can take this a lot further and do a lot more with it. We can add in the ChatGPT step and completion step to summarize the email and provide an AI summary. Obviously, if you want to take this even further, we can start to build out a qualification system, which we'll actually cover later in the video with a different set of platform, which will actually cover later in the video, building out a qualification system to look at a response that's come in from sort of like a website lead or a chatbot lead and assess if that individual is qualified to move down the pipeline. Should somebody have a meeting with this individual, depending on whether or not they're qualified. And that is something that we can do with AI. It's a pretty awesome system, something that we use all the time, although more extensive. And once again, It's going to be covered later in the video. So there we have it. It is now ready to go. It can send an email. It can then store that information within a Google Sheet for somebody to review later, all set up, and then reverts back into the real estate agent. So it's a completely seamless conversation. But at any point, somebody can just talk to the system, and it's very fluent and dynamic in that sense by using that agent module. So we can go ahead and tick this off as well as being completed. All right, so for the last part of our Mate.com integration, we're going to go ahead and set up an automation to get some weather information. I'm going to do this a little bit differently than how we've done it down here using individual separate API calls. I'm just going to integrate this natively into our agent. So this is going to be something that can be called upon at any point during the conversation. If anybody wants weather information about anywhere in the world, about a particular property as to where it's located, we can retrieve that information. So I can go ahead and go to the tool section at the top here within this main agent section and click the API section, and we can create an API tool to be used within this conversation. And so the big difference between obviously using a separate automation down here versus using it up here is that it's really about restricting access to particular automations and information. So obviously in this case, we only wanted to run these automations if somebody was able to provide us with their email, able to provide us with their inquiry, then we can go ahead and send this information. So it made sense to structure it in the way that not everyone can get access to those particular endpoints, but then also bring that back into the agent so it's quite dynamic and fluid. And then we can obviously retain the conversation to continue from there. But also, once again, you can build this however you want. You could also just integrate both of these API calls directly into this system and then just prompt it to essentially ask these questions and then prompt it to trigger this and then trigger this after running this automation. So a few different ways that you can do this. Additionally, if we come back into make.com, we could have even integrated both of these automations together. So we can have the email automation send out. We can add the Google Sheets module directly after the email module. So that way we don't have two individual automations and two API calls. We just got one automation that does everything. So there are a few different ways that we can structure, and this is something that you have to sort of think about when you're looking at your sort of design and infrastructure or the technical side of it. But otherwise, that should do the job for now. So jumping back into our agent, we're gonna go ahead and click on the API button right here. What we're creating is an API tool. This is just gonna look exactly the same as what we looked at previously with our individual sort of API requests, looking very similar here with how we're gonna be doing this request. We'll jump back to make.com. We'll click create a brand new scenario and just follow through with the exact same process. We're gonna be creating that webhook as we did previously. This is once again, one of the most common things that you're gonna be doing on make.com. We'll create this and just call this the weather API. Hit the save button, copy this address to clipboard, jump back to Voiceflow, make it a post request, add the automation right into here. We can then jump down to the body section. So once again, adding in a key. In this case, we want the sort of location of where the weather is going to be retrieved from. So what we can do is go ahead and add a variable specifically for the location. Now, the way that this is going to work, because we're natively integrating this into the agent, we're not waiting for a user reply to essentially directly tell us exactly what the location is going to be for the weather information. We're going to set up a custom variable in which is populated by AI. The conversation is going to go on as normal. Somebody's just going to randomly say, hey, could you actually tell me what the weather is within Los Angeles? And the AI is going to pick up on that and then use that in order to work with this automation. So we'll go ahead and add location as our variable right here. So that's just going to populate automatically with AI, like I just said. Once that's done, we can pretty much just pop out of this by clicking the X button, and we're going to get this page right here. So this is where we can pretty much configure when and how this particular tool is going to be functioned directly by essentially prompting it to do so. So it doesn't have a name. We can just jump back into here, top left, and we can just provide this with weather lookup. So just name it appropriately for what the action is going to be. It's going to use AI to determine that. Below this, we have LLM description. So that's our large language model. So this is an AI prompt. We can provide it with a description for exactly when it should be running this particular instance. And if we see down here, input variable settings, we can actually click on this and give our variable, like I just said, pretty much a prompt in order to populate the information that's going to be used within that variable. So we'll just come back to the LLM description here. And very simply, we're just going to type trigger this when the user would like to get some weather information. Super simple, but should be effective for now. And then below this, input variable settings, we can jump into here. Default value, we can keep that as blank as it's just going to use the information that's been provided already. LLM description, describe this variable so LLM knows how to fill it with data collected from the user. This is the specific location where the user would like the weather information from. Super basic, should do the job at the moment. Jump back out of that. So that should be automatically populating. This is going to be automatically triggering. AI is going to do the majority of the job here. So we get that now that that's connected. You can see up here it's connected. We can jump back out of this. We can pretty much jump into talking with our agent. So I'll just click in our sort of agent step here, and we can just see if this can actually trigger our sort of webhook here. Once again, just making sure that this system is saved and then making sure it's turned on so we can accept webhook requests from our agent. We'll hit run once so we can actually listen into it. And I'm just going to type, hi, I would like to know the weather for Los Angeles So we'll send that through, and that should go ahead and pretty much just populate this right here, and perfect. Location, Los Angeles. And that's exactly what we typed out within our agent. So at the moment, it didn't actually get any information because our webhook isn't set up to do anything at the moment. So it didn't work. But if we jump back here, the AI populated that perfectly. So what we can do now is jump into make.com and just add in the weather module. Super basic. They've got a really nice get weather module. So if I just click on this, I want to enter a location by cities or coordinates, city, London, UK. So I can just type into here and just type Los Angeles. We can hit save. This uses just a search function, so it doesn't have to be anything too particular. We can just type Los Angeles, hit the OK button, and that's just going to pull back all the weather information from this particular location. So we can see here, that's obviously pulled back this information. It's clear weather. This is the time. This is air humidity, temperature, whatever. And that's pulled it back exactly from Los Angeles. So the next step and the final step for this particular automation is going to be our webhook response. So as I talked about earlier, there is a third option in our webhook options, and that's a webhook response. And this is going to be used when we want to send information back to our agent. And this is going to be used quite commonly if you are going to be wanting to get information from some external application. In this case, the weather. So we hit webhook response. What we're going to be able to do now is essentially insert the weather information into our body to send into our agent to have context as to what the weather is. So what I can do, if we just want to get the temperature, we can just type quotations right there. So we can send that information to in the right format, and we can just drag temperature into here. Once we've done that, that's perfect. That'll go ahead and just send that information back to our agent. So that's been populated there. We'll just make sure that that is saved. And what we can do is we can just turn this on so we can have a look through each step-by-step module, jump back into here. What we can do is go ahead and say, hi, what is the weather in Melbourne, Australia right now? Send that through. It should hit our automation to trigger that particular module. And it seems like we've actually just hit an error here when trying to get the weather information. So it went ahead and sent through the city as Melbourne, Australia. Seems like because we didn't just send the city information, it's caused a little bit of an issue by adding the country of Australia here as well. But just jump back into this. That just means we have to make a little bit of a modification to the information that we're sending through in our API request. So this variable here, this is the specific location where the user would like the weather from. Please ensure you only send the name of the city, not the name of the country. So that should add a little bit of conditioning so that can solve that issue in the future. Obviously, as you start to test this system, you're likely going to want to expand upon that prompt to capture a lot more of the edge cases like that in order to obviously have the system work as smoothly as possible. But just for the purpose of demonstrating the tech, obviously here, we'll just hit run once again, get the system up and running, go ahead and just talk to it with that new LLM prompt added in. And I'm just going to say, hi, I would like to know the weather in Melbourne, Australia. So hopefully it removes Australia from its input into the automation. And we can see here, perfect. That's done exactly what it should have. If I click into this, Melbourne is the only location that was sent through. So it took the city, removed the country, perfect. That then went ahead and worked with our system here. That's gone ahead and then sent it to our webhook. So we can see here coming back into Voiceflow, the current temperature in Melbourne is 22 degrees. Is there anything else I can help you with? Now that is actually not correct. I am myself in Melbourne and it's definitely not 22 degrees Celsius outside at the moment. So it seems like that didn't actually work the way that I wanted it to. So we'll jump back into this. I have just ran some tests and it seems like there's actually a place in California named Melbourne for the city. And so in order to actually fix this, we're just going to add in a bit of conditioning to abbreviate the country. So what we can do in order to make this work, we can actually type Melbourne and type AU for the country. We can just type this and that's going to go ahead and get the accurate temperature of 13 degrees. So we do need the country to be abbreviated in its request. So once again, further prompt conditioning, this is something that you're going to just do naturally as you start to send these requests and get these errors, you'll just add to it. So I'll modify this to say, please ensure you only send the name of the city and when sending, and you must always send the country as the abbreviated country code. So in the case of Australia, it would be AU. But otherwise, you can see the purpose of this system. We're able to add an API call directly into our agent. It's able to send information, retrieve information live on that conversation as well, and just retain the conversation in here, whether that's getting weather information or something different. That is something that we can quite easily do by using a make.com automation. And I have demonstrated quite simple use cases where we're taking a webhook response and sending to one or two modules. But obviously in make.com, we can build it out to be far more extensive. We can build out very large flows with a lot of different conditioning to do a whole bunch of different things. And obviously, if you want to learn how to do that, there are more extensive make.com tutorials out there that I would 100% recommend you going through in order to get up to speed as to being a pro in building a make.com. For example, here is a make.com automation for a booking template that I'm going to visit later in the video when we start to look into voice agents. This is an automation that allows a particular AI voice agent to book appointments and cancel them and reschedule them, do quite a few different things when it comes to the sort of calendar system. And so this is an automation It covers a lot of the main areas and flows that you'd want to cover with an appointment booking system. And this is just a good example of an automation that is a bit more extensive, not just 3 modules, but obviously quite a few different modules, a few different pathways, all reaching multiple different objectives. So this is something that we're going to be covering later in the video. So that's it for Make.com. I hope you have a good understanding of the basics as to what Make.com is, what we can build with Make.com, and how we can start to integrate that with our AI agents to create a really comprehensive and intelligent system. So next, I'm going to be diving into N8N, and this is a separate automation platform that it sort of rivals Make.com in many areas, although it's quite different in a lot of areas as well. And so the big difference when using N8N is that we're not just building out a static set of automations. N8N has become really popular and is really known for its AI agent module, which I'm going to cover in just a minute as well. And that allows us to essentially speak with many different platforms, exactly how we've just set up our Make.com automations, although it's going to be a lot more dynamic. We're going to be essentially building out an agent that controls all of our automations. And so this sounds great, it's super dynamic, although there are instances where you definitely want to use Make.com, and there are instances where using N8N could be quite a smart and intelligent move. All right, so jumping into the second part of our automation / tool building section, we're going to be jumping into N8N. So N8N is very similar and is definitely sort of a competitor to Make.com in terms of automation building. So what I'll showcase is building exactly what I just built on Make.com, but I'm going to go ahead and build it on N8N instead. And one of the big reasons why I'm going to be showcasing both Make.com and N8N is mainly to do with the AI features of N8N. And this is what's really blown N8N up recently. It's their AI agent module, which allows us to essentially use sort of this intermediary AI agent that has access to all of our tools that we can connect to other AI agents. We sort of have a multi-AI agent system working together, and it can be really beneficial for certain tasks. So this right here is N8N. I'm going to scroll through their homepage and you're going to get a bit of an understanding as to what their platform does, how it is very similar to Make.com and different in other ways as well. So we can see here, flexible AI workflow automation for technical teams, build with the precision of code or the speed of drag and drop. So this is a no-code tool. We are able to do drag and drop, connecting nodes together, although it does have the ability to do code and that as well. So quickly scrolling down, we can see some use cases here. It sort of looks similar to Make.com in that we have our sort of modules and nodes that we drag together, although it can be a bit more advanced in the AI agent step, which you can see right here, which is going to be one of the main things that I'm going to be showcasing. So we can see some other use cases here. In this case, it's not using the AI agent module. This is very similar to sort of a Make.com automation where it's just step-by-step processing some data. So that's pretty much exactly what you can do on Make.com anyways. And there's some more use cases here where we're using the AI agent module. We can see we've got a lot of control over how that works, and I'll be covering everything like that about this in just a minute. And we can just see some other use cases here as well. Google Sheets integration. So that's exactly something that we can do just as we are able to on Make.com. And there's obviously some more info on here. Scrolling down further, we can see they have native integrations, just like Make.com as well. So we can see here, plug AI and your data into over 500 integrations. Now, one thing to note is that N8N, they don't have as many integrations as Make.com does. So it's more likely that some of the more niche and unique platforms or CRMs that you're working with will probably be more likely to be available on Make.com than N8N. Although overall, that doesn't matter if you are familiar on being able to do a custom integration. And most likely this has all the popular tools anyway here on N8N. So you're probably not going to be missing out on too much for the most part if you're going to be doing more of a basic build. Otherwise, you can have a look through this website yourself and just see some of the use cases and some of the capabilities of using N8N. So jumping into N8N, I've gone ahead and created a brand new workflow on N8N, and this is the page that I've landed on right here. So very similar to Voiceflow and Make.com. This is once again another sort of no-code drag and drop tool that is on a canvas that we can sort of drag around, move around. It's very similar in the nature of exactly how we've been using those other tools. So coming back to Make.com, here are the 3 automations that I previously just built out and connected to our Voiceflow agent. And what I want to do on N8N is essentially take these 3 automations. So we've got our email automation, our Google Sheets automation, and the weather automation. I want to take all 3 of these automations and plug them into N8N and essentially just see how it differs to build on N8N versus Make.com. And hopefully once you see the automation on N8N and the way that I build it there, you're gonna get a pretty good idea as to why you would wanna use N8N for some particular automations versus these more conditional automations on Make.com. So to get started on N8N, it's actually very similar to Make.com. Jumping into our first module, what we're gonna go ahead and do is click on the on webhook call. So this is going to allow us to communicate to our project exactly the same as how we were able to do so on make.com. So the process is literally exactly the same. We're just sending a request to this webhook to go ahead and process information and data later on in the flow. Just for the purpose of testing, I am actually going to delete this and swap this over to a chat node. And the chat node is actually going to allow us to just trigger the automation right here in this flow by just sending a couple of messages, and that will just save the loop. So this is one benefit of n8n. They have this sort of chat module. So I can click chat at the bottom now, and it's going to give us sort of like a chatbot to talk to. And I can just say hello. And this is going to get sent through the system and then obviously processed like it would, like any request would. So that just helps with testing. Otherwise, pretty helpful. We're going to jump into the next part of our automation. And what we're going to use is the advanced AI agent step. And so this is, and you can see a lot more. And so the first module that we're going to jump into is the advanced AI. And then we're going to jump into the AI agent. And you can see here, there are quite a few options for building AI agents, retrieving information from knowledge bases, sentiment analysis, or a lot of large language model tools to classify text and do all of that stuff. There's quite a few AI tools, and this is really one of the big benefits of n8n. So make.com has been around quite a bit longer, and so they actually haven't been as quick to adopt a lot of these new and specific AI features. And so if you are looking to do more complex AI tasks, like searching more complex data or more lengthy data, you're going to get a lot more control over that with n8n. But anyways, jumping into one of the main parts of this particular automation build, if we grab this AI agent step right here, just by clicking on it, what we're going to get is an AI agent that's really going to be used to control everything that's happening within the workflow. So rather than sending one request to our email automation here to process what we're looking at, to process the inquiry from the user and then email that to someone on our team, in one particular automation on n8n, we can essentially just add the Gmail tool, and that's all we'll need to add. And it will essentially process what needs to happen with that tool just by its own thinking. So essentially, rather than conditionally setting up all of the different flows and different scenarios that we did on make.com, we're just going to prompt it. We're just going to tell it what we want it to do. And it's going to be pretty intelligent in understanding what to use and when to use it. So once we've got our AI agent module on the canvas here, you'll see chat model. And this is essentially which AI model, which large language model do we want to connect into our agent. And you can see here, we actually get a pretty solid list of different providers that we can choose from. This is awesome. So we can obviously use all different types of models if you are familiar with some of the other models. So if we're doing quite long context work, usually some of the Gemini models are quite good for longer context. Same with some of the Anthropic Claude models. They are great for longer context. They've just got some good models for that. But if we are just doing some basic tasks and we want it to keep it as simple as possible, we can just use the OpenAI models as well. So I've gone ahead and clicked on the OpenAI model, and that's gone ahead and attached it to my AI agent here. And you can see we can sort of drag it around and it's connected directly into our AI agent. So it's linked and it's going to be referencing this in order to process its requests. And we double click into our chat module here. I've gone ahead and connected my OpenAI account. This is exactly the same process as we did earlier on make.com. We have to go and sign up for an OpenAI account, get our API key, and then just add that into here. Super simple, works exactly the same as make.com. And then we get access to a whole host and range of all the different OpenAI models. So we can go ahead and just choose what's best for our task. As always, GPT-4o is a pretty quick, reliable, and more than intelligent enough model to process very basic tasks. Obviously, if you're looking to do more complex tasks, you can move towards a model like GPT 4.1, or you can get really complex and expensive by using some of the O models, which are their reasoning models. So O3 would be quite a good model, although it would be quite expensive, take a lot of time, and might not be the best for simple tasks. So 4o, we'll go ahead and use this. And then we can exit out of that. That's pretty much done for setting up our model. You'll see two more steps here, memory and tool. So memory is giving it context for the chat. So if we're going to be chatting with this system, we're going to be talking to it back and forth. In most cases, memory is going to be very important for a conversational agent. In our case, we're not building a conversational agent. We're just using this in order to process a single request and determine which tool that we're going to be using. So we don't need to use memory, although if you would like to use memory, just clicking into this and using their own window buffer memory, pretty much you just plug and play, click on it, and we're going to be able to just essentially uses its own session memory from the tasks that it's running and just stores it itself. Using that, so pretty simple to just add that in there. Otherwise, if we're just going to be using tools, I wouldn't worry about it too much. The next connection here is the tools module, and this is obviously going to be one of the most powerful things that you can do with your AI agent, and this is where we're going to get access to those hundreds and hundreds of different applications that they've allowed and enabled to be used on n8n. So that could be Salesforce, for example, that could be Gmail, that could be your Google Sheets, all of these different Google products you can see here, Google Chat, Google Docs, all of those products are coming through. through here. If you want to connect to HubSpot, Zoho, all of these different CRMs and whatnot, all of that's going to be available. You can obviously scroll down here as well and just see the big long list of public tools that have been enabled and directly connected into n8n for you to use. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and use some of the tools that we use over here. So I'm going to use Gmail, Google Sheets, and see if we can also use some form of a weather tool. We can see here a weather tool as well that we can connect into. And we're going to go ahead and build a very dynamic agent that's going to have access to all of these tools. And it's just going to use whatever it needs based on the request. But before I do that, I'm going to run through the AI agent block here. So we can obviously click into this as well. And this is going to go ahead and allow us to prompt our AI agent. So we can go ahead and prompt it to use all of those tools, when to use them, why to use them, how to use them. All of that is going to be prompted here. And so this is going to be a very critical part of this sort of intermediary AI agent, because we're going to have our main AI agent, in our case, that Voiceflow chatbot that we just built previously. And it's going to be able to leverage this n8n agent as sort of its friend that it's talking to, that has access to all of the tools. It's going to send the request, delegate that task, and then it's going to have access to all those other tools to use whenever it thinks it's necessary, and then send that request back to our main agent. So in order to prompt our agent here, what we can do is see here for the source prompt. So source for prompt, user message. We want to change this from the chat trigger note to define below. We want to define the prompt. It's not going to be defined by just a single message that gets provided. So we can type our entire system prompt right here. And this is going to be our central prompt that just controls whatever is going to be ran in this function. So like we mapped out earlier, this is going to use our typical prompting convention. So we can go ahead and add in our role. So we can add in a role. We can add in our task as well. Given that this is not a conversational agent, this is just a singular agent used to run requests at a time. It doesn't have to be as extensive as a conversational agent prompt, but we can give it obviously the generalized instructions to do what we want. We could also go ahead and just expand this text right here by clicking in the sort of expand button in the bottom right, and we can go ahead and just put our prompt in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, you are an AI agent that will assist in running a series of tools that have been provided to you. You will decide which tools are used for different types of requests. So for our role, you are an AI agent that will assist in running a series of tools that have been provided to you. You will decide which tools are used for different types of requests. So perfect, that's pretty basic, but obviously enough for now. And the main chunk of this is going to come in the task section, where I'm going to lay out each individual tool that we have and when each tool should be ran. So I'll jump out of this and start to add some of our tools so we can get a little bit more context for the agent to work with. So what we're going to do, jumping back to make.com, we want to build our email automation. So coming back to our tools here, clicking our tool, I'm just going to type for Gmail. See here, they've also got a Gmail tool, exactly the same as make.com does. And we can pretty much just map this out exactly like we did on Make. Obviously, once again, you do need to make sure that your Google account is connected. As you can see here, I've already done that. Pretty much you just hit the create new credential. You can just log in via your normal login method and it connects very easily. Now, one big thing about make.com, which is what's actually a small thing, but it makes a big difference. And it's the fact that we can use this AI parameter defining. So that just means this box here, rather than us manually typing in or using a variable to populate the field, we can just let AI do it. And so it's a little bit lazy in some cases, although in some areas it can be very beneficial. So what we can do is just click this button, and rather than us needing to set a variable to define who an email is going to be sent to, it's just going to do it automatically. And so that can be very helpful for our subject. So in the previous automation on make.com, we actually built out an entire automation module to this ChatGPT module with its own dedicated prompt to generate a subject. And in this case, we just click the button and it's going to define it automatically. And this can be exactly the same for the actual email message as well. Just let the AI define it and that's automatically done. So we haven't had to build out this whole secondary module to do that. We can just click that button and we can still prompt what's actually going to be inserted as well. See here underneath this says add a description. And this is sort of like a prompt that's going to be used to understand what exactly should be populated here. So for our particular automation, we're actually not going to be using AI to populate who to send the email to, because this is going to be going to the office in our case. So in this, I'm just going to put my own email in this instance because the email is going to get sent to myself, although the rest of the email is going to be sort of AI generated. So for the subject line, we can pretty much just say, please write a short subject line that summarizes the user's inquiry. So as we did previously on make.com, we sort of used that AI step to write a very short subject line that sort of summarized their inquiry. So when myself or a team member is looking at new email inquiries that are coming through, you can sort of quickly see what they're referring to within the subject line. So that's a pretty big benefit, and we can just type it out in a very short prompt right here. And then at the bottom, we have the message. So defined automatically by the model, we'll add a description, and this is just going to be the actual email content. So in our case, back on make.com, we added in the inquiry email. So who's inquiring and what was their email. And then and the actual inquiry. So we can just pretty much just prompt this, please add the email of the user who was inquiring, and please provide their complete inquiry, and also add a second summary of their inquiry. So I've just prompted it, please add the email of the user who was inquiring and please provide their complete inquiry, and also add a second summary of their inquiry. So pretty much it's going to give us their email on who to contact. It's going to give us their full inquiry that just came through. It's also going to summarize it as well. So a little bit more that we're adding to it because we can do so quite easily just by defining it with AI. So there we go. It's all done. We've configured our Gmail module. It's connected to our agent. And now as soon as we prompt our agent to let it know that this Gmail module is attached, it's going to be able to run it when necessary. Now, one big thing, we can also set the tool description to give it a bit more context when to run. This is a bit more of an advanced feature if you're using tool functions that aren't very clear on when to run them. Otherwise, it just gets set automatically. So just leave it there if you're doing something as basic as sending an email. But obviously, a lot of little things that come with building on these types of tools, and you just got to play around with it and learn all these things to get better and better at it. So the next tool that I'm going to jump into will be the Google Sheet tool. So I can just type Google Sheet, super simple, drop that in there. It's already connected to my account. Once again, super simple to do that, exactly the same as make.com. So just jumping down to the document section, we can just select the exact Google Sheet document that we're referring to. In this case, the make.com demo is what I just used previously. And then sheet will just be the automatically generated sheet one. So what we can do, jumping back into my sheet here, we'll see that we've got 3 different columns that we were using for the date, the email, and the inquiry from the chat system. We can just plug directly into this. So if we jump into N8N, click on add a filter, this is where it's going to populate those columns. So now we can see column, date, and we can pretty much just populate this with AI, add another filter, select the email, populate that with AI as well. We can give it a description so it knows that this is the email of the person who just inquired. Then we can add our final filter, which is going to be their inquiry. And we can obviously use AI and then just give it a prompt. So this is the inquiry of the user. Please summarize this in 2 to 3 sentences. So we've added in all 3 of those columns there, added in the person of the email, added in the inquiry, prompted it to summarize it in 2 to 3 sentences. And there we go. It's now got access to that tool and it's going to use it when it thinks it needs it. So let's go ahead and actually start to test this system and see how we can communicate with Gmail and Google Sheets just from sending a request to this individual agent here. So obviously we do need to finalize our prompt so it has access to exactly the tools that we're going to be referring to. So the task, we're just going to define it right under the task section here. So your task is to look at the inquiry that has just come through and decide which of the tools you will use. You have access to the following tools. So for the task, your task is to look at the inquiry that has just come through and send the information to the following tools. You have access to the following tools, which added in Gmail, sending emails to the sales team to notify of new inquiries, and Google Sheets for storing new inquiry details. So once again, super basic, nothing too complex that we're doing here. We're really betting on those additional prompts that we've added into the modules below here. So both of these modules have their own prompting to obviously decide what variables and values are going to be stored within those requests. So coming back to make.com, I'm going to go ahead and replace our make.com function here with our N8N function. So before I jump into Voiceflow and connect it via the webhook, I'm just going to go ahead and test it using the N8N chat feature right here. And I'm just going to send it in an inquiry and we're just going to see what happens. All right, so I did just try to run the system, although it did fail. And that's because I actually had the Google Sheets module set up a little bit wrong. I hadn't swapped over a particular operation of what we were doing to create a new row. It was by default set to one of these other ones. Do just make sure to change this to be creating a new row, because that's what we're obviously intending to do here. Once that's done, good to go. And I've just gone ahead and used the AI to select onto all these columns that we're going to be using. Once you've done that, it'll start to work. Once the chat module is connected, I'm just going to go ahead and type out sort of a fake inquiry. So our new inquiry name is John Smith, email is john@smith.com, and message, hi, I'd like to buy 123 Main Street. We'll send that through the system. It's going to process through the agent and hopefully connect to both our Gmail module and our Google Sheets module and essentially just do what it needs to based on the prompt that we've given it. We can see here the inquiry has been successfully recorded in Google Sheets and an email notification has been sent. So we jump to make.com. Awesome. We see this populated right here with the email and the inquiry. And we will see here that the date is actually wrong. So not the best to use the AI to determine what the actual day is. So that is one thing that we will have to modify, although we can see here that this has obviously worked perfectly. And we can see here that I have just received this email specifically from N8N as as it says here, this email was sent automatically with NA to N. Right here, new inquiry from John Smith, and then some more details here. Now, there's going to be some more prompting involved to make this a little bit nicer. So obviously the AI has just written this entirely itself. So one thing that we can do is jump into here, and we can pretty much just tell this to write this in HTML format. So please format your emails in a HTML format so it's readable by the user. And coming back to our Google Sheets node right here, I am just going to remove using AI to determine the date, as that didn't come through from our chat request. If we are talking through it through the chatbot and Voiceflow, potentially that might send through a date. Otherwise, we can just do what we did on make.com, add in a variable by putting in 2 brackets there. If we click on the now, that's going to add in the actual relevant date and time. So this is going to be obviously a set variable, just going to send through the date and time. And that's obviously not going to be using AI at all to determine that. But otherwise, hopefully you can now see the point and the difference of using a system like this, where we have a main system prompt which controls all of the tools that are connected to it, and how that differs to building out these systems separately on make.com, which are triggered conditionally from our main agent. So it's a little bit of a different setup. In some cases, the output and the result is going to be exactly the same. So in this case, we're going to get the same result. Somebody requests for something to happen. It's going to happen no matter what. If you do make.com or you do n@n, it's really good to just understand the architecture difference between this setup versus the other setup. In some cases, this can be super scalable for more complex tasks. For example, if you wanted to build out some sort of a qualification system, this can be really helpful to take a lot of information, such as names, company information, revenue figures, all of this stuff. And then you can start to use a lot of different tools that works together, so that you can search Google, search LinkedIn, use a calculator tool to calculate something to do with their revenue. You can do all of that and have all of these tools sort of talk to each other to come up with an outcome, and then send that back to your system. Whereas building something on make.com might be not as easy to do it, because you don't have that access to that main central prompt. So just learn both of them is my recommendation, and you're going to get a good understanding of when to use one over the other. But anyways, to plug this into Voiceflow, we are going to go ahead and just swap this, delete the conversation and reset it. Go over to our chat module, just going to delete that, and we're going to add in our webhook call. This is going to be on the production URL. If I click that, it's just going to be using this particular role to send information to. We're going to swap this to a post request. We're going to be posting information to this URL. I'll go ahead and set up a new API block on Voiceflow here. And this is going to put in our URL, send it to a post request, and we're going to set it up exactly the same as we did here. So we're going to be using a couple of parameters here to our body. We're just going to click here and type in the email. We're going to use our email entity as we did earlier. Just remove that one there. And then we're going to add in our inquiry as well. And that's going to go ahead and get all of the context that it needs sent through in that request. What we can do is very simply listen for a test event. Just going to click on this right here. And I'm going to go ahead and send a test. Test, send, listen here. That should come through in just a second. We're going to be able to populate those variables into the workflow. So we've actually just got an error come back on Voiceflow here. The workflow must be active for the URL to be used. Because we're using the production URL, it's actually not going to work if we're not activating it. So just to demonstrate the purpose of this, just swap over to test URL just for this particular instance, and just going to swap that URL over there, send a test request once again, listen for the test event, test. Looks like we'll just send that through. That'll come through here. There we go. And now we can just use this information to populate in our agent. Coming into our agent, make sure that this webhook is actually connected to our agent just by dragging it just like that. Jump into our agent, and then we're going to start to see all of the data coming through here as well. So if I just scroll down here, we can remove that chat input that we put in here earlier, and we can just use a couple of these values here. So the inquiry, we can just type inquiry, give it a title, and just drag and drop the inquiry in there. And then we can just put the email as well. Drag and drop email inquiry, just like that. And that's done. Pretty much that's all we need to do. It's going to have access to that information coming from Voiceflow. It's going to process through the system and then run all of these functions here. One thing that we can do is provide it with a webhook response. It's very simple to do that. We can just jump into the webhook here, and we can change the response from immediately to when the last node finishes. So rather than responding right away, it's just going to wait until it finishes before doing a response of what's just happened. So we'll leave it like that. We can go ahead and then send a request from our system. We'll just drag this into this. And then what we can do, we'll just use the test setup at the moment. So I'm going to click test workflow. It's going to start to listen for something to come through. I'm going to jump at the top of this. I'm going to send through a quick inquiry. So I'm going to go ahead and just type out a quick, I'm interested in 123 Main Street. Super simple. It's going to ask for my email address, rendered@test.com, and that's going to get sent through to the next block, hopefully to push some information over here. Inquiry is getting sent through. Gmail's been sent through. Google Sheets should also process as well. That's done. Heading back to the agent, processed. And it looks like because we haven't actually added anything, it hasn't actually added the response in our particular system here. although that has been sent through and done. In our spreadsheet here, we can see our information has populated. And we've also just received the email as well. It's also been nicely formatted as we just prompted it to do that. New inquiry from Brendan at test.com. Inquiry details, here it is in summary, there it is as well. So nice, that came through quite well, and that obviously connected it directly through there. I hope that was helpful in understanding the difference between make.com and N8N and when you should use one or the other. Ultimately, both are great platforms. There isn't one that's better than the other. One can just be better suited for a particular task. And like I just showcased there, two different build structures. One's very conditional on make.com, and N8N is just using more AI to really power it. That's one of the big benefits of using N8N, is that extensive list of AI features. So once again, get up to date and upskilled on both of those platforms, and you're going to be building some pretty epic systems. The next part of the video is going to be diving into building AI voice agents. All right, so jumping into the next part of our practical tutorials, we're going to be diving deep into voice AI agents. Now, this is going to be my most favorite part of this video. Voice agents, if you've been watching my channel, is sort of my thing. So I've covered a lot about voice agents on my channel. And today in this video, we're going to be doing exactly that. We're going to be diving into Vapi. So if you haven't heard of Vapi, Vapi is probably one of the best platforms out there for building voice AI agents. So you can see on my screen right here, voice AI agents for developers. This is a developer tool for building these systems. So compared to what we've just built previously in this video, we've built a lot of chat systems. So with the GPTs, it's just talking to it, using your keyboard, typing away to that agent, and same with Voiceflow. So I know that it's called Voiceflow, but we were just chatting to it via text. Now, Voiceflow actually has the ability to build voice agents as well in their same system, although they've only recently introduced that, and Vapi is definitely more extensive in their feature set for building voice agents. So if you are looking to get a voice agent built at the moment, a platform like Vapi that's dedicated to voice agents is going to be the better move. And if you are yet to listen to these voice AI agents, you've never heard them in conversation before, now I'm going to play a quick demo of what I'm going to be building.
Let's get someone out to help you as quickly as possible. I'll just need to gather a few details to book your appointment. First, could you please detail the nature of your plumbing request?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of, just one toilet that's flowing, but it's flowed into a couple of rooms. So we need some pretty significant work.
Thank you for letting me know. That definitely sounds like an urgent situation. Let's get everything we need so we can dispatch a plumber to you as soon as possible.
All right, so hopefully that gives you a good idea as to what a voice agent sounds like. It's just like a chatbot, although we're able to use our phone to either do an inbound call. So we're calling in a real phone number, and it's going to be a real agent, just like a chatbot with a human-like voice that we're speaking to. Or we can do outbound calls, which is where we send a call to somebody, we're receiving a call, and it's an AI picks up. So inbound and outbound are the two versions of voice agents that we can build. But anyways, jumping into Vapi's page here, voice AI agents for developers. You can scroll down here and see a lot of the use cases that they have, a bit about them, exactly what this platform is used for. It's kind of similar to Voiceflow, although this is more dedicated to the voice side of it, so building out voice agents. We can just scroll through here. This is mostly just a bit of marketing that they're providing us with, but for the most part, this is a really great tool for building voice agents. And the main way to build a voice agent, specifically on Vapi, is just through prompting. So go ahead and sign up for an account on Vapi. Landing on this page right here, this is sort of our main assistant creation page. And so this is where pretty much all of the magic is going to be happening. This is where all of our agents are going to get listed just down in this list here. There's quite a few different tabs and options to select on the left-hand side here. I'll cover what all of this does in just a little bit, although I'm just going to cover the key aspects and things you need to know, as there are a lot of different settings and configurations for building these systems. So to get started, I'm going to go ahead and click the Create an Assistant button in the top left, and this little panel is going to pop up, and this is going to allow us to get started in building out our voice agent. So I'm going to give this a quick name. I'm just going to call this the YouTube demo, and I'm going to select blank template. If you would like, you can also select one of these templates. It's going to provide you with sort of a basic prompt to get started with. Otherwise, I'm just going to create it from scratch. Hit Create Assistant, and this is going to pop up here. So this is our sort of main page that we're going to be using to build our agent. So different to N8N and different to Make and different to Voiceflow, the only way to build natively right here is going to be through a prompt. So we can see here, I'll just scroll down a little bit, system prompt. So landing on this page right here, this is going to be our main page to configure our voice agent. And by default, the main way and the way that we currently sort of recommend to build these voice agents is just through a single prompt. So a system prompt, as you can see here, a single set of instructions like I showcased in building the GPTs, as well as that main agent on Voiceflow. And this is really still the best way to build quite a fluent and dynamic system on Vapi. So for this particular tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and build an inbound receptionist system for a plumbing company. I'm then going to connect it to a make.com scenario, which is going to allow us to book appointments into Google Calendar directly live with our voice agent. But before I get started in building that entire agent, I do just want to run through some of the key and critical areas of building out a voice agent here on Vapi. So just looking at the top of our screen here, you'll see cost and latency. These are the two variables that are very important when it comes to building out a voice agent. Obviously, the cost of the system is something that you need to monitor. So cost, this isn't just a one-time cost, this is cost per minute. So given all of the different tools that are required to essentially construct a voice agent, the costs can increase quite quickly. So as you can see here, by default, using the current models that's just been loaded as a default agent on Vapi, it's currently sitting at about 10 cents per minute. So that's a pretty good cost. 10 cents a minute is a good cost for a voice agent. But as we start to change some of these models, you will see that this cost does change. So you do want to keep it in this range of 10 cents. Maybe we could get it lower to 8 cents. It's likely we can get it up higher to 20 plus cents. So that is something to definitely monitor. Off to the right-hand side, we have the latency. So latency is just the sort of the delay. So when we give it a question, how long do we have to wait to get a response back from the agent? So that is what latency is at the moment. It's 1,000 milliseconds. That's about a second in order to get a response back. And once again, as we start to add stuff to our prompt, we start to change some of the models, configure some of the settings. We have to be monitoring this to make sure that it's not overly large, because that will cause some issues. We obviously want to make sure that it's as efficient as possible. Jumping over to the voice tab at the top here, this is where we're going to be able to control exactly the voice that's speaking to us. So this is obviously one of the key components that is completely different to building out a chat-based system, is that it's not speaking to you. So we have a new provider added into, you can think of it as our AI agent tech stack, now has obviously a text to speech model incorporated in it, which means we have text and we want to turn that into speech. And that's exactly what's happening within this section right here. So you can see here, voice configuration. If I click here, we're going to get access to a bunch of different voice providers. There's a lot of companies that are providing these text-to-speech services where we have a set of text that our agent has output. So like a chatbot outputs text, now taking that text, sending it to a speech model, and it's going to be generating that speech. Now, by default, Vapi actually has their own text speech model right here. As you can see, provider is Vapi. These voices from Vapi are quite good to get started with, and they've sort of been trained to sound a bit more monotone, I would say, and it works really well for phone calls. So I would definitely recommend just sticking to Vapi as you're testing it, although definitely have a look at 11 Labs and Cartesia and Rhyme, as these other models can have some really good voices as well. And if you start to look into different accents, like myself, I am based in Australia, so I've got an Australian accent. Getting an Australian accent, obviously through Vapi, is not very easy. They've only really got American voices at the moment. So jumping into 11 Labs allows you to add in some custom voices to get Australian voices, other accents, stuff like that. So that is one thing to make sure of and to learn a little bit about to make sure that you can get the best sounding voice possible. Below the voice configuration settings here, we have some additional configurations. You'll see here background sound. So we can actually add in a sort of static background sound into the conversation as it's talking. So if we want our agent to sound like it's in an office, a cafe, out on the street or whatever, we can add in a background sound to essentially make it a little bit more realistic. So jumping over to the next tab at the top here, we have a transcriber. So obviously different to how we were using chat-based systems, we aren't typing to the system at all. We are speaking to it over the phone. So obviously different to how we were building the chat-based systems, we don't just need a text-to-speech model where we take our output and get the human-like voice, but we now obviously need to take our own human-like voice and turn it into text for the AI to understand. So you can see now we've got a few more components that are getting added in. It's not just a voice model, but now we need a transcribe model that's going to be cut into this as well in our sort of AI agent tech stack. So you can see here in the provider, by default, DeepGram is selected to be used as our transcriber. DeepGram's pretty great as a transcriber model, one that I would definitely recommend using, but there is others and there's plenty of them here as well that can provide more than good enough results in terms of transcribing your speech and turning it into text. There are quite a few different reasons for using different models. In some cases, some languages are obviously going to need different models. Some models will work good with English, some will work better with Spanish. All of these variables need to be tested and used against the particular agent that you're building. Next up at the top here, we have our tools. So tools is giving our agent access to our automations. So exactly the same as we were doing before on Voiceflow, giving our agent access to some make.com flows and API calls. All of that stuff is our tool. So that's exactly the same process that's that's happening here on Vapi. You can even see up here, tools enable voice bots to perform actions during calls, add tools from the tools library to connect with make.com or GHL workflows, or create custom tools with your backend. So they've even listed make.com at the top here as a way to connect into Vapi to obviously run functions on the call, sending information, retrieving information, all of that stuff. I'm going to be showcasing later in the video when we build out our appointment booking system. Now below these tools right here, we have some predefined functions. So these are sort of pre-created tools that they've created, which just makes it a little bit easier for some of the most common things that you're going to be using. For example, at the top, we have an enable end call function. So obviously when you initiate a phone call, at some point this call needs to end. Otherwise it's just going to rack up costs that you don't want. So what we can do is actually enable this and essentially allow our agent to control when the call is ended. So we can give our agent access by simply prompting it to end the call. So if we have asked a user all the necessary questions, we've booked an appointment, whatever, we've met all the criteria that we're looking for, we can just prompt the agent to end the call. We can prompt the agent to ask the user if they're finished, and then we can end the call. So this is super useful, and we're always enabling this for our agents. In the case that you don't enable this, you can set a time limit as to how long the conversation goes on, as obviously you don't want somebody to call up your system and leave the phone on for hours and hours, racking up costs. So implementing one of these systems is always a good measure. Below this, we have a dial keypad. So this sets whether the assistant can dial digits on the keypad. Very simple. We can enable this and you can essentially prompt your agent to be able to follow along with sort of a recorded message that requires particular departments and things like that. The agent itself can actually dial those digits on the keyboard. Beneath the dial keypad here, we have the forwarding phone number. So the forwarding phone number, probably one of the most common things that we integrate into voice agents. It's essentially a number in which we can forward the call to. So you call up the system, call up the AI can't answer your question, you've got an emergency, something like that, we can essentially prompt it to transfer to a different number. So in this case, we can just type in the number right here and we can just prompt it to transfer to that number. Next up at the top here, we have the analysis tab. I'm not going to dive too deep into this as this is not absolutely necessary to get the voice assistant up and running, but this is a good thing to use to sort of summarize your calls, track some data, but this is absolutely not something that you need to get started. Next up, we have the advanced settings tab. So this is used for more sort of backend settings, HIPAA compliance. So if you are handling any sensitive data, that is something that is going to be recommended. So you can essentially turn this on and it's going to provide no logs, recordings, or transcriptions. It's not going to store any of that information. So you can turn that on to be compliant with that. And then just scrolling down a little bit, there are just a bunch more settings underneath here. This is stuff that you can just play around with, look through. A lot of this is just optimization tools. So not absolutely necessary to get one of these assistants up and running. It's more just optimizations. Once it's up and running, what are some issues that you're running into? And you can start to tweak these settings to specifically match your voice assistant. For example, that might just be how it speaks. So obviously, depending on the voice model you're using, depending on the voice model that you've chosen, you can decide to essentially add in a bunch of different punctuation seconds. So minimum seconds to wait after transcriptions, ending with punctuation, the minimum amount of seconds to wait, the minimum seconds to wait after transcription, ending with a number. So there's quite a few different sort of very minute toggles for how long it should wait after different things are said in the conversation. And so that's a very key thing to sort of look at and compare against. This is not something that we have to deal with on chat agents. Quite a bit more complex when we start to build our voice agents because this entire speech model is adding in just that extra layer of complexity. And then lastly here, we have a widget. So this is how we can actually take our assistant and add it onto a web page. So this is pretty cool if you want to actually add your voice agent onto a website as well. You can just copy this code and add it into your website. All right, so I've ran through pretty much all the main settings for putting together your voice agent. And now we're going to get started in building out our assistant on this main model page. So to get started in configuring this model page right here, top of the page, you can see the provider. So we can choose through quite a few different AI model providers for essentially powering the intelligence behind the responses that are being provided. There are obviously a few different metrics that we need to be looking out for and tracking when we are changing the model. So like I said earlier, the cost and latency is something that you need to be sort of constantly keeping an eye on. If we change from this OpenAI model right here, we change the provider and then we change the model. We're currently using the 4.0 cluster. That's quite an optimized model for these voice agents. Although if we just go ahead and choose the 0.3 cluster for whatever reason, but if we go ahead and just choose one of these other models, if we choose the real-time model, for example, click on this one, we can just confirm this and you'll see that if we publish it, we'll see that these details update quite significantly. So the cost has just almost doubled, or I think it's over doubled from what it was previously to 22 cents a minute using the real-time model. The The latency has actually reduced quite a bit, although this is using the web latency. We actually have to swap that over to Twilio, and that's going to be a more accurate latency when we connect it to a phone system, which I'll cover as well how to do. But otherwise, that's going to be latency. That's going to be the cost. Just to get started, I would recommend just keeping it over on the 4.0 cluster model that is by default on Vapi. It's quite a good model in terms of cost and speed and intelligence. We could swap it over to something like 4.1 mini. This is a very similar model. 4.0, maybe a bit more intelligent. Latency does increase a little bit. 4.0 is quite optimized. It's been around for quite a while. So I definitely recommend starting here. But as you start to build more complex agents, you'll recognize if an agent is got longer context or has a bigger knowledge base document that you're referring to, using a model like 4.1 might be a bit better. So once we've gone ahead and selected an AI model, below this, we're going to see the first message. So obviously when we have a voice agent, if it's going to be inbound or outbound, there's different ways that we can initiate that conversation. And so if we're doing an inbound system, we can either start to speak first ourselves. We call in, nothing's being said by anybody. We can start to speak and then the agent will speak, or we can call in the system and the agent will speak first. And so we can toggle those settings within the first message mode at the top here. We can go ahead and just say the assistant speaks first with model generated message, assistant speaks first, or assistant waits for user. We'll just go ahead and keep it on assistant speaks first and provide it with sort of a default first message. So for our first message, I could just say hi. So I've just said, hi, this is Emily from Blue Plumbing Services. How can I help you today? So super simple, super basic. First message, you're calling into the business. It's just going to read out that first message right away. Once that's done, we can now start to work on our system prompt. And this is going to be the main chunk of work that you're going to need to do to get this assistant up and running. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that blank template text right there. And I'm just going to go ahead and paste in my main sort of prompt template that I use to build out assistants, whether that's a chatbot, whether that's a voice agent, any type of system. Obviously, I have used this previously in the video. To get started, I'm going to be working on the role. So the role is shaping the personality. It's the persona. It's essentially giving the agent complete context as to who it is. What is its purpose? What is its existence for? And you might think that it's a bit silly to have to do that, although it can really help with the performance of the voice agent, especially down the road when it's really helping somebody in their inquiry. When an agent has full context as to what it's doing, it can help it to really stay on track. And this is really important as you start to really build out a long prompt that has a lot of different pathways and context and different things it needs to do. If it always has the context as to why it's doing what it's doing, it's always going to be able to follow suit and track the prompt a little bit better. So for this role, we're just going to go ahead and say, you are Emily, you are an AI digital receptionist working for Blue Plumbing Services. You will help assist callers in their questions and also help book appointments. So you are Emily, you are an AI digital receptionist working for Blue Plumbing Services. You will assist callers in their questions and also help book appointments. And if you'd like, you can also go to ChatGPT to sort of rewrite it, reformat it, make it a little bit cleaner. So this right here is just slightly modified and updated to sound a little bit nicer. So always recommend just doing a little bit of cleaning up using it. So using AI to make AI, I'm always going to recommend it. So I've got a pretty basic role set up right here. Potentially I might come back to this later and start to add more to it. Next, jumping into the task, this is going to be more specifically looking at exactly what you want the agent to do and help with whenever a request comes through. So in our case, pretty basic. We just want to run through some form of an appointment booking process. So for a plumbing service, that might involve just capturing a first name, a last name, capturing their address, maybe some description about the job that they're looking to book, and then also obviously capturing when they would like to book it. Now, one thing to note at this point of prompting specifically for conversational AI systems like this voice agent, I do like to take the prompt and move over to a Markdown live preview tool. So this is something that will essentially allow us to view how our prompt looks to the AI assistant. So one thing you may have noticed is that I had added those hashtags at the beginning of each of these headings here. And this is essentially giving it Markdown formatting. So we're essentially setting each of our headings here to a heading 1. So that's what happens when you give it one hashtag. If you give it 2 hashtags, it's now going to be smaller as a heading 2. And so that's obviously going to be really good to essentially structure and format which information is related to which. So when the AI starts to look at our prompt, it's going to have complete context as to, okay, this information is related to the role. This information is related to the task. Going to be able to dissect it quite easily. It's just making the AI's job a lot easier. So this is especially important when we start to build out the task. You're more than likely to have multiple different tasks that the AI is going to have to conduct for different types of requests that come through. And we're going to need quite a few different sort of headings and subheadings that's going to be used in the formatting here. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is add in a secondary heading here. And this is going to be specifically for our appointment booking. So I'm going to type here appointment booking, and hopefully this is going to be used specifically to essentially track if somebody's looking to book an appointment, it's going to use this part of the prompt. So if someone has requested to book a job/appointment, please go down this path. I might add a third sort of heading here for appointment questions, and now we can have it to follow along with these questions. So number 1, please detail the nature of your plumbing request. So for our appointment questions, please detail the nature of your plumbing request. Please provide your first name and spell it out for me. Please provide your last name and spell it out for me. And then please provide your full address. So I've sort of indentated these questions here as well. So it has a little bit of context to separate that and understand what are the questions that we're going to be reading out. So we can add some, and we'll likely need to add in some conditioning for a few different things. And so given that I have some experience in obviously running these systems and doing calls with these systems, I know a lot of the little things to look out for. For example, we want to add in some conditioning so that the system knows to read out each question one by one, even though we've sort of mapped out each question separately and you'd think you'd want to read them out one by one. In some cases, the AI is not going to know that, so you have to be a little bit careful in how you sort of prompt it. So in this case, I'm just going to tell it to do that. So please read out each of the following questions one by one. So we can start at the top and then go down to the bottom. You can see that I've also added in this little bit extra to providing the first name. So please provide your first name and spell it out for me. So this is a really key thing when building out voice agents is capturing information. So the transcription models are usually pretty good at capturing a name or a last name, or at least getting it in the right area. So for example, my name, if I say Brendan, in some cases, it might detect my name as Brandon, so B-R-A instead of B-R-E. And so it is a good measure when we're just looking at voice systems as a whole to have the user spell their name out, more importantly for emails and phone numbers. So usually we can just get a phone number from the call itself, so we don't have to ask them for their phone number. But for different use cases, like we've experienced in our agency, usually some people might call on different numbers than their own sort of mobile number. And so then there's obviously some communication that needs to happen there. And another bit of prompt conditioning that I will add on top of that as well is to do with reading out the name that they've provided us with. So obviously somebody can say their name, they could say Brendan, they could say that it's spelled B-R-E-N-D-A-N, but obviously we still need to double check, the final check to see if that's actually correct. So there's a little bit of a process for the confirmation of capturing information, and we can pretty much just add in a line for that. So for example, just to confirm your first name is spelled B-R-E-N-D-A-N. I've added in some hyphens. Now that is going to slow down the pronunciation of that word quite a bit. So it's pretty much going to spell it out as B-R-E-N-D-A-N. So super slow, pretty much just like that. That's how it's going to read it out. Now that is something that you will have to play around with quite a bit. And so at the moment, I know that this will pretty much slow it down quite significantly, although there will be some optimizations that can be made in making this a little bit smoother. We can start to put some quotation marks around these words, potentially remove the hyphens and do it like this. Although this is something that we have to essentially just get the AI to start reading it out, and then we'll essentially optimize it from there. Using different voice models, different voice providers, speech models affects everything. And so we have to really fine tune it as we go. Once we've captured the questions here and we've got everything that we need to book an appointment, we can essentially prompt it to do that. Now, I'm not going to prompt it to book an appointment right away, as I want to jump into actually setting up and configuring those tools in just a minute. Otherwise, I'm just going to say, once this information is captured, please thank the caller. And then below this, we have examples. So the next section is mostly for sort of mapping out an example conversation for the AI to have a look at to reference how to act. Now, this is super important to get a lot of consistency. Now, this is super important to get consistency and reliability in your agents. Now, at the moment, given this is pretty simple of a use case, I'm just going to skip putting in the examples for now and add in a knowledge base. So I'm going to type out knowledge base. So this is going to help us to add in some company specific information. Although obviously, if you are building out a more production ready system that's a bit more complex, got a lot more pathways, definitely going to recommend adding in an examples pathway. Pretty much the way that that would work is that you sort of provide a mock transcript. So you provide all of the questions a user would ask and all of the sort of relevant and expected answers to those questions. I've just gone ahead and AI generated sort of a mock fake database or fake knowledge base of information just using ChatGPT. So Blue Plumbing Services specializes in residential and commercial plumbing, including leak detection, pipe repair, water heater installation. Licensed plumbers are available 24/7 using modern tools. Work is backed by satisfaction guarantee, 1-year warranty. So a few different sort of key aspects and things about the services that I've just included in the knowledge base here. And this is going to allow us to have that information readily available when somebody has a question. So somebody is calling up to learn about the warranty, to learn about the satisfaction guarantee, to learn about their availability. Essentially, this knowledge base is going to be able to provide them with that info. And then lastly, we have our notes section. So notes is really for anything that we want to add on during our testing period. So once we've got this agent up and running, we start to talk with it, then we can start to modify a lot of our notes. The notes is really for small things here and there that we want to modify, whether that's how it handles certain pathways. Notes is a really good section to add in those more critical but sort of small sentences. And you'll get a better understanding as to what I even mean by that once we start to call the system and sort of pick up on a little of the small things. We'll add that usually in the notes section. And a good thing to learn with prompting is that there's this thing called lost in the middle. And that pretty much just means that for the most part, AI prompts will sort of always prioritize information that's placed at the top of the prompt and information that's placed at the bottom of the prompt. And so this really plays into that note section as being a key component of our prompt. It's very, very possible that a lot of the context that's included here, for instance, could potentially get lost, or it's not going to be as prioritized to get used by our large language model. And so in the case of reading out and spelling out names just like this could be something that we decide to put in the notes section where it gets more read. Anyways, let's go ahead and just copy this prompt. We can click copy at the top here, jump back into Vapi, replace this system prompt right here. And now we've got our prompt ready to go in Vapi. So let's give this system a call and see how it sounds.
Hi, this is Emily from Blue Plumbing Services. How can I help you today?
Hey Emily, we've got a toilet overflowing pretty badly.
I'm so sorry to hear that. Let's get someone out to help you as quickly as possible. I'll just need to gather a few details to book your appointment. First, could you please detail the nature of your plumbing request?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of, just one toilet that's flowing, but it's flowed into a couple of rooms. So we need some pretty significant work.
Thank you for letting me know. That definitely sounds like an urgent situation. Let's get everything we need so we can dispatch a plumber to you as soon as possible. Next, could you please provide your first name and spell it out for me?
Yeah, it's Brendan, so Brendan.
Thank you for that. Just to confirm, your first name is spelled Brendan, correct?
Perfect.
Great. Could you now provide your last name and spell it out for me, please?
Yeah, it's Smith, so Smith.
Thank you. Thank you. So just to confirm, your last name is spelled Smith, correct?
Yep, that's it.
Perfect. Brendan Smith. Could you please provide your full address?
So there you go, just a quick demo running through so that has perfectly ran through the series of questions that we provided it with one by one. Even this prompt right here to spell out our name for us was perfect. That did exactly what we expected it to. Obviously, a lot of optimizations that can still be made. That's a super rough out of the box. I haven't done any testing on that system whatsoever. I think a lot of the wording can be improved to make it a little bit more human-like, a little less robotic. And a lot of that can just come down to the role and the task and how it handles a lot of these questions. Obviously, please detail the nature of your plumbing request. Not the most natural way to say it. And I think another condition that we can add in there is that a lot of people, even like myself, are going to call up the system and you're pretty much just going to detail what your problem is. So rather than having a secondary question to ask what their problem is, it should already be captured. So we can add in some conditioning here as well. So we can add in right here, if the user has already provided the nature of their request, don't ask them again unless more information is required. So a little ambiguous in what I've provided there, but just to give you the point of what this is, the point of prompting, we're going to be calling the system a lot. We're going to have to do a lot of testing. Obviously, I haven't tested this prompt at all, only just that one call there. But as we start to call it, we're going to have more things that we want to add, more notes to add onto these systems, and you just got to keep playing around with it. So the next component of this system is going to be the booking system. So we're going to go ahead and build out a couple of tools that allow us to plug directly into Google Calendar so that we can create events and book events and also check our calendar's availability. So we're not booking or doing any double bookings. We can essentially do it all through our agent here. And below our system prompt, you may have also noticed files. So files is for our knowledge base. So like I talked about earlier in a lot of the other systems, we can also add a knowledge base directly through adding a series of files. And so I have added our knowledge base information into the prompt here. So one thing to note when getting knowledge base information specifically for voice agents as well is that it can take a little bit of time. And so if we can limit the amount of times that we need to access the knowledge base information, going to make the conversation a little bit smoother. So for more important information, the most critically and common information like your opening hours, your address, all that type of stuff, service types, all of that I would 100% recommend adding into the prompt. And so you can see in our knowledge base section, we've got a little bit of that here. We can add obviously a lot more as well. This prompt can handle quite a bit of information. But if you do have a sort of Word document with 10 pages, 15 pages of service information and all that stuff with more technical things that aren't super important, but maybe one question comes in every once in a while, definitely recommend adding that into the knowledge base. And the way to access that is essentially by clicking on select files. We can click into some files that we've uploaded. Obviously, if you don't have any files, you can just click add a new file and upload one. Otherwise, on the left-hand side of the screen, there is the files tab. This right here allows you to upload a file to Vapi and you essentially add all of your files into like a workspace-wide database, and then you can just assign that particular document to your agent. All right, so coming back to our prompt, we're gonna go ahead and set up the appointment booking function. So underneath all of our questions that we've just asked the user, we've got their first name, their last name, their full address. We're gonna go ahead and send all this information off to our appointment booking system. So we obviously wanna add in capturing the date and time they'd like to book for. So that will be sort of the final question to ask them. So please ask user for the date and time they would like to book. Once this information is captured, please thank the caller. Obviously, once this information is captured, please run the check availability function to see if we are available at this time. If the time is available, please book the appointment booking function. If the time is not available, please provide the user with the alternative times, capture a new booking time. So please ask the user for the date and time they would like to book. Once this information is captured, please run the check availability function to see if we are available at this time. If the time is available, please book the appointment with the appointment booking function. If the time is not available, please provide the user with the alternative times and capture a new booking time. So we're going to have two functions that we're going to be adding to this agent. One is going to check our calendar availability. So we're going to use this first to obviously ensure the time they want to book for is available to book into. If it is, we're going to book it. If it's not, we're going to provide them with some alternative times. So the function we're going to be building is going to have this all included in it. It's going to talk back to our Vapi assistant, provide sort of 3 close alternative times, and then they're going to be able to obviously choose one of those to book in for or another time as well. And they're going to be able to book directly into our calendar. So jumping into make.com, this right here is an automation that I have built out for checking the availability of a Google Calendar. And so in order to communicate with our Google Calendar, we are going to be using an intermediary tool called cal.com. It is similar to Calendly, if you've heard of them. It's sort of an appointment booking, event creating software. You can sign up for free. You don't have to use their paid versions to get started in using it. You can do quite a lot in their free version. I'm using their free version here, and you can pretty much just plug and play this automation, plug it into your voice agent on Vapi, and you can start to check availability of your own Google Calendar. So this is cal.com. So cal.com allows us to create different events, and this is all a system for booking appointments with. Pretty much what you have to go ahead and do is create an event on cal.com and then assign that event to this automation right here. So I'm going to do it step by step with you so you understand exactly how it all works. Pretty much to sign up for a free account, you're going to land on a page that just looks like this. I'm going to click on new in the top right corner to create an event. For this, I'm going to title it a YouTube demo. That's probably taken. Oh no, because it's got my name in there, so that's all good. Duration, we're going to keep it at 30 minutes. Going to update it to 30 minutes and hit continue. Once that's done, we can just leave it like this. We don't have to modify it too much else. What I will do is just click copy link event. I'm going to go back into my Chrome and essentially search up this booking link event right here. Once you're on this page right here, after it's been created, if you actually look up, and you might not be able to see this on my screen at the moment, but in the URL, there's actually sort of an event type ID. And so if I copy this and jump into my make.com suite, there is a tiny little value of numbers, and that is in the URL of this particular page right here. And you can just copy this and start to insert it into this automation for it to connect to our calendar. So if I click on these blue modules right here, these are HTTP requests, and these are the only times that we are communicating with cal.com in order to get our calendar availability information. So I just click into here, API cal.com is where it's going to be communicating to. We've got our API key already inserted in here, and I can change the event type ID to this, which is the event type ID exactly communicating to our calendar. And just scrolling back up a little bit, this API key right here, we can get this by going to cal.com, clicking into the settings in the bottom left, going to API keys in the bottom left of the developer section. function. Already got a couple of keys here, but I'm going to create a new one. I'm just going to call this the YouTube demo, set it to never expire, and just hit save. Copy this key back to make.com and just replace it right there. So that's good to go. It's been added in, and it's going to be able to capture our event related to our API key. And that's all you need to do. That's all done. Hit save, and we can move over to the next one. This will also require our API key. Just make sure to replace the key here, cal live, and just paste it there, keeping the bearer token. Scrolling down a little bit, we've just got the more information here related to our calendar ID. So we can go back to cal.com, back to our particular meeting that we just created here. We can grab our event ID, chuck that back in there, and that's all connected. Make sure that your email is populated here, the one that you're going to be looking at on cal.com. Make sure your time zone is set right here as well. So in my case, Australia, Sydney, make sure your time zone is correct. And once that's done, you are good to go. But just lastly, for this particular template, you will also need to connect your OpenAI account to these OpenAI modules right here. If you didn't do it previously at the start of this video when I ran through the make.com tutorial, you will need to add your OpenAI account to make.com. What we can do now is click on the webhook at the start here. So very similar as to what I've shown all throughout this video is that we can use webhooks to send information. We'll click copy address to clipboard, hit save, and jump back into our Vapi instance. Right here, we can now start to talk to our make.com flow. So jumping over to the tools tab at the top here, this is what we're going to be using to communicate with our make.com flow. Like it says up here, make.com, select tools, create new tools. Once you're on the tools page, just go to the top left and click create a tool. You're going to see a bunch of options drop down here. There's quite a few different configurations for different tools that we can set up. In our case, we're just going to be doing an API request. So we're doing this custom. Although if you do want to use some of these tools down here, there is a native integration into Google Calendar. So that's just directly to Google Calendar. That's not using something like cal.com, which gives us the flexibility of creating events and configuring events. So I do recommend doing the method that I'm using here, although you can obviously use something like this native function as well. Go high level if you're using them. They've also got a native function, and I did just recently release a video specifically running through how to set this up as well. So quite a few different functions to communicate with different apps here. But once you've added the API request tool right here, we can give it a name, a description, and our URL. So I'll just paste in the make.com URL. So first up, we are going to be doing a post request. We are going to be sending off our availability information off to this make.com automation. So obviously we're going to be checking the availability of a certain time, and we want to post that information off. So we will have to use post HTTP method in this case. I've just gone ahead and named the tool check calendar availability, and then we can just type in here, trigger this when you would like to check the calendar availability for an appointment booking. So we've got a tool name, we've got a tool description. This will be essentially fed directly to our agent to understand when and when it shouldn't use this particular function. Scrolling down a bit, we have the request body. This is going to be the main bit of information that we're going to be sending off to make.com. So in our case of just checking the calendar availability, it's pretty much just going to be the start time of the event. So for property key, I'm just going to type booking time because this is the time that we want to book for. Keep it as a string. It's just going to be sort of a text-based value, and then property value, default or fixed value for this property. We want to let this value get populated by the AI. So we're just going to leave that blank, but give it a description at the bottom here to enable it to get populated by the AI. We're going to say this is the time that the user has requested to book for. So we'll leave it like that. Our automation is actually going to be smart enough to figure out the time that they're actually referring to. If I want to book for tomorrow, 3 p.m., our automation has its own time zone system. So it's going to be able to look at that, understand exactly when that's going to be referenced to. We don't have to do too much work on the Vapi side of things. But otherwise, just hit apply at the bottom here. Booking time is now defined to be sent off in this particular request, and we can just hit save. Now, one thing to note before going ahead and running the check availability function right here, I just ran it. I did actually end up running into a quick issue, and I managed to fix it. So jumping into this last API connection to cal.com, just make sure that when you scroll down here, this credential ID is updated to your specific credential ID. So this isn't actually the calendar ID. This is something separate to the calendar ID, and I'll show you how you can actually get this. So you can get this by this node here. So I'm going to have this added onto this template, which you can access by jumping into my school community linked in the description. This template will be completely for free to access. Just this module at the bottom here, just connect it to the end and click into this, and you're going to get access to this entire flow. This is pretty much just got access to my API key and my email address. And essentially what this is going to do is it's going to go ahead and just pull back some information about our account. It's going to allow us to get that credential ID so we can use it previously in the automation. I know it's a little bit weird to have to do this. It is a bit annoying that they don't give us this ID within the main cal.com booking.com dashboard. Although what you can do is right click and hit run this module only. Once that happens, you can click on the data at the bottom here. You're going to see destination calendars and connected calendars. Just make sure to click on connected calendars, click on +1, and you're going to see credential ID. So in this case, 417845 is my credential ID. Copy that and just paste that into here, and then you'll be good to go. So I'll disconnect this. Once again, we're not going to be using it in the automation. It's just to get that credential ID. I could put it below here as well. And once again, you can get that on the template. So now that our tool is all created for checking the calendar availability, make sure that it is assigned to our agent. Many times I create tools and don't connect them to the agent. I forget why it doesn't work, but you do have to make sure the tool is connected. Once that's all ready to go, what we can do is go to the top right and just click on chat. And so if we click on chat, we can just test our agent without having to call it every single time. We can just talk to it over chat. So I'll just send a first message. Hello, I have a leaking tap. Provide my name, confirm it, provide a last name, confirm it again, write a address, confirm it tomorrow at 3 p.m. So I believe I'm not available tomorrow 3 p.m. See what happens. In this case, it has gone ahead and hit this. So if I click out of this, we will see that the automation has just run. So that's just now 4:13. That has just run. We can see here, because the time slot is unavailable, although here are some alternative time slots. So it just says here, it seems that tomorrow at 3 p.m. is unavailable. However, we do have an opening tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. So if we would like, we can do 4:30 p.m. So it's a time that's close, and I could just go ahead and say yes. Obviously, this isn't connected to an actual booking system. So it says it's been booked, but it obviously hasn't done any actual booking because there's no tool for it. But perfect. That's gone ahead and worked for checking availability. Now jumping in to this automation right here, which we're going to be using for our appointment booking. And now this is not just appointment booking. This is sort of an ultimate appointment booking template. I created this earlier in a video on my channel. This will allow us to book appointments, reschedule appointments, cancel appointments. So we can do a few different tasks here, all embedded in this one automation. Definitely recommend implementing something like this because it gives you the full flexibility to handle bookings in many different ways. You know, it's quite often that somebody will want to cancel or reschedule or have these types of questions, and to have an automation that can handle that is going to be quite beneficial. So the process for updating this is going to be pretty much the same. Just make sure to jump into each of these modules and update the event type ID with your particular event. So all of the ones that have the event type ID, make sure that's updated, and then make sure that your API key is also updated throughout all of these HTTP requests. So to connect this to our Vapi assistant, very similar process to what we just did for checking availability. Grab the webhook request, jump into Vapi, head over to the tool section, create a tool, jump into the API request. We're going to add this as the URL. We're going to do a post request. We're going to change the tool name to something simple like book appointment, and then we're going to say trigger this when we have checked the availability and the user has confirmed the time slot. Jumping into our request body, very similar. What we're going to be sending through is going to be the booking time. This is going to be the time that they want to book for. So this is the time the user is requesting to book. So very similar like last time as well. We'll hit apply. Now, additionally, what we can also add in this as well is going to be some of the details related to the specific booking. So that could be the address that they're going to be booking for. That could be the first name, the last name, the phone number. A lot of those details we can include in here as well. Obviously, as we are just doing an appointment booking into the calendar. Otherwise, there are different ways that we can send that information as well. We could set up an additional tool to do an email. We could set up an additional tool to store that information in some sort of a CRM system, and they can be related to each other. So there are a few different ways that we can actually manage data in this case. But otherwise, just to demonstrate the purpose of the appointment booking system, I'll hit save or jump back into the assistance tab, and we're going to go ahead and click into tools. Once again, making sure book appointment is selected right there. Hit the publish button, make sure everything's all saved. We're going to jump into chat and see if this thing works. So I've gone ahead and went through and just chatted to the assistant. I've told it that I want to book for tomorrow at 2 p.m. It told me that it was not available, although it has provided some time slots that should be available. So I'm just going to go ahead and say 11 a.m. works great. And this should go ahead and run our booking appointment function, and then we go. So this actually did just run into an issue. One thing that I did just completely overlook is that in order for this system to actually work, we do need to capture an email over the conversation in order to tap into this booking system right here. And so one of the key things about this is that it requires an email to obviously send a calendar invite that has been programmed to send. And so we do actually need to capture an email. So I do need to jump into our prompt. This is just the nature of prompt engineering, the nature of building these systems, going back and forth quite a bit. So we're going to capture the first name, the last name. We'll just chuck it in here. Please ask the user for their full email address. So we're going to ask for their email address, hit publish, and hopefully that information can now be captured. We're going to jump into the tools. We're going to jump into the body here. I'm going to add in the name. So I'm just going to type name. This is the full name of the user. So we have captured first name and last name. Obviously we can use AI to just put them all together. So this is full name of the user, assign to that, apply, add this, and then we can type email as a property as well. Just type in here, this is the email of the caller. And then we go. We can just send all those values through using AI to populate all of those fields. Pretty basic to get that set up and running. Jump back into the chat and see if it works again. Once we have added in the name and email into this, there is one last thing that I do want to chuck, and that is going to be the booking type. So coming back into the automation that we have here, one thing that I have set up is to assign a particular booking type. So obviously, because we're not just doing bookings, we're doing canceling, we're doing rescheduling as well. I've essentially set up the automation to look at a variable called booking type, and it will essentially run down a particular path depending on the type of booking that it is. So that way we know, are they going to be canceling? Are they going to be rescheduling? We can actually work with this. And so jumping back into Vapi, we can just type booking type right here. Make sure it is exactly like that as it is here. So booking type, keep it as a string. But in our AI description here, we are just going to tell it to assign a particular value. So please assign a specific value depending on the type of booking. If it is a new booking, please output new booking. Do not provide any other notes or text in your output. If this is a reschedule, please output reschedule. If this is a cancellation, please output cancellation. So once again, you can access this in the template that I upload to the school community. Otherwise, pretty important to make sure that the booking type is correct for our specific booking automation that is required in order to work with the different flows that we have. So once you've gone ahead and set up the booking type for it to recognize which pathway to go down, just go ahead and give it the time you want to book for, go through and talk to the assistant, and it will process through this right here. I can click into this and have a look at the time that it received. This will process through here, capture my information. It's going to verify some things. Click through these to see exactly what everything is specifically doing. But this was able to go ahead and hit the cal.com API, and it's gone ahead and just booked an appointment with myself at the time that I requested at 9:30. And I also get an email confirmation right here as well. Tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. with myself and Brendan at gmail.com. It's gone ahead and booked in for. So perfect. That has worked as I have expected it to. And we can see here that obviously we can then start to configure all the other flows for canceling and rescheduling as well. So we've now got a fully functional inbound AI receptionist system that we can call in for, ask questions to the system. We can run through the series of questions needed to book an appointment for capturing information. And then we can book an appointment, we can cancel them, we can reschedule them as well, all connected into a make.com system. So we've got a pretty complete system running now. This is a pretty valuable system we have sold many times before, so definitely a good skill to learn. All right, so diving into the last part of this video, we're going to be looking at the model context protocol. So that might sound quite technical or quite scary of a name there, but this is going to be a pretty important concept to look into and to learn more about as AI agents grow bigger and bigger in the future. Now, I did talk about the MCP very briefly at the start of the video, although I am going to do a complete rundown step by step as to what the model context protocol actually is. And then after that, I'm going to go back to Vapi and I'm going to connect an MCP server built on Zapier, which is another platform very similar to Make and NNN, although it's going to give us the complete ability to build an MCP server and connect it directly to our Vapi voice assistant. And you're just going to be able to compare what an MCP server can do differently than what we built on NNN and what we built on Make.com. So diving straight into it, this is Zapier. And so Zapier, once again, is a very similar platform to Make.com. It's another very similar platform to NNN. The reason I'm showcasing Zapier is because of their dedicated MCP tool. But before I go through this page and all about how Zapier is integrating the MCP, what I am going to go through first is this diagram that I've created, which really walks through step by step. What is an MCP server? What is the purpose of it? How does it compare to some of the previous automation workflows that I've built in this video? And should you use it? So at the start here, we have our large language model. Obviously, we know this as being the brain of our system. This is what's going to be processing all of our thoughts. This is what is connected through a platform like OpenAI or some of the other models from other providers. Our large language model is really the key part of our agent. The second step in building out our agent is going to be going ahead and connecting tools and functions, which is exactly what I've covered all throughout the video in building our sort of automation workflows on Make or on NNN, and then connecting tools directly to our agent to access based on certain triggers. So we prompt it to book an appointment, we prompt it to send an email, we prompt it to store data. All of that stuff are done by individual API calls to different automations, and that's what we're looking at here. Scrolling down a bit, you can see the example here on Vapi, exactly what I showcased in the video. We're connecting our APIs through through to Vapi to send off our requests. Same goes for other platforms like Retail, which is a similar platform to Vapi. And then same went for building out our GPT. Jumping over to the third step here, this is how the MCP integrates itself into this workflow. So rather than having our large language model talk directly to individual workflows and API calls to communicate to direct tasks that get sent back to our agent, we are now going to be implementing the MCP server as sort of an intermediary step in our workflow process. And you can see I've added this image right here, which sort of demonstrates sort of this workflow right here. We've got our API call, which is just giving us the information directly. We give it a question. This API guy right here is going to give us our answer back right away, but the MCP server is sort of an intermediary. In this case, sort of a sign language translator that is in the middle between the information that we're looking to get and us ourselves. And then we've got that translator in the middle. And the big benefit of having that translator in the middle, it gives us a lot more flexibility as to what we're going to be calling and when. So rather than setting up one particular workflow to talk to one particular tool, we can set up this server to have access to thousands of different tools, and it can essentially decide which one is going to be most relevant for that task. So just going back a little bit to previously in the video when we built out the automation on make.com, that was the sort of very bare bones basic way of building the automation. It was going directly from our AI agent directly to calling a tool, retrieving information, sending information directly. So it was purely our large language model to a tool. Then we stepped it up a little bit, jumping into N8N, where we actually used an agent as an intermediary step. And you can sort of think of that like an MCP server. When we built that agent on N8N, we had an intermediary step, which was a system prompt connected to multiple different tools, and it sort of acted like an MCP server. The only difference in that case is that our N8N agent didn't communicate back to our voice assistant, giving it instructions on how to call different tools or what tools it had access to. We simply just sent a request off to our N8N agent, and then it decided what tool it should use. I understand it might still be a little bit confusing as to what the difference is and what the benefit is, so I'm going to jump into that in a little bit as well. But otherwise, just scrolling down a little bit here, the connection process for this is really just a new medium of communicating with different applications. So we can see here for this particular API, which gives us access to a bunch of different Expedia hotels via an API request, has a new dedicated MCP connection point. And so essentially what this means is that we can send a request directly to this MCP server. And this is going to provide us back with all of the different parameters that we can send to talk to this server. So really the big benefit here is that we don't have to set anything up. We don't have to configure an API request or a tool request with a bunch of headers and parameters and all this stuff to essentially determine exactly what we're looking to get back. We are talking to one URL and we are sending a natural sort of request off to that URL, and it is going to tell us what we can do with it. It is going to decide what to do with it. And so it's a far more flexible solution. So if we come back to thinking as to how our agent operates as a system prompt, as an AI system, it is very flexible. It's very dynamic, it's conversational, it's generative, it's creating its answers on the spot. And to give it a system which sort of corresponds with that, we don't have to have it only do one function. It has complete access to doing whatever it wants. So for example, scrolling down a bit here, this graph really demonstrates what the benefit of this MCP is for this particular use case. So in this case, I like to book a trip to Monaco. What would the cost be and when would be the best time to go? Previously, we would have had to have connected all 4 of these particular APIs. So the system would have had to have been pre-programmed with each of these APIs here, waiting for a response to come through to use those APIs. And then the system would have had to have been smart enough to call each of those individual APIs, pull the information into the agent memory, and then obviously formulate its response. But now that we're introducing the intermediary Expedia MCP, in this case, it's going to obviously determine what types of APIs are necessary to process this request. It's then going to use those APIs, and then it's going to provide its answer. So obviously this is still a very small scale representation of the benefit here. Obviously you can just go ahead and connect 4 different APIs. That's not too much of a hassle for building a system like this if this is going to be the main request that comes through. But the big benefit is going to be if there are 15 other API calls that could be relevant with the types of queries coming through to this Expedia MCP, which I'm sure that there are. You can connect obviously a very large amount of different types of tool requests and everything all within an MCP server. And that way you don't have a big long list of tools that need to be ran. Setting up your own MCP server can be a little bit daunting, but thankfully, because of the automation platforms that are already out there and the ones that I've covered in this video, like make.com, like N8N, but particularly Zapier, we are able to plug into their existing network of thousands and thousands of apps and essentially use that as our MCP server. So this is super powerful, being able to essentially send our request to a particular server like Zapier, and it's got access to the thousands of apps that it does. We can essentially run any request at our demand by sending it to that server. So what does this actually mean? Well, some of the pros here is faster agent creation. Like I said, there's not that giant technical hurdle of setting up individual API requests, building these automations via make.com. We can essentially just use our MCP server on Zapier, connect the apps that we want to use, and the AI is just going to figure out what it wants to do. We're going to have smarter agents with more control. So rather than creating one individual agent with 4 API calls, we can more easily upload tens or even hundreds of different API calls dedicated to a single application or multiple. And this just means that even if we're not going to be using other API endpoints and other applications in our system, it's always going to be capable of requesting and using them if needed. And so this is really going to avoid the situation where somebody is calling up about a unique situation. It's an edge case call. These are not the common calls that are coming through, but it still has the capacity to fulfill that request because it has so many connections with all of these different applications. And that leads into the next pro, which is a better user experience. Like I said, if somebody is calling in about something that is just super rare, it's not something that is what you have thought to have pre-programmed, but the agent has access to a vast amount of API endpoints for, let's say, your CRM system. Maybe they're looking to remove themselves from an event that they were put into, and this is something that you might not have thought to have programmed into the system. The fact that we can have the MCP server connected directly to that endpoint means that the user can have that request fulfilled. And so this is far more dynamic, and it sort of mimics a human team far more by giving it greater access. And then the last pro here, it's more scalable to manage. So obviously we don't have to have our dedicated list of API endpoints that we've programmed it to. If the endpoint changes in the future, we'd have to manually update that. Rather, the MCP server would just update itself automatically. So more scalable in that sense when you have that large list of API endpoints. So overall, the MCP is definitely a very promising way to build our agents heading into the future. Although there is a reason why I haven't used the MCP server in all of the builds previously in this video. And that is because there are still some cons that come with building on an MCP server. And so one of the big ones is a higher potential for errors. So obviously, as we start to rely on AI more for process automation and making these types of decisions, it does increase the likelihood of error. So for example, if we just pre-programmed a system to have access to 4 different endpoints, part of our CRM system, we can be pretty confident that it's not going to touch any other part of our CRM system. Although if we go ahead and connect it to 10, 15 different points of our CRM system, it obviously opens up the opportunity for the AI to get confused, not understand the right endpoint, and communicate to the wrong part of the CRM system. And so as these AI models get more intelligent and have the ability to make decisions better in the future, this is not going to be as big of an issue. And this leads to my next point, which is that it is highly prompt reliant. So obviously we don't have a set of conditions to determine our pathways. We are prompting it to do everything. We are instructing it, and that is the only way it is going to determine doing one thing over the other. And so that just means there is an even greater level of testing required in order to ensure that our system is not only conversating correctly, but it's actually executing on its tasks as well. Another issue is high latency with a greater amount of connections. So obviously, if we have hundreds of connections, if we have even tens of connections, the way that this system works is that it is going to be looking at all of the different opportunities that it can use when it's going to be running a function, which means our AI needs to process through all of that documentation and how to run these API calls before it chooses something to do. So obviously, this is quite intelligent. The fact that it's going to get all of that context as to what to do means that it's probably going to make the right decision, although that does introduce latency. But once again, this is something that is going to obviously improve far greater over time. As these AI models get better, the models are going to get quicker, they're going to get more intelligent, and we're going to be able to make those decisions probably pretty instant in the future. And then lastly, the MCP may not be the universal language. So the way that the Model Context Protocol works is that all of these applications, whether that's Vapi or Zapier, are all really basing how they are sending requests and talking to each other on a structure that was actually outlined by Anthropic. So the Model Context Protocol was created by Anthropic, which is the creator of the Claude AI models. They actually came up with this structure on connecting these apps. And so what that means is that some apps that might be competitive, like OpenAI, might decide not to use the MCP, and that could cause some friction, and you might not be able to talk to some apps that aren't using the MCP connection. But more recently, OpenAI did actually open up support for MCP, so I think it is becoming quite widely adopted, although this is just a concern to have. All right, so enough of the theory there about the MCP. I'm I'm going to be diving directly into the Zapier MCP server. How can we talk from our voice agents or other AI agents to an MCP server built on Zapier? So you can see here, this is still in beta. This is a brand new thing that they've released, and this is just a really cool way to easily set up a server. So connect your AI to any app with the Zapier MCP, the fastest way to let your AI assistant interact with thousands of apps with no complex API integrations required. So pretty beneficial right there. Go from AI chat to AI action. This MCP gives your AI assistant direct access to over 7,000 apps. So like I talked about, a lot of apps that we can talk to here, pretty powerful if we start to connect them all, 30,000 plus actions and no complex API integrations. So let's get started. Just go ahead and click the Get Started button and you're gonna load into the Zapier MCP dashboard. So this right here is Zapier's MCP dashboard. It's actually a completely separate screen to Zapier's traditional product. Like I said, this is a beta product. It's a completely separate system from what Zapier has built previously. If you're familiar with Zapier, if you've used it before, it's pretty much make.com, but this is a brand new sort of dashboard. And so what we're looking at right here is an MCP server that I built for a Vapi voice agent previously. I'm going to be rebuilding this MCP server and walking you through how it works. Although very simply, what we can see here is that I've created an MCP server and I've gone ahead and connected 3 different tools. I've connected the Google Calendar tool, which allows us to quick add events so we can book appointments on our tool. I've added a Google Sheets module, which creates a spreadsheet row so we can just request it to send information to a spreadsheet and it will do it. And I've also connected a Gmail module, which has access to sending an email. And if I just go ahead and click on the Add Tool button right here, you can see we can get access to those 7,000 apps just by searching for them right here. So there's plenty of apps you can connect into. Pretty much just click on it, connect your account, and you can access any of these apps. And that's pretty much it for connecting your apps. It's really, really simple to do that. You just log in, select what you want to talk to, and it's done. Click on the Connect button, and this right here is the only point that we need to use to connect to our MCP server. It is really easy to do. This server URL right here is pretty much going to be connected to our Vapi agent, and it's going to pretty much send its request right here, and this MCP server is going to figure out what to do with it. And then we've got this history tab up here as well, and this just shows you some of the tool usage history, so it's just a log of what's happened. And that is literally it. That's all that is included in this Zapier MCP setup. It's super basic. You connect your tools, you connect your AI to your MCP server, and it's done. There's literally nothing else you need to do. All right, so jumping into Vapi, I'm going to go ahead and connect our Zapier MCP server to Vapi, and we're going to be able to talk back and forth between these systems with a very simple setup. So I've gone ahead and created this particular AI agent right here. This is what I created and connected to our Zapier MCP server. So I'm just going to go ahead and rebuild this agent and walk you through it and exactly how it connects. So let's go to the top left, click Create an Assistant. We're going to start from a blank template. Once again, like I showcased at the voice agent tutorial. So this is the voice agent platform. I'm just going to go ahead and type MCP agent, create assistant. I'm going to land on creating a brand new agent. And so I'm just going to walk through building out a prompt that is specific to work with our Zapier MCP server. And then I'm going to run through connecting our MCP server to our agent as well. So just scrolling down a little bit, jumping into our system prompt, I'm going to go ahead and delete this blank template right there. And I'm just going to copy in the first part of our system prompt, which is going to be the role. So very basic. Your name is Emily. You're an AI digital receptionist for Blue Real Estate. This is just going to be a real estate example. Your role is to communicate with callers who inquire about our properties. So super basic, nothing really special going on there. Jumping into the task section, this is going to be the main chunk of the prompt, which is going to be handling exactly what we want the system to do more specifically. So your first task is to ask them for their name and inquiry. Once this is captured, please use the function to send the information into our spreadsheet. So this is the first bit of text, which is using our MCP server. And you'll see that I've just done this very, very naturally. I haven't said run the MCP function. I haven't said to run a spreadsheet function. I've just said send the information into our spreadsheet. And so this is one of the ways that we can talk to our MCP server, just very naturally, directly what we're looking to do, send the information into our spreadsheet. So one of the big differences here is that we're not going to prompt our tool call to actually understand that it can handle anything to do with our spreadsheet. So this system is just going to figure out that if somebody is looking to send information to a spreadsheet, the MCP tool is probably going to need to be called because that's what's needed to do any type of action. And then your second task is to answer any questions the caller has. Please use the information provided to answer these questions. Your third task is to help book appointments for those interested in our properties. Please then ask them which date and time works best for them. Once this is captured, please run the function to book the appointment. So once again, we're just saying, please run the function to book the appointment. Like at the top here, function to send information to our spreadsheet. We are referencing function. Obviously the MCP tool is still a individual function. So we wanted to help it out a little bit to trigger that, but we've just said book the appointment. We haven't said, talk to Google Calendar. We haven't said create an event. We've just said book the appointment. It's going to figure that out for us. Below this, we have, this is the current date and time, and we've added in the now variable. This just allows us and helps the appointment booking function to be a little bit more accurate. This now is a variable used within Vapi to get the current date and time. So if you're going to be doing appointment booking obviously just include that there. Below this, you have the ability to send an email to the caller. Please use this function to do so. So this is a more open-ended function call. This is not going to be done by any particular condition. It's pretty much if the user wants to send an email or want to talk to somebody at the office, we can essentially just use this function call to do that. At the moment, this is obviously more of a demonstration of the MCP server. I'm going to ask it to send an email and I'm going to get it to send that email. But hopefully you can see that there are many different ways that we can integrate this type of system. So jumping below this, I'm going to add in some context. So this is just a little bit of prompting to help our knowledge base section here. So this is just adding in a bit of ChatGPT generated information about this mock real estate agency. So Blue Real Estate is a dynamic real estate agency, blah, 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 just a bunch of marketing words chucked in there. That's obviously just going to be used as our knowledge base. And then below this, I have some property information. So our properties, more sort of knowledge base based information, which is just going to help our conversation just to demonstrate the purpose of the MCP server once again. And then lastly, for our notes section, please keep your answers short and concise, 2 to 3 sentences max. A little bit of prompting here just to make it a little bit easier to talk to. Now we're done prompting our agent. I'm going to jump into the top right, hit the publish button to save all of those settings. And now let's go ahead and connect our MCP server. So if we go ahead and jump to the top of our tool section right here, this is where we're going to be connecting our MCP server. So very similar. It's the exact same process as connecting our individual make automations and everything else. Hit the select tools button, go down to create a new tool, and we're going to land back where we were earlier in the video where we created these individual API requests. What we're going to do is go and click create a tool, and we're going to see in the integrations tab here, MCP. So there is a dedicated connection from Vapi to an MCP server that they've built out, which makes it super easy to do this connection. So just click on that tool and this is going to load right here, MCP tool. I am just going to rename this because I do have another one right here. So I'll just do an underscore and 2, very simply, shouldn't change anything. We're just adding some naming conventions there. Otherwise, this right here is going to be where we're going to add in the server URL, which comes from Zapier. And that's all we need to do, nothing else. We're not going to configure anything specifically for our functions. That defeats the purpose of it. We're just going to be sending a request to our MCP server and we're going to let it handle everything itself. So jumping back to Zapier, we're going to go ahead and create our brand new MCP server. Just click on the MCP server creation button, new MCP server, and we're going to hit select a client. Now, one thing you're going to notice is that there is a bunch of different clients in here. And if you actually scroll all the way to the bottom, you're going to see that Vapi and Zapier have created their own dedicated MCP server. So we are just going to click on this one. You actually don't have to use this. You can just use the other connection and talk to it directly, although this does just make it a little bit easier, a bit more smoother, just to use the MCP client that Vapi and Zapier have. I'm just going to name this the Vapi MCP server 2 and click create MCP server. Once we've done that, we're going to land on this page right here, which once again, like I ran through, it's super simple to integrate with. We can just click on add a tool and we can just start to add in all of the tools that we want to talk to. So in our case, we're going to use the Gmail module, the spreadsheet module, and the Google Calendar module. But obviously you can take this a lot further than this. This is sort of super basic demonstration of what it can do. But if we jump into adding a tool and clicking to Gmail, we're going to see here all of these different tools that we can use. So rather than just selecting some individual ones and having a very conditional system, scroll all the way to the top here, you'll see add all Gmail tools, add every available tool for Gmail. If I click on that, add all Gmail tools, this is going to give our system the ability to do whatever it wants when it comes to our inbox, our Gmail system. And that's super powerful. That is something that is going to save an insane amount of time when it comes to automating these systems and building these agents. The ability to give it access to all these tools is pretty amazing. So I'm going to leave these all on this MCP server just to see what happens and see if we can play around with all of these different tools. Next, I'm going to give it access to our spreadsheet. So Google Sheets, I'm going to jump into here as well. And we can also add all of the Google Sheets tools. So I've gone ahead and added all of the Google Sheets tools as well. So you can see this agent, pretty powerful with the amount of tools that I've now just given access to. It can do pretty much whatever it wants. In my Google Sheets, in my Gmail, it has full access to everything. And if you request it, you can get it to run anything you want. Now, obviously, this does still come with a little bit of configuration needed if you want it to be a bit more precise. So the way that this system would at the moment work is that it's going to be using AI for everything, which means that if we are looking to talk to one particular spreadsheet, it's going to probably ask us which spreadsheet that we want to talk to on the actual voice assistant. Now, this is likely not ideal. And so if we see the create a spreadsheet row section right here, AI has been set up to do everything. So it's going to select which drive it's using, the spreadsheet it's using, the time zone it's using, the worksheet. AI is going to do everything for us, which on a scalable system with particular different apps, that could be super helpful and you don't need to do it yourself. Although for the particular spreadsheet that we're going to be talking to, we want it to be obviously that we are building a conversational AI system. We don't want want the user to have to talk about which spreadsheet you want to talk to in order to get this to process. So I've gone ahead and created this spreadsheet right here on Google Sheets. This is just sort of a mock lead list capture system that we're going to connect into. So I've created a name and some inquiry details, titled it Blue Real Estate Leads. In the Zapier MCP particular module for creating a spreadsheet row, I've just connected our spreadsheet directly here. We can jump into the specific worksheet that we're using as well, which is sheet 1, and we can just let AI do the rest. So we can set everything that we've got here. Otherwise, we want it to talk to this particular spreadsheet. We don't want the user to have to talk back and forth about the spreadsheet that we're using. And then we can click add a tool, Google Calendar, and we can also add in all of these different things on our Google Calendar for deleting events, updating events, adding events, everything like that. We can give it full capability and access to. We'll add all of those tools as well. And there we go. It now has full access to Google Calendar, Google Sheets, Gmail. This is a pretty powerful sort of Google-led agent. And so you can imagine this would have taken forever to set up manually, and we've just uploaded it all ourselves. So to connect this to Vapi, just click connect at the top here, and you're going to land on this page. Because we selected Vapi as our essentially MCP connection point, the only really main difference is that we're going to get this different set of instructions as to how to connect it, which is a bit easier to follow along with. Otherwise, this MCP URL is actually just the same as the sort of other step from before. So let's go ahead and just click copy URL, take this Zapier MCP server, jump back to Vapi, and just paste it right here. So that is going to connect our assistant. Just paste it right there. That's all we need to do, and just hit save. And then obviously we do actually need to connect this to our agent. So just click on tools, jump into the tool section here, MCP tool 2 or whatever you just named it, add it in there, hit publish, and now our agent has just gotten far more capable. So let's go ahead and give this system a try. I'm going to start with sending an email, as that is probably one of the more basic things to do. So scrolling down, we obviously prompted it to be able to send an email, and I'm just going to chat with it using the Vapi chat function. So I'm just going to hit chat, and we're just going to see if we can just send a random email to somebody, and let's just see if it works. So hello, I would like to send an email to johnsmith@gmail.com. Please include the subject as hello John, and the message can be a random poem. So pretty basic message out there. I want to send an email to johnsmith@gmail.com. Hopefully that guy doesn't get too many emails. Please include the subject as hello John, and the message can be a random poem. So I'm just demonstrating the purpose of the system. This is not related to the real estate agent that we built out, just to see if this system can actually work. So great, I've drafted an email to John Smith with the subject hello John and included a random poem. If there's anything else you need, just let me know. So if we jump back to Zapier and our MCP server, it says actually drafted the email in this case. So it might have used actually a different module than what I intended. So it actually used the draft. It's actually gone ahead and created a draft. So right here, draft an email to John Smith. To John Smith, roses are red, violets are blue. This is a random poem just for you. Awesome. Subject, hello John. So it's actually decided to draft the email rather than send it. So that's an interesting thing. Maybe I liked that, maybe I don't like that. And that's just a big factor when it comes to our MCP server. Like I said earlier, one of the cons is that it is a very prompt reliant. We need to be very direct as to exactly what we want to do. Otherwise, it's going to potentially start to use some of these other modules that we didn't intend on. And just jumping into my email inbox, you can see here, this is the draft that it went and created. As you can see, johnsmith@gmail.com. Hello, John. Roses are red, violets are blue. This is a random poem just for you. So perfect. Did exactly what we were looking for. It's gone ahead and just drafted that email, and that's worked. Next, we're going to go ahead and send our information into our spreadsheet. So right here, we've got our name and our query details. Let's just see if we can trigger that as well. So hi, I am John Smith. I am interested in the 123 Main Street property. Please let someone know about my interest. So I've gone ahead and just said, hi, I'm John Smith. I'm interested in the 123 Main Street property. Please let someone know about my interest. And it just went ahead and decided that it was going to use our create a spreadsheet row module that we configured. And it went ahead and sent the exact bit of information that we wanted to that system, jump into that spreadsheet. We can see this here has populated perfectly. Obviously we can just format this, be a little bit nicer, and we can see their name and inquiry details have come through just by requesting that. And obviously this has just done that randomly. There is access to tens of different API calls that it could have used, and it was able to intelligently decide that based on that particular request, based on the MCP server that was configured, that this would be quite relevant for that. And then lastly, we're going to check out the Google Calendar system as well. So hi, I'd like to book an appointment. So I've gone ahead and just said, hi, I'd like to book an appointment for today at 3 p.m. My name is John Smith. It just went ahead and just ran a bunch of different tools, and it actually didn't work at all. So we can see here, we got an error back from trying to do that. And if I click into this error, we can see what the issue was. And if I click into the tool response, it tried to send off a request using our calendar ID, which it thought was Blue Real Estate Calendar, which was not right at all. That's not our calendar ID that would be used by Google Calendar. So we actually got that wrong. And in our tool response, obviously that wasn't going to work by doing that. So it did fail. So the big issue here is that what it should have done is actually ran one of the tools to get the calendar ID first, and then it would have been able to book into the calendar using these particular connections. And so we can either prompt it to do that first, or what we can do is just add our calendar ID into our prompt, or we can go into the Zapier MCP server and configure all of our Google Calendar connections to use that calendar ID. So there are a few different solutions there to make this a bit smoother, but it's good to have a look at this error and see what the reason was for this to understand how the MCP server is working in this case, some of the downsides, some of the upsides as well. So to mitigate this issue, I have just gone ahead and gone into our MCP server, clicked on the quick add event, and I just connected my calendar directly. So I didn't want the AI to decide which calendar to use. I just added in the direct calendar that I wanted to use. So to make this a bit more robust, you'd probably want to do that for all of these different connections. Went back to Vapi and told it to book an appointment for tomorrow at 3 p.m. You can see here that it's gone ahead and done that. So it's just worked perfectly. It just communicated with the right calendar when I wanted to book for, formatted it all properly. And we can see here that the time zone was correct, did everything it needed to. Appointment with John Smith. So it's used AI to create that title as well. And it's booked it on my calendar for tomorrow at 3 p.m. exactly as I expected it to. Potentially, I could also ask it to cancel the appointment as well. I haven't configured the event ID here for that, so I could just give it a try. Please cancel that event and see if this actually works. It might work, it might not work. Not quite sure. We'll see what happens in this case. Cancel the 3 p.m. appointment. It's going to using the delete event function as it should. We're going to see if it actually works. Okay, perfect. So that did actually work. I believe it would have just used the ID from the previous function call. That did actually delete itself off my calendar. And we can see from the results here as well that it did perfectly work, and it's told us that it's done so. So some benefits, some downsides, some things you need to work through, but ultimately this is definitely looking to be the future as to how to connect a very vast amount of tools through a system to make it far more capable as a whole. So that is it for my ultimate course on building AI agents. I hope this has been a helpful video to understand coming from scratch how to build these agents multiple different ways. So using Voiceflow to build chatbots, building Vapi to build voice agents, building systems standalone on n8n, building workflow tools on make.com, connecting into a Zapier MCP server to really look at a more scalable system that in the future could be more powerful. If you have any questions from this video, please drop a comment down below. That's going to help boost this video quite a lot. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, I spent a lot of time creating this video to make it super resourceful and helpful. And finally, if you are a business owner and you're looking to get some of these systems built out for your business, whether you have a specific system in mind that you want to get built, or you have absolutely no idea how AI could be implemented in your business, please feel free to reach out using the link in the description.